Chapter 1. Whose seed are you pregnant with? Miss Lu, due to your health reasons, we can't have an abortion for you. After receiving the examination list from the doctor that finally decided his fate, Lu Jia stumbled out of the hospital. She escaped all the way to the abandoned outdoor playground. Weeds, half of the old cruise ship was covered with moss. Lu Jia ran forward recklessly. Even if her shoes fell off, they didn't bother to pick them up. They stepped on the rubble, and the mud and blood instantly soiled their white feet. The oncoming sunlight seemed to swallow her whole body, but her world was dark. The footsteps chasing behind him are getting closer and closer. Lu Jia touched the wooden board and drilled into the interior of the cruise ship. She sat curled up into a ball and hugged herself, who was trembling. A white skirt covered her scarred and bruised thighs, and her eyes were covered with white silk. She is too thin, like a silk flower that will wither at any time. Where did the blind man run? A pair of young men and women ran in panting and looked around. Hua Ping hugged Feng Chao's arm, looked down at the mud on her high heels with disgust, and muttered dissatisfiedly, "What a broken place, it's so dirty. Who makes you look down on people?" Feng Chao frowned and looked around at the quiet and huge playground in front of him. A few seconds later, he smiled patiently and shouted, "Ji Aya, stop making trouble, come out, okay? I'll take you home. This is a good thing." That's Vane, the eldest son and grandson of the Bo family. You have his child, and we don't have to worry about eating and drinking for the rest of our lives. Be obedient and come out. Take care of your stomach. I promise I won't hit you again. Listening to this familiar voice, Lord Jia felt cold all over, cold in despair. At the age of 15, her family went bankrupt, and then a fire burned down the family to death. She went blind overnight. After that, she was fostered in the house of loyal servant Feng Zhengsheng for 5 years. Last year, Feng Zhen's only son, Feng Chao Shichong, returned. He took good care of her and often showed his love to her. Just when she thought it was the warmth after the robbery who wanted to agree to date, the wolf in sheep's clothing began to reveal its nature and kept asking her if she, the former Lady Qianjing, had hidden savings. After knowing that there was no, Feng Chao punched and kicked her, and even messed with her companion, Hua Ping, in front of her. The more they did, the more ridiculous they became. They borrowed usury to gamble. After losing money, they prepared to give her to the creditor to pay off the debt. In the colorful nightclub, the two of them saw the young master of the Bo consortium. They suddenly changed their minds and wanted to make a bigger one, so they couldn't help pushing her into Bo Wang's room. The room is full of aphrodisiac atmosphere. But who is Bo Wang? The young man of the Bo family, who was dismayed by everyone in Jiangbei City, and the king of hell had to take a detour when he saw him. He slept with her and asked the bodyguard to beat Feng Chao and Hua Ping, who blocked the door and asked for money, and Shishira left. In the end, it was naturally Lord Jia who bore all the anger. She was beaten by Feng Chao for nearly a month before she got out of bed. The sudden vomiting and late menstrual leave made Hua Ping and Feng Chao realize something and were ecstatic to take her to the hospital. Lord Jia knew what they wanted to think of, and she wanted to use the child in her belly to thug Bo Wang. She can only escape from the hands of these two devils now. If she can't escape today, she, a blind person, can't escape completely. The sound of shoes stepping on dead leaves spread to Lord Jia's particularly sensitive auditory system. This is not the footsteps of Feng Chao and Hua Ping. Did they also find help? She bit her hand and didn't dare to make a sound. The footsteps are approaching little by little. It seems to be a fatal countdown. Even the air is suffocating. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps stopped, and the cold woody fragrance rushed to the tip of the nose, and the feeling of tightness came all over the sky. Chapter 2. Don't touch me. This voice. It's him. The absurdity of that night suddenly returned to Lord Jia's mind. The closed room was oppressive, and the clothes were torn into pieces. He is like a beast lurking in the dark, hissing everything. In his heavy breathing, her world gradually collapsed and was crushed into ashes. Thinking of all this, Lord Jia's face turned pale. She turned around and wanted to run, but her wrist was clamped by a man. I don't know where Feng Chao and Hua Ping have gone. Lord Jia was forcibly dragged into an extra-engined RV. She fell on the leather seat and her arms were held left and right. The strange space made her very uncomfortable, and after a long time, no one made a sound again, which made her nervous and almost swallowed her in fear. She didn't even dare to show her aura, and cold sweat oozed from her forehead. Suddenly, one of her feet was caught. Don't touch me, Lord Jia couldn't help exclaiming in a low voice. SHH. Bo Wang sat opposite her, drooping his eyes and playing with the jade feet in his hand. His voice was gentle and magnetic, as if he were a lover's murmur. It was really pitiful. I was hurt to see it like this. The skin is as white as fat jade, and the toes are small and round, like a valuable work of art. It's a pity that the beauty was destroyed by sludge and blood stains. Lord Jia felt that her feet were roasted on the rolling oil, but she still couldn't break free. Wen Da, the housekeeper, stood outside the car door and looked inside silently. Bo Wang opened the medical box beside him with one hand and took out a medical cotton swab to wipe the blood on the girl's feet little by little. His movements were gentle, his eyes were deep and focused, and there was no trace of unnecessary emotion. on his handsome face, as if he only cared about the jade feet in the palm of his hand. But I heard that the young master of his family is not here to do good deeds. He cleared his throat and said to the pale-faced Luo Ziya, Miss Luo, you must be very clear about our intention. I just want to ask who is the father of the child in your belly. Hearing this, Luo Jia was so embarrassed that her ears turned red, her lips pressed tightly, and she didn't speak. The nightclub a month ago was her first night, and the person involved should know this more than anyone else. A month later, she was pregnant, but when asked such a question, she naturally felt that she had messed around after that night. However, it doesn't matter whether you mess around or not. Since they asked, their purpose must be. Sure enough, the next second, when Da said politely and indifferently that we will send Miss Luo to a private hospital under the name of the Bo family for recuperation. The child of the Bo family can't be born casually. The illegitimate child is a joke, so whether she is the seed of the Bo family or not, she can't be kept. In this case, did you ask if the previous sentence was deliberately humiliating her? Luo Jia tried to adjust her breathing, and it took a long time to speak hoarsely. Mr. Bo, the game a month ago was set up by Fan Chao and Hua Ping. It has nothing to do with me. I absolutely don't mean to cling to the money. Bo Wang still lowered his eyes to treat her wound, and his movements were as gentle as a rare treasure. He didn't move his eyebrows. I don't know if he had listened to it. I don't want this child either, but my body doesn't allow abortion. If you give me a way to live, I will leave. I will never go back to Country K in my life, and I won't let anyone know that the young master of the Bo family has an illegitimate child. She is almost begging. But as soon as he finished speaking, a sharp pain came from the center of the foot. Bo Wang pressed the cotton swab hard into her wound, and when he saw the blood oozing out, he slowly raised his eyes to look at her. Looking at her pale face in pain, his thin lips raised a cruel arc. So you are still innocent. Unfortunately, I don't believe that there is a fetus in the world that can't be killed. Chapter 3, just in time, I haven't seen a woman's internal organs. Luo Jia's big sweat flowed down the hair on the corner of his forehead. Bo Wang held her feet in one hand and stretched out the other hand. The bodyguard beside him immediately handed over a dagger, the kind that pulled out the scabbard. He sat there, put the cold blade on the instep of her foot, and slowly slid up all the way over her smooth calf, with a morbid excitement in his long and narrow eyes. It just so happens that I haven't seen a woman's internal organs yet. She should be more beautiful than a man. Is this to dissect her? Luo Jia couldn't help shaking. No, please. Even though she has been locked up at home for the past 5 years, she has heard the infamous reputation of Bo Wang. Bo Wang, 25 years old, the eldest son and grandson of the Bo family, the head of the K Country Consortium, has been highly expected since he was born. Unfortunately, when he was 5 years old, he had a car accident with his mother. His mother died on the spot and he disappeared. When the Bo family found him, he was already 20 years old and had become a casino thug. He was full of murderous spirit and acted cruelly and viciously. In the past 5 years of his return, he has become more and more serious. He has contracted all the black materials of the Bo family by himself. He has all the arrogance of the rich second generation, and even more so. He also has the cruelty that the rich second generation does not have. He teases female stars, abuses subordinates, and even dares to beat legislators into third-level cripples. When he is in a moment of interest, he drags on the road. Crashing and hitting people is common. All the piles are outrageous, and the powerful Bo family has to make a diagnosis certificate of mental illness to block the mouth of the leisurely people and save him from prison. She knew that he was a well-known perverted villain from a rich family, but she didn't expect him to be so perverted. She is the only one left in the Luo family. She can't just die like this. Luo Jia struggled, but her feet were held by Bo Wang and could not be taken back at all. She could only let the cold blade slide on her skin. All of a sudden, the dagger picked up her white skirt. Luo Jia even stopped breathing, and her face turned pale. Young master. A voice suddenly intervened, and the dagger stopped. When Da, the housekeeper, stood outside the door and put away his mobile phone. The old lady called and said, please don't mess around and get married to Miss Luo as soon as possible. The children of the Bo family must be born in the Bo family. Am I crazy or the old lady crazy, asking me to marry a woman who is calculating in my bed? Bo Wang sneered, I can cook clean by myself. Luo Aya, who was waiting to be cooked, hurriedly retracted her feet while Bo Wang was distracted. With this movement, the blindfolded white silk fell loosely. A white light flashed in front of me, causing a little sting. She was stunned and raised her eyes in disbelief. The world, which had always been empty and dark, had a layer of mist. In the white fog, the faint outline of the man slowly appeared. Her eyes. Can see. The man sat on his side, leaving only a vague side face like a peak. Luo Jia wanted to see it carefully, but she couldn't see it clearly. Outside the car door, the housekeeper Wen Da continued to convey the old lady's meaning. 3 days later will be an auspicious day. The old lady will handle your wedding, and there will be a proper ceremony. Dare to talk about it? Bo Wang turned the dagger in his hand and stared at the housekeeper with a smile. Come and talk to me. The housekeeper looked at the dagger, and his head was in a cold sweat. He only felt my neck is cold. Young master, you killed me today, and I have to spread this word. The old lady also said that if the young master does not agree, she will hang her in front of your door with the old man. Bo Wang's face is a little green. And this, the old lady said that if you see this, you will agree to the marriage. The housekeeper handed his mobile phone to Bo Wang and let him watch the video sent. Bo Wang lowered his eyes and glanced coldly, and the expression on his face gradually froze. Chapter 4. There is no groom's wedding. Lord Jia was still shocked to see the white light, and suddenly turned her head to look at her. His face is still covered in white fog, and his facial features can't be seen clearly. But Lord Jia could clearly feel that his sight was like a cold pool under the cliff, which was terribly deep. At a glance, she was about to drag her to pieces. She felt cold and couldn't help shrinking back, but her chin was clamped by a big palm, and her bones seemed to be crushed. It hurts so much. Okay, then I'll get married. The man's face suddenly approached her, and his voice was magnetic and gentle. Miss Luo, eat more and nourish your spirit, so that I can slowly, play in the future. After saying that, Bo Wang patted her face intimately and turned around to get out of the car. Vomiting under the high mental tension, a sense of nausea suddenly surged up. The bodyguard next to him quickly took out a car and handed it to the trash can. Lord Jia lowered her head and spit it all out, and the moment in front of her was particularly clear. She looked up and saw only the tall and strange back of the man in front of the car door, with long and thin cheeks. He was dressed in ink, put one hand in his trouser pocket, and walked loosely into the extremely strong light, and even the color of his coat became illusory. He was like stepping on the flowers on the other side of the land in hell, and even the sound of his footsteps showed a chill. 3 days later. The endless mountain and forest resort at a glance. Crossing the asphalt road in the forest, a super large top villa in the Italian pastoral style appeared in sight. The servants in 2 rows pushed open the door to welcome the guests of the wedding banquet. Lord Jia, dressed in a pure white embroidered wedding veil, slowly walked into the bright light under the gaze of a small number of guests. The top orchestra on the scene played romantic music twice, and finally returned to the dead silence. The guests at the scene looked at each other, and an old couple in elegant clothes stood next to the bride, and their faces were particularly ugly. At the wedding scene, there is only the bride, not the groom. Lord Jia's eyesight has recovered, but at this time she still played the role of a blind bride, pretending not to see the embarrassment of the scene, and stood there in a daze. The housekeeper rushed over and shook his head at the old couple, indicating that he had not found the young master. Ding Yujin was so angry that his head went dizzy when he heard this. Go, find a rope, and I'm going to hang in front of the door of my eldest grandson. The people next to him persuaded each other one after another. Lord Jia stood there, and in the afterglow, she saw a beautiful middle-aged woman in gentle and touching clothes walking towards Ding Yujin. The woman whispered, "Old lady, I'm used to fooling around. Don't be angry with yourself. Fortunately, the guests who came today are all their own people. They won't spread it out. Just take a formality. How to go if the groom doesn't come?" Ding Yujin was so angry. The beautiful woman squinted at the wooden bride Lord Jia standing in the center. Seeing that her eyes were unfocused and looking ahead, she smiled. Anyway, she can't see it. Just find someone to take the form. Old lady, aren't you nervous? As long as she doesn't make a fuss and hurt the child in her belly. The beautiful woman probably thought that she couldn't hear her voice, so she spoke very bluntly, but Lord Jia had already practiced a particularly keen sense of hearing in the past 5 years of blindness. That's too unfair to other girls. Ding Yujin frowned and looked at Lord Jia. Seeing her standing there straight, holding flowers in her hand, her eyebrows were beautiful and soft, obedient, and she didn't know anything. She couldn't bear it. The Law family was defeated many years ago. This is a daughter who has settled down. It is her blessing to marry into the Bo family. What kind of grievance can she do? The beautiful woman said again. Ding Yujin stood there and frowned again, and finally listened to the words. The Bo family casually found an extremely tall maid. Ring exchange, signature notarization, all kinds of ceremonies are not bad. Lord Jia silently took the stranger's arm, pretended to go through the whole form as if nothing had happened, and was finally sent into the new house. Chapter 5. Marriage can be maintained until the end of lactation. Young grandma, the young master has something to do and may not come back tonight. Please go to bed early. The maid's voice sounded outside the door. At the wedding, the groom deliberately did not attend and was replaced by others. The groom did not return on the night of the flower candle in the cave. This is a great shame for the bride. But there was no wave in Lord Jia's heart at all. Not to mention replacing her with a person, even if she uses a chicken with a head dog, she also has to get married. This is the only chance for her to be reborn. Locking the door, she looked up at the luxurious and gorgeous new house. There is no photo of Vane around, and there are no personal belongings. Even if there are roses on the big bed, the whole room is still unpopularly cold. It's funny that she and Bo Wang are already a legal husband and wife, but she doesn't even know whether he is round or flat, and there is only a vague outline. Taking off her wedding dress, Lord Jia put on her pajamas and sat on the bed, taking out a small copperware the size of a baby's fist from her pocket. The copperware is carved into the form of a puppy. The puppy sticks out its tongue, which is simple and cute. Her hand wearing a wedding ring gently rubbed the copperware, recalling the origin of the small copperware. In the past 3 days, she was placed in a nursing home by the Bo family. The room is guarded by the Bo family inside and outside, guarding like an iron barrel, and not even a fly can fly out. Wen Da, the housekeeper of the Bo family, stood in front of her indifferently with a lawyer. It seemed that Miss Luo was ready to become the young grandmother of the Bo family. Luo Jia thought it was ridiculous that they locked her up. It could be seen that she didn't run away, didn't ask for help, didn't shout, didn't look for an opportunity to call the police, and felt that she was greedy for vanity and was determined to swear money. Doesn't she want to? She did it when she saw the true face of Feng Chao. She asked for help everywhere and even tried her best to call the police. What was the result? In a few words, Feng Chao said that she was a poorly adaptable, rebellious, and unreasonable after falling to the bottom. In addition, the conditions for sealing the family are average. She is still taking care of the daughter of the old master, which sounds earth-shattering. Even if she has wounds on her body, she is regarded as a common bump of the blind. It's hard for her to fly around Feng Chao, not to mention the powerful Bo family. So she calmly asked back, "Can I escape?" The housekeeper was silent. This is a notarial certificate of prenuptial property, and this is a private agreement between Mr. Bo Wang and Miss Luo. As long as the child is Mr. Bo Wang, your marriage can be maintained until the end of the lactation period. The lawyer put 2 documents next to Luo Jia. There is also a braille version here. You can have a look. The content of the second one cannot be made public. It only says that you are married normally. That is to say, once the lactation is over, she has to get out of here and get nothing. The bigger the family, the clearer the calculation is. I am 15 years old and blind, and I have never learned braille, she said lightly. The lawyer read the terms to her on the spot. After reading, she sat still. The Bo family will be responsible for your reasonable living expenses. Don't ask for the price. She didn't move. Miss Luo, if it hadn't been for our old lady who liked the child in your belly and dared to put the fairy on our young master's head like you, the Bo family could find an accident to get rid of you in minutes. She still didn't move. If you insist on not getting married, the Bo family will not let an illegitimate child be born. You have to think about the consequences. Forced abortion is fatal to you. No matter how much the 2 of them threatened, she didn't even sign. The housekeeper's patience was exhausted, and his voice was also relaxed. Miss Luo, let's open the skylight and talk openly. I will get you a house in the city center at most, and think more is impossible. At this time, the children's playing sound came from under the window, as if they were fighting for a toy. She finally said that I want their toys. If you can buy them for me, I will sign them. What? Play? Toys? The housekeeper and the lawyer looked at her as if they were looking at a psychopath with a big hole in his brain. Chapter 6. Not to mention marriage, it's okay to exchange her life. The housekeeper bought her the toy. The tongue-spitting puppy, one of the 12 zodiac bronze tools, is the work of Master Yuqing. In those years, the sky-high price of works of art was directly photographed by her spoiled father and used a whole set for her to play with. The Luo family was defeated, the Luo family was gone, and everything was gone. Even this set of small copperware was scattered. For 3 days in the nursing home, she saw the child smashing the copperware downstairs every day. The bottom of the puppy was knocked out and worthless. Luo Jia sat on the wedding bed and touched the puppy copperware in her hand. This was the first time in 5 years that she had touched the old thing belonging to the Luo family. Not to mention marriage, it's okay to exchange her life. This for the past 5 years, she has never thought about the future or the future. She just wants to live like this, be the only widow of the Luo family, and breathe for her family. With the appearance of Feng Chao, she didn't even have the last extravagant hope. In this case, she has to change her way of life. Moreover, she has returned to the light, and she is going to be reborn from the ashes. She leaned her head tiredly and leaned against the head of the bed. She rubbed and rubbed it in a daze, and her eyelids gradually closed. Her own brother and cousin, the Luo family counted 6 bad boys to wait for our Xiaoti, a precious girl. Of course, she had to be raised like a little princess. Why did Xiaoti cry? Your 6th brother robbed you of the 12 zodiac signs again. Don't cry, big brother, go and beat him. Grandpa said that in the future, Xiaoqi has the final say in who will be in charge of the family. Xiaoqi will be the chairman. If Xiaoqi wants to be the chairman, everyone has to stand aside. Jiaya, I will love you very much. With brother Feng Chao here, I will never let you suffer a little in the future. Jia, you said that your Luo family had such a big career before, and other chibols in country K had to stand aside. What didn't you leave before the bankruptcy was declared? A phoenix with hair is not as good as a chicken. Do you still think you are the high-ranking Miss Luo Jiati? The Luo family is defeated. All the people are dead. All of them were burned to death. Damn blind man, you have been eating my family for the past 5 years, and now what's wrong with asking you to sleep with a man to make some money? If you don't have my shelter, you can only go out to be the cheapest pheasant with your stupid eyes. The dream is upside down, and the memory is staggered. The sky was full of fire, and countless sparks burst out, splashing on the steps and the tops of the trees. No, don't burn anymore. Escape, please all of you escape, Xiaoxi can't live alone. She rushed towards her like an explosion wrapped in a dark heat wave and rushed straight to her. Lord Jia was suddenly scalded and woke up from the nightmare, sweating coldly. When I opened my eyes, it was still a cold new house. It began to rain outside the window, and the sound of rain falling on the leaves and eaves was particularly clear in the night, disturbing the silence in the new room. Lord Jia lowered her eyes and held the puppy copperware in her hand tightly. A pair of beautiful eyes were red, and she had not fully woken up from the dream. She stared at the puppy in her hand, and her eyes gradually became firm. She will take back everything the Lu family has lost one day. The drizzle continued, and the night lingered. The large indoor swimming pool, the colorful light shines like a nightclub, which is dazzling. Young men and women soak in the water, drink and laugh, play hide and seek in the water, and the blindfolded woman catches someone and hugs and kisses, which is promiscuous and absurd. Chapter 7. One sister-in-law. The music was so loud that it exploded. Bo Wang sat on the sofa in the corner, his hand holding the wine glass casually on the armrest, and the valuable pointed shoes touched the ground from time to time. His whole body was plunged into darkness, and even his angular face was immersed in darkness. From a distance, his facial features can't be distinguished. Even so, he still exudes a cold breath that strangers should not approach. In the light that was clearly extinguished, a thin man walked towards him, with a black hat buttoned on his head. Brother Wang. Walking to Bo Wang's side, Li Minghuai bowed his head respectfully. Bo Wang was leaning on the sofa and pretending to sleep. Hearing the words, he slowly opened his eyes and looked at it. There was no emotion. Brother Wang, after carefully examining these two people, they are sure that their sister-in-law has not had sex with any man after that night, and the child in her belly must be yours. Li Minghuai handed out a stack of photos. Bo Wang threw away the wine glass and took the photo to take a look at it twice. Feng Chao and Hua Ping were beaten up, and their eyes and noses could not see anything good. In this case, it is impossible to tell the truth. TSK, it's getting darker and darker now. Bo Wang sighed, but his low voice did not have any sympathy. It's all learned from Brother Wang. Li Minghuai smiled. In addition, according to Feng Chao's explanation, the fairy dance did not have his sister-in-law's handwriting. The sister-in-law was innocent. Not only that, the sister-in-law was often beaten and humiliated by this pair of dog men and women. Brother Wang, how about I avenge my sister-in-law? Bo Wang finally recalled that something was wrong. He raised his eyes and glared at him, sister-in-law. Li Minghuai's heart tightened when he was looked at, and he only felt that his neck was like a hole had been opened, and there was a chill. Isn't this all married home? Brother Wang, your woman, of course, I have to call you sister-in-law. It's over. With Bo Wang and these year, he looked at Brother Wang's absurdity and tyrannical behavior day and night, but there was never a woman around him. He thought that even if this sister-in-law was a fairy, she was a little special. It seems that I guessed wrong. Is that so? Bo Wang looked at him and looked at his sister-in-law. I thought this tool for giving birth to you red envelopes. In the end, the voice became more and more chilly. This time, Li Minghuai felt that he was being pierced all over his body, and his legs held the sofa softly. Okay, he knows the status of Lord Jia in Bobang. He is a tall person, who do not needs to avenge her. Bo Wang threw away the photo and leaned back to close his eyes. Li Minghuai stood aside and watched. In his eyes, Bo Wang is a weirdo. He doesn't sleep at home. Every time he has to let people save a field, make a fuss, and quarrel to death, and then he finds a corner to sleep. Can you sleep like this? Isn't it good to go home and hold your sister-in-law to sleep? Not daring to disturb Bo Wang, Li Minghuai turned around and was about to leave. A woman in a bikini brushed past him and sat wet beside Bo Wang. Li Minghuai didn't even have time to stop. Bo Shao, why don't we go down and play together? The woman's soft and delicate body leaned on Bo Wang's body, and her fingers moved his shirt button seductively. Li Minghuai held his forehead and didn't pick the day to die. His shirt was wet, and Bo Wang, who was just a little sleepy, had to open his eyes and look at the woman beside him. His eyes were as dark as obsidian, and his long eyelashes drooped slightly. Looking at him so sadly, his eyes actually added a little sense of lust. The woman's bones are crisp when she is seen. How can this young man of the Bo family be so terrible as rumored in the outside world? Isn't it good? This look is too bone-boning. It's hard for her to squeeze into today's field. She must gain something. Thinking so, the woman smiled at Bo Waroro. Bo Shao, they all said that you were always alone. Why are you so melancholy? Guess why? Bo Wang asked back without any emotion. Why else? Because Brother Wang is willing to do it. Brother Wang is going to bed. You are bothering me. Li Minghuai shouted in his heart. Chapter 8. Bo Wang is a perverted state. But the woman thought that she was interested in herself, and suddenly regarded herself as a flower of interpretation. I heard that your mother died early, and you only returned to Bo's house 5 years ago. You must be very uncomfortable, right? It must be hard to live without a mother. If you want to talk to me, I'm willing to listen. Sister, which one of you dares to mention Brother Wang's mother? Li Minghui felt that there was no need to go up to stop him. Destroy it. He asked for it himself. Hearing the words, Bo Wang got up and changed the topic. It's boring to play hide and seek. How about playing gophers? Okay, but? It seems that there is no game console for playing gophers here. The woman looked around and was a little confused. How to play gopher without a game console? Come on. Bo Wang grabbed her wrist and pulled her to the edge of the pool. When everyone in the pool saw Bo Wang coming, they all stopped playing and floated inside to look at each other. Why did this master come here? However, the woman by the pool did not pay attention to everyone's strangeness. She only stared at Bo Wang. Bo Wang's face was too amazing. She was also a handsome man, but she would still breathe when she saw Bo Wang. Bo Sha. Ah, with a scream, the woman was kicked into the pool by Bo Wang. Bo Wang stood quietly by the pool, and his long figure was faintly projected aside. The woman came out of the water in a daze. Just as she was about to ask what was going on, she saw a long black whip in Bo Wang's hand. He just stood there and looked at her condescendingly. The woman suddenly understood the meaning of beating the gopher in Bo Wang's mouth. She was so scared that she turned her head to swim away, but the whip in Bo Wang's hand had already waved down. Ah, a terrible scream pierced the whole room. The whip was thrown on the water, and the woman ran away in embarrassment, but she was beaten so hard that she couldn't find her direction. The music stopped, and everyone was as quiet as death. Bo Wangfa slapped the water surface fiercely, and the woman screamed heartbreakingly, but he laughed happily and burst into tears. A tear slipped down my eyes. Li Minghui looked at it and smiled like a perverted Bo Wang, and his neck was even colder. It's not like Bo Wang is a perverted state. I don't know if the sister-in-law who has suffered all the time can carry such a husband. After waking up in the middle of the night, Lu Jia didn't fall asleep again. When the door was knocked, Lu Jia had already washed up, changed into a lotus-colored ankle-length skirt, and sat on the bed watching TV to absorb the current news. She turned off the TV. Grandma, why have you changed your clothes? The maid Jiang Fusheng opened the door and stared at it in disbelief with a pair of big round eyes. Lu Jia sat neatly on the edge of the bed, quiet, with beautiful and gentle eyebrows, and an indescribable beautiful sitting posture, just like a beautiful painting. Lu Jia smiled faintly. I'm just blind. It's not that I can't take care of my own life. After saying that, she raised her hand, revealing the red marks that she deliberately bumped, indicating that she had been hit a little in the process of self-care, which was in line with the state of blindness. She doesn't want to tell others that she has regained her eyesight. Only in this way can she see through people's hearts more easily, but she doesn't want anyone to watch when she wears clothes and washes in the future. Are you hurt? Jiang Fusheng was even more shocked. You have a baby, so you can't move around. Little wound, help me find a cane later, and I won't get hurt. The way of the road. Hearing this, Jiang Fusheng couldn't say anything more. He helped her go out to the restaurant. The pattern of the Bo family is ridiculously large, and the corridor looks like there is no end. From time to time, servants with strange faces pass by. Facing this poor blind girl who suddenly got pregnant and married into the Bo family, everyone's eyes couldn't help glazing at Lu Jia. There is curiosity, contempt, sneer and sympathy. Chapter 9. The interpersonal relationships of the Bo family are not simple. There are even more whispers. After seeing the gentleman, the old lady was also disappointed in the young master, and even married the blind man. The wedding was completed with a servant. The wedding night was spent alone. The young master didn't take her seriously at all. In the future, he had to suffer. Shall we go up to say you? The young master has always been ridiculous. Maybe the young grandmother will be replaced in a few days. What else should she ask? Still talking. Jiang Fusheng glared at those people fiercely, and then turned his head dryly to comfort Lu Jia. Young grandma, don't listen to their nonsense. You are the eldest granddaughter-in-law set by the old lady herself, and the good days are behind. When he turned his head, Jiang Fusheng was stunned again. He saw Lu Jia walking forward without being humble or arrogant. His eyebrows were calm, and his demeanor was not embarrassed to be hit by gossip. This young grandmother is really so calm. Like a moonlight, bright and elegant, cold and gentle. Lu Jia smiled slightly. Can you introduce the pattern of the Bo family? Being ridiculed like this, she still has the heart to ask about the pattern. Jiang Fusheng couldn't see through her and said that the old man suffered from Alzheimer's disease last year. The old lady thought that the main building was too noisy, so the two moved to a small foreign-style building in the east. Lu Jia listened and nodded. As for the main building, there are 6 floors in total. The first floor is the public area and guest room, the second floor is the place where the gentleman works, the third floor is the place where you and the young master live, the fourth floor is where Mrs. You, the second young master and the third lady live, the fifth floor is empty, and the sixth floor is where Mrs. Xia and the young master live. After thinking about it, Jiang Fusheng reminded again that if the eldest young grandmother usually wants to hang out, she can go to the back. There are various courts, archery fields, ski resorts, stages, theaters, botanical gardens, and the Valley of Beasts. This is a kind reminder to her that the Bo family's interpersonal relationships are complicated. If you want entertainment, don't walk around the main building. When she couldn't sleep in the middle of the night, she watched a lot of news about the Bo family. The Bo family has been prosperous for nearly 200 years. After Bo Wang's father, Bo Junrong, became the chairman of the consortium, the Bo family became even more prosperous. Shortly after the bankruptcy of the Lu family, the Bo family quickly became a giant of country K, controlling many important economic lifelines such as real estate, banking, transportation, oil and manufacturing. Bo Junrong is 50 years old this year. After the disappearance of his original wife and eldest son Bo Wang, he has never married again, but there are two well-known laces. Yu Yunfei, a once popular female star, gave birth to a son and a daughter for him and lived in the Bo family. Later, the secretary Xiao Meiqing also gave birth to a son for him and also lived in the Bo family. Bo Junrong announced that both of them were his family and confidants, but he did not marry. It is rumored that Yu Yunfei is more likely to become a regular because he gave birth to Bo Junrong's most proud son Bo Tang, who is currently studying abroad. However, Xiao Meiqing is only 32 years old this year. She is young and beautiful, and she can make Bo Junrong happy, and what will happen in the future is not clear. Just listening to these miscellaneous materials, Lu Jian knew that the interpersonal relationship of the Bo family was not simple. Coupled with a moody killing god Bo Wang, it is no exaggeration to say that the Bo family is a dragon pool tiger cave. However, with the recovery of his eyes, Lu Jia's long-lost fighting spirit also returned. She is not afraid. She knows how to go down this road. We have arrived at the Spring Festival Hall. Jiang Fusheng reminded in a low voice. The whole huge restaurant was elegantly decorated, and the guests attending the wedding banquet stayed overnight and were sitting in the dining room for a meal. Seeing Lord Jia appear, the whole restaurant was silent for a few seconds, and then the atmosphere of breakfast resumed, and no one looked at her more. A little boy in delicate and handsome clothes leaned against the wall and held a basketball. A pair of beautiful eyes stared at Lord Jia angrily, full of anger. Chapter 10. Sorry, I can't see it. It's shameless to force my eldest brother to marry you with a big belly. The boy gritted his teeth and smashed the basketball towards Lord Jia. Jiang Fusheng was shocked and wanted to pull Lord Jia, but she still walked forward calmly, looking ahead with her eyes without a god, and she kept walking. The basketball passed behind her. Unexpectedly, it didn't hit. The little boy was so angry that he gritted his teeth and rushed towards Lord Jia. He crossed his legs in front of her and stared at Jiang Fusheng demonstratively, asking her not to meddle. Jiang Fusheng's face was pale. He looked at Lord Jia worriedly, and reminded him in a low voice. Lord Jia walked forward inexplicably. The little boy raised his eyebrows proudly and was about to trip. I'm going to trip. Tripping you to death, you stinky blind man. Lord Jia raised and lowered her legs, and stepped on the small instep fiercely. The pig-killing screams spread throughout the restaurant in an instant, and everyone turned their heads. Why did you step on my son? The beautiful Xiao Meiqing dropped the chopsticks in her hand and rushed over. Lord Jia stepped on the little boy's feet for a while before pretending to react. She said sorry, I can't see. Pain, 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 pain. Bo Jun jumped in place with his feet in his arms. He couldn't stand firmly and fell to the ground. He screamed even more badly. Please ask Dr. Lu to have a look. Xia Meijing was distressed and angry. She stared at Lord Jia fiercely and hurriedly accompanied her precious son to the doctor. Everyone in the restaurant whispered. Jiang Fusheng held Lord Jia to sit down on the empty table beside him. A gentle female voice came. Jia, come and sit here. Lord Jia looked over blankly. It was Yu Yunfei, a 43-year-old former big star, and the one who proposed to the old lady yesterday to be a maid to walk for the groom. Yu Yunfei is sitting with several relatives for dinner, dressed as a famous wife. Lord Jia sat over, and Yu Yunfei looked at her kindly. Do you remember my voice? I'm your Aunt Yu. Hello, Aunt Yu. Lord Jia nodded obediently. Come on, have a shrimp dumpling. Strongly fragrant Yunfei picked up food for her, soft and authentic. Don't feel uncomfortable. It was not your fault just now. It was Xiao Zheng who was too naughty. The relatives on the table were all friends with Yu Yunfei. Hearing her say this, she said one after another, yes, I can see it clearly. Bo Zheng wanted to trip you up, but she didn't expect to be stepped on by you. What does Xiao Meiqing usually care about her son? I'm afraid she won't let you go so easily, Jia. Why don't you eat something quickly and hide back to your room? Xiao Meiqing doesn't even pay attention to the old lady when she is hot. Lord Jia listened silently and picked up her chopsticks to have breakfast. Yu Yunfei couldn't help frowning when he saw that she only knew how to eat. The new wife came here for the first time. When she heard that she was tripped and blamed, she was not wronged and angry at all. Can you still eat? After thinking about it, Yu Yunfei said again, don't be afraid of Jia. If Aunt Xia really dares to do nonsense, I won't ignore you. Well, thank you, Aunt Yu. Lord Jia nodded gratefully, picked up a piece of milk cake in the bowl and put it in her mouth. She chewed it until her mouth was full of fragrance. Then she told Jiang Fusheng that this was good. Please help me pick another piece. I'm afraid that Bo Wang didn't marry a piece of wood and enter the door, right? Yu Yunfei also wanted to pick Lu Jia and Xia Meijing again. A maid came over and whispered in her ear. Others can't hear it, but Lu Jia can hear it clearly. I found out that Sir's plane will return to China tonight. When he comes back, he will fly to Fengling district. He won't go home for a while. He lives at the Vienna International Hotel. The itinerary is confidential. Xia Meijing doesn't know. Hearing the news, Yu Yunfei was happy and said in a low voice to book a hotel room for me. She is going to meet Bo Zhongrou by chance. Chapter 11. Is it Bo Wang? Since Xia Meijing appeared, Bo Zhongrou's heart has been hooked away, and her relationship with her has become more and more plain, and she almost broke up. If she hadn't had a son and a daughter, I'm afraid she would have been kicked out of the family long ago. She had to find a way to save Bo Zhongrou's heart. Okay. The servant responded and took out his mobile phone to book tickets. Lu Jia drank a glass of milk quietly. Lu Jia, you can still eat. Come and see what Xiaoying has been trampled on by you. Xia Meijing killed back aggressively. After drinking the last sip of milk, Lu Jia stood up in a panic. I'm sorry, Aunt Xia, I didn't mean it, I really didn't mean it. She retreated indiscriminately, bumped into Yu Yunfei's servant, grabbed the servant's arm and shook it. The mobile phone fell from the maid's hand. Xia Meijing glanced at the screen of her mobile phone and was about to pull the road. Suddenly, she realized something and bent down to pick up the mobile phone. After looking at it for a few seconds, she looked at Yu Yunfei sharply. Well, why did you book a hotel? It was still in Fengling district. Yu Yunfei smiled gently. There is a concert over there. Zhongrou is coming back soon. Do you still want to go to the concert? Xia Meijing is suspicious. No, it's not that simple. Suddenly, Xia Meijing was not in the mood to investigate Lu Jia. She put down her mobile phone casually, turned her head and left. Yu Yunfei stared at Xia Meijing's back and was so angry that she vomited blood in her heart. She turned her head and looked at her servant complainingly. It's a waste that can't even hold a mobile phone. The servant's face was full of injustice. She didn't know that the blind young grandmother would suddenly bump into her. Lu Jia still stood beside him with a bewilderment face. It was not until Yu Yunfei left in a hurry that he slowly straightened his back. It scared me to death. Jiang Fusheng leaned against her side with a lingering heart. Young grandma, you are so lucky. Xia Meijing is usually domineering to death, and she is really targeted by her to peel off her skin. Lu Jia stretched out her hand and pinched her ears, and the corners of her mouth rose shallowly. Yes, I'm so lucky. The sun fell on Jiaobei City, which was not cold nor hot. The car was driving on the road, and the window of the car brushed the shadow of the trees along the way. I'm just going to visit the patient. You don't have to accompany me. Lu Jia sat in the back seat and said lightly. Jiang Fusheng is biting a red bean cake and speaking vaguely. No, young grandma, it's inconvenient for you to move. The old lady asked me to take care of you closely. Lu Jia couldn't say anything more. The old lady gave at least better than the others given by Bo Jiaqi. After all, the old lady cared about her stomach. In the 9 months before giving birth, I won't mess with her, but only nervous about her. The car is parked in front of a private hospital. Lu Jia was helped in by Jiang Fusheng, and the light from the dome shone down, shining on the ground particularly brightly. The two walked around the corner, and a cautious voice came from the door next to them. Mr. Bo, you need to control the force to use the whip, otherwise it is easy to hurt yourself. Hug, I'm sorry, I'm too verbose. I'll wrap and bandage you now. Lu Jia is now sensitive to the word Bo, and she can't help but look sideways when she hears the words. The door was half closed. A doctor was wearing a mask and sweating profusely stood there to bandage people. His hands trembled, and the bandaged one sat opposite him. From Lu Jia's perspective, I couldn't see the man's true face. I only saw him staggering his legs at will, his black trouser legs and trousers were iron straight, his outstretched hand joints were slender, and the tiger's mouth was blurred. The potion was almost drenched on the wound, but Lu Jia didn't even hear the man's suppressed breathing, and seemed to feel no pain at all. Is it Bo Wang? She took a step back and fixed her eyes. Chapter 12. I will never forget the great kindness and virtue of the two people. What's the matter? Big and young grandma. Jiang Fusheng turned around and pulled her. Forget it, he is not the only one surnamed Bo. Lu Jia withdrew her sight and continued to move forward. Ward 303 has arrived. Jiang Fusheng stopped in front of a ward with Lu Jia and stretched out his hand to knock on the door. Lu Jia had put her hand on the doorknob and pushed the door open directly. Jiang Fusheng's eyes widened. The young grandmother touched the doorknob very well. There were 2 beds in the ward with bright windows. A man and a woman were lying in bed with bandages, hanging their hands and feet, which was unbearable. A middle-aged man with white hair described standing haggardly by the window with an old suitcase in his hand. Bang! Seeing Lu Jia coming in, the middle-aged man's eyes turned red, his legs bent straight to the ground, his head fell heavily, and his whole body trembled uncontrollably. Jiang Fusheng was shocked. Is this such a big ceremony for the new year? Lu Jia let go of her hand, opened the stretchable blind stick in her hand, ignored the middle-aged man kneeling on the ground, and walked straight to the aisle in the middle of the 2 hospital beds. Lying on the hospital bed are the half-dead Feng Chao and Hua Ping. Feng Chao was beaten so hard that he couldn't find a piece of good meat on his face. His face was swollen, his scars were purple, his eyes were only 2 slit, and the corners of his mouth were still drooling. Looking at such a face, Lu Jia thought about what had happened this year, and only felt ironic and disgusting. She is really greedy for the gentleness of Feng Chao. She is a penniless and blind girl. She is carefully taken care of and opened up intimately. How can she not be moved? Even when he hit her for the first time, she was still thinking that it must be because of the pressure to take care of her. If she agreed to be his girlfriend, would he be happier? Until once, she heard Feng Chao and Hua Ping playing nonsense in her bed, laughing and saying how to solve this really nothing. She recognized the reality. Seeing Lu Jia staring at him, Feng Chao was shocked and afraid, squeezing his narrow eyes and staring at her. You. Lu Jia then looked away with her eyes and smiled faintly. Brother Feng Chao, isn't it surprising to see that I'm still alive? Blind man, how could Bo Wang let you go? Hua Ping lay on the hospital bed next door and shouted weakly. This is impossible. Bo Wang is a devil. How can she have nothing wrong? Didn't have an abortion. Lu Jia stood there, lengthening his cane and touching both sides of the air, knocking on the 2 patients accurately every time. The 2 patients convulsed in pain. After she pumped, he twitched, he pumped after she pumped. Jiang Fusheng saw that it hurt them. The 2 of them had no ability to resist at all, and only cursed in a low voice. Lu Jia, as if she didn't hear it at all, still knocked on both sides and said with a smile, "Thank you for this. Now I am already the eldest granddaughter-in-law of the Bo family." What? Feng Chao and Hua Ping were so shocked that their eyes almost fell out, and the next second, they were knocked and convulsed again. What are you excited about? Thanks to the help of you 2 today, as long as I live for 1 day, I will never forget your big grace, big virtue. After Lu Jia finished saying word by word, she waved her cane and hit Hua Ping's hanging leg. Oh, Hua Ping screamed weakly, rolled her eyes and fainted. Ah, I'm sorry. Lu Jia seemed to find that she had hurt someone and hurried to Feng Chao. Don't come here, don't come here. Chapter 13 Uncle Feng, I'm pregnant. Feng Chao stared at her leaning figure in horror, twisting like a caterpillar, trying to hide inside. Lu Jia walked to his hospital bed with no expression, touched the needle he was infusing, and poked left and right. Oh, Feng Chao's eyes turned white and he fainted. Jiang Fusheng looked at this series of divine operations with awe. The ward was completely quiet. Lu Jia stood up straight and slowly retracted her short cane. These 2 people were beaten by Bo Wang and there was only 1 breath left. There was really no room for her to play. Bang, bang, bang. The middle-aged man, who had never said a word, knelt on the ground and kowtowed several times, shouting in a trembling voice, "Miss, I'm sorry, sir and wife." Lu Jia turned her head and looked at Feng Zhen, looking at the silvery whiteness in his hair. For a long time, she walked towards Feng Zhen step by step, bent down to help Feng Zhen up, and her voice was calm and gentle. Uncle Feng, I didn't blame you. Without you, I would have died 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the Lu family died, leaving only her who suddenly went blind. The people around her could not avoid her, and only Feng Zhen always protected her. Feng Zhen was better to her than to his own son Feng Chao. He hired a nurse for her, and he also supplemented her nutrition without eating or drinking. It was not until Feng Chao took over the baton to take care of her that he went to other places to do things and wanted to make more money for her. At this time, Feng Chao did not give them the opportunity to contact them privately, and Feng Zhen did not know that she was being tortured. She also contacted Feng Zhen in the past 2 days. It's my fault. I didn't expect that Feng Chao would become a human-faced beast outside for several years. It's all my fault that you suffered so much. Feng Zhen refused to get up and kowtowed to her several times. You are the treasure in the hands of the husband and wife, golden branches and leaves, but I let you suffer this. Don't worry, I will definitely give you an explanation. Give an explanation to the spirit of the master and wife in heaven. How can you explain it to me? Kill them and then commit suicide. Lu Jia looked down at him and asked flatly. She knows Feng Zhen's loyal servant too well, and he can do it. In those years, my wife was in a coma after premature birth, and my wife gave birth to her in labor. It took a day and a night, and her body was exhausted. Feng Zhen said with tears in his eyes. Feng Chao caused trouble and hurt people at school. He had to pay a large sum of money for me. It was the husband who paid for me and personally disciplined Feng Chao for 2 years. What we owe you is still unclear. Now, he has done such a poor thing. Lu Jia's mother is a medical saint, and his father is a well-known figure in the business world. The 2 are tolerant and always think of them as family members. Hearing about her parents, Lu Jia's fingertips trembled and her eyes were gloomy. For a long time, she smiled bitterly, but Uncle Feng, I am no longer a golden branch and a jade leaf, 5 years ago. Feng Zhen cried even more. Every time I was beaten, Feng Chao took me to different hospitals. After a while, we would take back a copy of all the medical records to see if there was enough to send them to jail. The way of the road. This is her solution. Not enough, miss. Feng Zhen blamed himself and felt extremely painful. It was all the bastard son he raised that made her suffer so much. Is it enough? Let's leave it like this for now. Uncle Feng, I'm pregnant. Lord Jia reached out and touched her stomach. Feng Zhen raised his face and looked at her blankly. This means that the Luo family is about to usher in a new life, and it is a good thing to have one more person. Lord Jia looked at him with bitter and tough eyes. So I want to start over, but I have no foundation, and I always need someone to help me. At first, she also wanted to kill the child, but since the restoration of the light, she has a new luxury. How can this be a good thing? This child is humiliating. Feng Zhen has been trapped in regret, and then he realized that Lord Jia has been looking at him. He couldn't help but be shocked. Miss, your eyes. Chapter 14. Don't come here, don't come here. I can see it, Uncle Fa. Lord Jia smiled. Really? Feng Zhen cried with joy and knelt on the ground and held her arm. Great. Lord Jia nodded. Bang. There was a sound coming. The two turned their heads. Jiang Fusheng wanted to sneak out of the door, but made a noise. Seeing the two of them looking over, Jiang Fusheng's face turned pale and wanted to cry without tears. Young grandma, I didn't hear anything. What kind of evil is this? She is a salted fish with no dream. After graduation, in order to spend more time with her parents, she chose to work in a thin family like her parents. She lived in a mansion with a high salary and a hard work. Her parents didn't agree, saying that the interpersonal relationships of the big family were complicated, and no one was simple. Her simple brain was not long. She also sneered and felt that now was not ancient times. She would beat the servants to death and sell them at any time. She just needed to do her job well. But what did she hear now? The new young grandmother pretended to be blind, tossed the two patients to death, and said that she had no foundation. What is this for? Do you want to work in the Bo family? So she listened to the whole process. Isn't she going to be silenced? Hearing the words, Lord Jia walked towards her step by step, and her eyes were still a little dull. I wanted to hide it from you, but you followed me close to me every day, and I couldn't hide it from you if I wanted to do something. A sense of oppression came to my face. Jiang Fusheng whined against the door and howled like Feng Chao, don't come here, don't come here. I'll call, I can really call. Luo Ziya stopped in front of her, her skirt moving gently, and her expression was cold. Jiang Fusheng slumped and sat on the ground and fainted. One ward, 3 fainted in an instant. Lord Jia pressed her temple helplessly, which was really unfrightened. The water surface was sparkling, and a wisp of breeze brushed the half-open window, stirring the light gauze. Lord Jia sat on the carpet, gently pulled the silk sleeve in one hand, and picked up the tea with wooden tweezers in the other hand. The tea leaves that were pinched out were almost the same color, and the head and tail were curved and shaped. The kettle next to it was slowly hot, and the bubbles were the size of a crab eye. Jiang Fusheng sat opposite and wrote down the processes of Lord Jia making tea with a notebook in his arms. Young grandma, you look good at making tea. Jiang Fusheng couldn't help sighing. Lord Jia's hands are very white and beautiful in shape, but they are densely covered with cuts and abrasions. They have more scars than Aunt Wang, who works in the vegetable garden at home. At first glance, they don't look like the hands of a 20-year-old girl. But after looking at it for a long time, I felt that these traces were simply insignificant between her elegant hands and feet. The ayah of the road. Lord Jia glanced at her and didn't let her call her grandma again. Jiang Fusheng looked at her with his face, and Lord Jia in front of him was patient and calm. Just like in the hospital that day, she quietly explained everything to herself and solved all her doubts until she believed everything. She pretended to be blind not to play a conspiracy, let alone to collude in the Bo family, but did not want to add to right and wrong in vain. Therefore, even if she knew that she was just a maid at the wedding, she cooperated with all the forms. She just wants to take advantage of the rebirth of the Bo family, take back the old things of the Luo family one by one, and put them back to her hometown in the south of the Yangtze River one day. It's that simple. Luo, Ji, Aya. Jiang Fusheng called her name word by word. I checked it on the internet. Your Luo family used to be the head of the K country. The things at home are all valuable treasures. With your current financial resources, I'm afraid you can't even get a chopstick back. It's ridiculous to say the word financial resources. She married into the Bo family without a ponier, and the Bo family only covered her basic living expenses. Chapter 15. The vain past. You have to try to know whether it works or not. Lord Jia smiled faintly and began to wash the tea when the bubble in the kettle reached the fish's eye. It's too difficult to make money. Besides, what's the point of doing such a thing? Jiang Fusheng didn't understand. The Luo family has collapsed, and the people are gone. She wants to try her best to make money, or make a lot of money, and then find the whereabouts of the old objects, and then take them back one by one. This process is exhausting. Hearing the words, Lord Jia's eyes stagnated, and the boiling water rolled over her fingertips, which was very hot and painful. She didn't retract her hand and continued to wash the tea. Her voice was very calm because, People, I can't take it back. 23 people of the Luo family were buried in the fire that exploded. She couldn't even tell who the ashes were. The only things she can take back are those old objects that have even disappeared from the old temperature. Hearing this, Jiang Forsheng stared at her blankly and didn't know what to say for a long time to comfort the person in front of him. Lord Jia changed the topic very simply. Well, let's not talk about this, just talk to me about Bo Wang. Huh? Jiang Forsheng was a little confused. The young master hasn't come back since his marriage, and Lord Jia has never mentioned the young master. Why suddenly? You can tell me anything you know. Any little thing is helpful to me. The way of the road. That's right. They are both husband and wife, and we must understand each other to get along. Jiang Forsheng scratched his hair, bit his lip for a long time and said, do you know the lawyer group of our Bo's consortium? Lord Jia nodded. The Bo family is the consortium with the most lawyers in the country. It is said on the internet that the Bo family's lawyer group is the strongest on the surface. As long as the Bo family is happy, and passing by the door of the consortium will have to be imprisoned for 3 years. That's right, and our young master's private lawyer group is the number of lawyers of the consortium. Jiang Forsheng silently raised 2 fingers, twice. The Bo family raises so many lawyers because there are many things under the name of the consortium. The young master raises so many lawyers alone. The reason is very simple. Jiang Forsheng's expression was so sullen that he really didn't dare to say more, so he just let Lord Jia think about it himself. Aya on the road is silent. She thought of the scene where Bo Wai put a dagger on her skirt and wanted to cut her off. That's right, a violent person like him who didn't eat meat or drink would have gone in without raising so many lawyers. She thought about it and asked, is there anything else? Jiang Forsheng's eyes turned, as if he was thinking of something, and he glanced at the door. After confirming that there was no one, she lowered her voice and said mysteriously, several years ago, I overheard the housekeeper report to the gentleman that the young master lost his memory in a car accident at the age of 5 and was adopted by a butcher. Lord Jia listened carefully and poured out the tea, which was shallow. The butcher didn't treat him as a human at all. During the day, the young master has to help slaughter and clean, and at night. Do you know how the sheep in the slaughterhouse are slaughtered before they are slaughtered? You say. Lord Jia said as she put the tea bowl to her mouth. Tie the 2 front hooves and the back hooves, and then throw them there to wail. Jiang Forsheng said that at night, the butcher tied the young master up and threw him in the dog cage to sleep. During the day, he let him out to do things, eating some casually cooked rotten vegetables and water. When it was cold, he also slept in the freshly peeled sheepskin. Lord Jia suddenly couldn't drink anymore. This is child abuse. After several years, there was a fire in the slaughterhouse, which burned down the couple, and the young master escaped. As he said, Jiang Forsheng's voice became quieter. I listened to the housekeeper's tone, and the fire. Maybe it was the young master who released it. Chapter 16 Spade's Clubhouse. Lord Jian frowned. Do you also think it's terrible? The young master was in his 10s, and now he is even more unscrupulous. Jiang Forsheng said with emotion. Even if he did it, it's not his fault. Lord Jia said that it was not his fault for a child to do anything under such living conditions. Jiang Forsheng was about to drink tea. When he heard the words, he looked at her unexpectedly. Can you speak for the young master? I thought you didn't like the young master and just wanted to make ends meet. The young master didn't come back for a week after his marriage, and she didn't call or inquire about anyone, as if she didn't have the young master. It's just a matter of facts, she said. The confrontation with Bo Wao in the car that night really scared her, but because of these, she added personal emotions to say that the counterattack of a miserable teenager was terrible, and she couldn't say it. So you asked me about this in order to get a good relationship with the young master. Jiang Forsheng thought about it and said with a smile, yes, you are already husband and wife, and you have a baby. If you can love each other, you will be very beautiful. Think too much. It is impossible to love, and it is also difficult to have a good relationship. She just hopes that there will be no conflict. Her marriage with Bo Wang can last until the end of the lactation period, that is, there are less than 2 years left. She will use this time to get everything she wants. Lord Jia glanced at the person opposite and motioned her to drink tea. Jiang Forsheng then lowered his head to drink. After taking a sip, his eyes lit up. Wow, it's delicious. After saying that, she drank it all in one breath and couldn't wait to pour herself a glass. Lord Jia couldn't help laughing when she saw this. The tea was tasted slowly. But it's really delicious. Jiang Forsheng took a sip and tasted it carefully. There was a little astringency of tea, but it was very light, just right, and he also mentioned the sweetness. I am full of mellow fragrance now, and I feel that I am surrounded by birdsong and flowers. You are also exaggerating. Lord Jia smiled, then in the past few days, please learn how to make tea. Jiang Forsheng drank another cup and looked at her puzzledly. Why did I learn to make tea? Have you finished your studies? Can I help you get a good relationship with the young master, or can I help you make money to buy old things? She doesn't understand, really doesn't understand. Hearing the words, Lord Jia turned the tea bowl in her hand, like under the eyelashes of the wings, and the dark pupils moved slightly. Her husband hasn't come home for a week. Shouldn't the wife send something to show her concern? Oh, sure enough, you like the young master, do you like it, do you like it? At night, the downtown area is bright and green, and the neon light is scattered, reflecting different faces. Luxury cars shuttled past one by one and parked in front of the largest Spade clubhouse in Jiangbei City. The aperture along the way was spread into the gate of the clubhouse, and there was an oversized Spade billboard above the gate, and the light was strong. Luo Jia got off the car, picked up the mask on her face, and looked at the door of the lively clubhouse in silence. I inquired that the selection finals of King and Queen will be held in Spades tonight. Those rich women will come to support the people they like, which is very lively. Jiang Fusheng leaned over with a box of tea, but I don't understand why you have to choose today to deliver it. Although the young master often comes here, he is not here today. It's better not to be there. Bo Wao thought that she also had a share in the fairy dance that night. If she didn't like her, if he said it, she would smash the tea all over the ground, and her plan would fail. She wants to make money from Bo Wang's circle, but she should avoid Bo Wang. Let's go. Luo Jia didn't explain and went straight inside. She didn't plan to come, but Jiang Fusheng practiced for a few days, and the level of making tea was still a little worse, so she could only come together. Chapter 17 Use the vain circle to make money. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, she specially wore a red fake ponytail, and the makeup on her face also changed a little. The two walked inside, and the receptionist of the clubhouse handed them 2 yellow and white velvet flowers, the size of a palm, which were very exquisite. Luo Jia looked at Jiang Fusheng puzzledly. Jiang Fusheng smiled ambiguously. The voting flower of the finals, at that time, you will put flowers on him if you support the cowherd and the weaver. Cowherd and weaver. That's a good statement. Jiang Fusheng held the box and couldn't hold it, so Luo Jia put 2 velvet flowers in his pocket. Manager Huang. When Jiang Fusheng saw someone he knew, he immediately walked over with the box in his arms. Manager Huang, in a suit and leather shoes, turned his head and immediately greeted him with a smile. Isn't this a floating student who came to see Master Bo for the old lady again? Master Bo won't be here tonight. Huh. The young master is not here. Jiang Fusheng pretended to be surprised according to Lord Jiaya's teaching, and then said, my family asked me to bring some tea to the young master. What should I do if he is not here? As soon as the words fell, a voice came from the side, Xiao Fusheng. Luo Jia turned her head and saw a young man with an oily hair on the seat not far in front of him. He turned around and looked over. His eyebrows were ordinary, his hands were on the back of the sofa, and the famous watch he was wearing was very valuable. Master Ji Si. Jiang Fusheng nodded politely to him. This is one of the followers behind Bo Wang mentioned by Jiang Fusheng. Ji Jing, the 4th young master of the Ji family, is a rich 2nd generation who fools around all day long. Oh, it's also called young master. Your Bo family has a lot of rules. Just call me brother Jing. Ji Jingchong gave Jiang Fusheng a charming look. Why didn't you reply to your brother? I'm so sick of Acacia. Jiang Fusheng was sent out to find someone by the old lady several times, and Ji Jing insisted on adding her. The contact information, this kind of playboy flirts with cats and dogs all day long. And her mouth is not serious. If she takes it seriously, she will be stupid. Seeing that Jiang Fusheng didn't say anything, Ji Jing said again, come on, since brother Wang is not here, you can make a cup of tea for me. It just so happens that I have a little headache after drinking. Jiang Fusheng and Luo Jia looked at each other, and the two walked towards the card. I saw that many princes were sitting on the side of Ji Jing and chatting, and the dazzling light swayed. This is the tea cook in our family. Let her make tea for Master Ji Si. Jiang Fusheng introduced Luo Jia and then helped open the box. There is only a very small can of tea in it, and the rest are utensils for making tea. The tea bowl is covered with a bowl, and the body of the bowl is made of blue and white porcelain, which is beautiful and elegant. Luo Jia rolled up the sleeves of the light gauze and boiled the mountain spring water he brought. Why is your tea cook still wearing a mask? Take it off. Ji Jing leaned there and licked his lips, looking up and down at Luo Jia. His eyebrows were good, but his figure was a little thin. The person next to him joked that it had to be our brother Jing. In the circle, he was the only one who dared to flirt with brother Wang's family every day, which had nothing to do with brother Wang. Don't talk nonsense. Not waiting for the man to speak, Ji Jing frowned and interrupted. Bo Wang doesn't bother him. It's because he's playing, but he has a measure. He has always boasted of himself as a younger brother. This kind of boasting and good relationship will fall into the ears of this man, and he doesn't know how to die. When he said this, he suddenly lost the interest of taking off the mask of Lord Jia, and just stared at her making tea. Did you hear that brother Wao came up with a new game called Gopher a few days ago, which is very interesting? Someone said. Hit the gopher. Ji Jing raised his eyebrows. The man smiled strangely. Well, the girl who played the game had seen the psychiatric department twice. It's brother Wang's style. Ji Jing is not surprised. Hearing the words, the prince and his brothers laughed unspokenly. Luo Jia listened to the action and paused. Her slightly frowned eyebrows relaxed for a while before loosening. She picked up the root of the tea and put it in the covered bowl. The tea tasted the same size. She reached out to bring the water and fell down. A set of movements like flowing water. The water flowed down slowly, and the sound of the water was moving. The gauze sleeve rolled up to the elbow moved gently and was touched by the light smoke. The whole picture was particularly elegant and beautiful. The talking buddy couldn't help but be attracted and looked at her quietly. In the lid bowl, the tender green tea seemed to find the dancer on the stage, slowly unfolding in the water, and the aroma drifted out little by little, and even the smell of wine around it could not be covered. Ji Jing was just saying it casually, and he couldn't help stretching out his hand when he smelled it. Chapter 18. Can a man's waist be so goblin? Lord Jia presented it with a cup. Ji Jing used the lid to remove the thin heat and lowered his head to take a sip. The mellow and silky sweetness went straight into his throat, and the aroma was long and inextinguishable. He couldn't help looking at Lord Jia, typing monkey koi. Lord Jia nodded. It's kind of interesting. Ji Jing took 2 more sips. His grandmother's good tea, and he had also drunk a lot, but he never thought that tea was delicious. Seeing this, the prince next to him also wanted a cup one after another. Lord Jia obediently poured it for them one by one. The aroma spread farther and farther, and more people gathered here, but the teacup was limited, and he couldn't get a cup. Ji Jing shook the teacup in his hand and saw that the color of the tea inside was still bright green. He thought that it was worthy of the Bo family, and even the tea he got was better than that of other families. He couldn't help looking at the small can of tea and saw that there was still a card hanging on it. Return to the building. Fengjin, telephone, 186XXXXXXXX. Ji Jing glanced at the bodyguard who followed behind him and said, write down this tea house and buy some for my grandmother. The cards on the jar were swept by everyone many times, and Lu Jia completed today's task. She has learned how to make tea from her second aunt, who is good at tea ceremony since she was a child. She knows better than anyone how to choose and how to make tea. It's really hard to make money. But it's not difficult to make money from the rich by sticking to the vain circle. Jiang Fusheng looked at these people and marveled at the tea in their hands, and then he understood why Lu Jia wanted to rent a place to make a tea house. If these rich tycoons and rich women all go to take care of the house, wouldn't they be sent? Suddenly, Jiang Fusheng was excited and enthusiastically introduced how much better this tea was. Bang! With a salute, the finals of the Spade Club officially began. The strong light all rushed straight into the large catake into the customer area, and handsome and beautiful young men and women took the stage one after another. Girls' clothes are fancy, what? There are all styles, but boys are all white shirts and black trousers. The buttons of the shirt are buttoned twice, revealing a lot of scenery. The music is deafening. Lord Juya, who is particularly sensitive to hearing, is a great sin. She wanted to leave, but Jiang Fusheng was attracted by the handsome men on the stage and refused to leave. I watched it for a while. I just watched it for a while. He was so handsome. Lord Jia was so noisy that she felt sick. She touched her stomach and said, I'm going to the bathroom. I have to leave when I come back. Jiang Fusheng didn't care about her at all. Lord Jia had to leave first and asked a waiter, who pointed casually. Lord Jia walked forward into a corridor in the direction he pointed. Compared with the strange light outside, it was much quieter and more normal here. The whole corridor was quiet and there was no one. After walking for a while, Lord Jia still didn't see the bathroom, not even the sign of the bathroom. I went wrong. Lord Jia had to turn around and go back. There was a slight voice next to her, and she subconsciously turned her head. There is a crack in the door next to it, and a tall figure stands inside. The black trousers wrapped around the slender legs, and the waist of the trousers fell into an extremely shallow arc. The man was looking up to drink water, with one hand in his trouser pocket, his side face was sharp, his eyes were deep and his nose was straight, and the outline was like pouring his heart and soul into it. Sweat soaked his short hair, and none of the buttons of his white shirt on his body were buttoned. It was so open, revealing a texture with a strong visual impact. From top to bottom, the line went downstream elegantly, sliding from the narrow waist until it penetrated into the tightened black belt. A man's waist. Can it be so goblin? Lord Jia couldn't think of a more accurate adjective, but only felt amazing. This should be one of the cowherds in the cowherd and the weaver in Jiang Fusheng's mouth. Jiang Fusheng also shouted handsome at the people on the catwalk, and the body and appearance in front of him were the best. I'm afraid it's the final character tonight. Bo Wang drank all the glass of water and felt something. He suddenly turned his head and looked at it, and his eyes were sharp. Chapter 19. I'm afraid something big will happen tonight. The door is empty. Only a little light in the corridor is left. Bo Wang withdrew his gaze, put down the cup casually, sat down on the sofa beside him, and leaned back to rest with his eyes closed. Lord Jia stood outside the door and took out 2 velvet flowers from her pocket. She really can't stand the music on the catwalk, so she won't go to support it. She tore off the sticker at the bottom of the velvet flower and put the flower on the door. I hope you will be the first place tonight and become the king of the Spade Clubhouse. After pasting the 2 flowers, Lord Jia turned around and left, leaving the clubhouse. After waiting outside the door of the clubhouse for a long time, Jiang Fusheng came out unsatisfiedly. He was so handsome, so handsome, so handsome, so handsome. Hearing the words, Lu Jia couldn't help shaking her head. Those are nothing. She is now a person who has seen the world. It's really good to say what it is. Anyway, it's not as good as the young master's face. The young master is really handsome without any blind spots. No one can compare with the second young master or the young master. Jiang Fushan sighed, but with my 800 guts, I dare not shout handsome to the young master. Therefore, it is enough to look at the howling of these handsome men on the catwalk. Lu Jia heard Bo Wang's appearance for the first time. She and Bo Wang have not taken wedding photos, and the marriage certificate is not in her hand. It is estimated that the photos inside are composite. It sounds like Bo Wang is not ugly, which is a good thing. There is no need to worry too much about the appearance of the baby in her belly. She touched her still flat lower abdomen and forced herself to figure it out. Let's go, she said. The two left the clubhouse. In the silent space, the sound of water in the bathroom sounded. The water flowed through the textured body and fell to the ground. Out of the bathroom, Bo Wang casually tore off the wet bandage on his hand and looked at the bloody whip wound on it. He wiped it with paper casually, took off a black shirt and put it on, and went straight out. The light in the corridor was a hazy yellow. Bo Wang suddenly stopped his steps and slowly turned around. On the door, 2 velvet flowers bloomed quietly, beautiful and dazzling. Bo Wang stared, and his eyes suddenly darkened. The deafening music in the clubhouse suddenly stopped, and the lights no longer flashed, but jumped directly into white light. The world of paper drunken lamp fans was pressed the end button. Everyone on the cat shop stopped and looked around in astonishment. The people who were still immersed in excitement couldn't calm down for a moment. The female player waiting for Ji Jing was about to appear. Suddenly, he got angry and kicked the coffee table in front of him. What the hell? Li Shan, can you still do this business? After saying that, Li Shan, the boss of the Spade Club, hurried down the stairs in front of the left with a group of managers. All of them looked like mourning. Then a group of bodyguards poured in and blocked the entrance and exit in discretion. A few screams came, and the players who had been out of the stage were caught up on the catwalk again. Many of the people who came tonight were people with heads and faces. How could they stand this grievance? Many people blamed the boss one after another. Don't be noisy. Li Shan wants to die. The sound of low footsteps came from above, and everyone looked up. The black leather shoes stepped on the glass stairs, sinking step by step, and walked down step by step. The light fell on the man's lazy eyebrows and slid over the slightly loose neckline. He walked down slowly and swept the people below with no expression. He was playing with 2 velvet flowers in his hand, and the petals turned at his fingertips. Seeing this character, the whole audience suddenly fell into a dead silence. Ji Jing only felt a chill in the back of his neck. I'm afraid something big will happen tonight. Chapter 20. I'm angry at your place. What do you think? Bo Wang sat down on the single sofa pushed by several managers, staggered his leg arbitrarily, and continued to turn the flower in his hand. There was no expression on his handsome face. Ji Jing quietly pulled a manager to inquire, and his eyes almost fell off. Who is it? The dog is so bold that he dares to put the velvet flower that rewards the cowherd on Bo Wang's head. This is not a mockery of Bo Wang or Ray. To die. I don't want to kill people tonight. Manager Huang of the clubhouse rushed to Bo Wang with a large box of velvet flowers in his arms, his face full of cold sweat and his voice was trembling. Bo Shao, a total of 1,383 voting flowers were distributed today, and 1,028 have been collected now. The boss Li Shan carefully observed Bo Wang's expression, but the old man was expressionless. He just sat there and turned the flowers, and he couldn't see the joy or anger at all. Thin and less. Li Shan said tremblingly that there was an event today, and there were a lot of people coming. Many guests came to have a drink and left soon. The surveillance here was only at the gate. The Spade Clubhouse is one of the most luxurious clubhouses in Jiangbei. Many of the people who came were bigwigs. If he installed the surveillance camera everywhere, it would only cause trouble. Hearing the words, Bo Wang stopped moving, and a pair of dark eyes looked at him. His eyes fell on his constantly swinging legs, and suddenly hooked his lips and smiled. His deep voice is a little scattered. I'm just asking. I won't eat you. What are you shaking? It's okay if he doesn't open his mouth. As soon as he opens his mouth, Li Shan is so scared that his legs are weak and he kneels directly on the ground. It's my poor management that makes this kind of people who ate bear heart and leopard gall came in. You, please give me a little more time. I stared at the surveillance at the door and looked for them one by one, and I would definitely find out. Bo Wang listened, slowly lowered his body to him, and politely said, looking for them one by one. Is that too much trouble for you? Obviously, he said it with a smile, but every word that fell into Li Shan's ear was shivering. I don't dare to say trouble when I make Bo Shao angry in my place. Li Shan's face is whiter than paper. The thin lips stopped beside his head and smiled deeper. Yes, I was angry at your place. What do you think? You calm down. Li Shan trembled even more. Suddenly, he seemed to make a decision. He gritted his teeth, stood up and rushed up the stairs like a gust of wind. Bang! A loud noise. Li Shen jumped down the glass railing upstairs in front of everyone. The man smashed heavily on the floor lamp, pressed down countless fragments, fainted on the spot, and the blood gulgled out of himself. Everyone stared blankly, and everyone didn't dare to show their aura. Bo Wang glanced sideways, indifferent to the bone, and didn't even move his eyebrows. For a long time, he pinched the velvet flower and put it under his nose to block the bloody air. He said slowly and logically that it was just a small matter. Boss Li really didn't think of it. After saying that, he casually threw 2 velvet flowers over. The petals are soaked in blood, and the evil spirit is born suddenly. Li Shan was taken down for treatment by the bodyguard. The blood on the ground was immediately dried, and many managers couldn't stand. A good final ended with Li Shan's blood. No, it hasn't ended yet. The bodyguard and the manager set up a row of computers at the scene and began to adjust the monitoring to register the real names of the people at the scene to ensure that each velvet flower could correspond to the person. Ji Jing picked up a bottle of Louis XIV and walked towards Bo Wang. He poured half of the glass into the square wine glass and handed it to Bo Wang. He carefully offered it. Brother Wang, don't be angry with these wastes. Come on, have a drink. Chapter 21. The young master started to kill. These scumbags don't hide as well as you. Bo Wang looked at him with a smile. You didn't come out just now. Come out now. Forgive me. Ji Jing laughed dryly. If Li Shan hadn't jumped to extinguish the fire of Bo Wang, would he dare to show up? Does he think he has lived for a long time? Bo Wang didn't argue with him. He took the wine glass and took a sip, and then leaned on the sofa to wait for the result. Looking at the situation, if you can't catch that person today, you don't have to sleep. Time passed little by little, and the wine in the glass was at the bottom. Bo Wang half squinted and looked forward. Suddenly, he sat up straight from the sofa and looked at the screen not far away with his eyes. Who was that? Ji Jing followed and looked over. Xiao Fosheng, the little maid in your family, came to deliver tea to you today. I have to say that your tea is good, and your tea cook is better. If you are bumped into by my old man, you must want to dig in the corner. Tea cook, my family's? Bo Wang repeated in a low voice, and his eyes fell on a thin figure paused on the screen. The tied-up red ponytail outlines sharply, revealing the white and slender neck. The simple light-colored gauze skirt highlights the gentleness. The two styles are obviously a little incompetent. However, the mask that covers most of the face is also covered, and the eyebrows are low, and the surveillance is not clear. It's a little familiar. Bo Wang raised the corners of his mouth, his smile cooled down in an instant, and the velvet flower in his hand was squeezed into a ball fiercely. In the Xinshan Bo family, the servants walked through the corridor with a painting in their arms. Lord Jia was helped back to the room by Jiang Fosheng. Jiang Fosheng got a plate of fruit and was very excited. In this way, there should be business in Guiji building, right? I think those brothers are very interested. There will be a business, but if you want to earn repeat customers, you need to think of another way. The way of the road. In fact, her tea is not better than how good are those rich people who buy it. It is her who has introduced the taste of tea since elementary school that she can attract people. However, it is difficult for the staff of the tea house to learn this kind, which can be seen from Jiang Fosheng's few days of study without achieving anything. And she can't make tea every day in the name of the young grandmother of the Bo family. You must have a way. Jiang Fosheng is not worried about Lord Jia's ability to make money at all now. Lord Jia smiled faintly, took the signature and put an apple into her mouth. She was relatively relaxed and chatted casually. By the way, what happened to those paintings just now? The servants took it in and out. It's some paintings that have been taken for maintenance. Tibetan paintings. But there are not all famous paintings in it. The night outside the window is deep, and the elegant atmosphere of the mountains pours in through the slightly open window. How can the Bo family collect paintings from non-famous artists? Jiang Fosheng couldn't even think about it, and suddenly remembered something. Oh, you are talking about the painting painted by the young master when he was a child, right? Is it a painting of Bo Wang? I heard that when the young master was a child, his teacher's name was Mr. Chang. He learned painting at the age of 3 and frequently won awards at the age of 4, and his paintings were exhibited everywhere. Speaking of this, Jiang Fosheng felt a little emotional, but after the young master came back, he could no longer draw a picture. The old lady was very sad. I see. Lord Jia didn't ask any more questions. What else did Jiang Fosheng want to say? When a phone call came in, she picked it up and took a look. Ji Jing, the 4th young master of Xi, is here to flirt again. Jiang Fosheng didn't want to pick it up, but he was afraid that Ji Jing was interested in the tea and asked her about the tea house, so he picked it up. As a result, as soon as he heard it, the purple grapes in his mouth fell off. Lord Jia raised my eyes and glanced at her. Jiang Fosheng quickly hung up the phone and sat opposite her and gossiped. It was a shocking news. Just now, Master Ji Su said that the young master started killing in the Spade Clubhouse. Chapter 22. Treat the young master as. What's the big killing ring? Isn't Bo Wang not at the Spade Club today? Jiang Fosheng sat down and said, it turned out that I was wrong. The young master was in the Spade Club today, where he had a special room for him to rest. So what? Lord Jia ate a piece of peach, and the tender and juicy ginger also ate it. While eating, she didn't know which one didn't have long eyes. She regarded the young master as a cowherd and put 2 voting flowers on his door. The young master was furious on the spot. A pain in my lip. Lord Jia stabbed herself. She touched her lips and touched a drop of blood. Jiang Forsheng didn't pay attention to her strangeness and said, I don't know which dog did it. This person is absolutely dead. Lord Jia's body is slightly stiff. Is this very serious? It's just a misunderstanding. She didn't mean any insult when she pasted the 2 flowers. Of course it's serious. In order to calm the young master down, Boss Li of the club jumped directly from upstairs, covered in blood. Jiang Forsheng was sweating when he thought about it, and suddenly he seemed to think of something. He glanced at Lord Jia and stopped talking. Lord Jia saw through her at a glance. Didn't you tell me something? Jiang Forsheng's eyes turned straight, and he procrastinated for a long time before continuing. In fact, there is one more thing that I didn't tell you before, for fear that you will think too much after hearing it. After all, you and the young master are husband and wife. What's the matter? I just overheard it a few years ago. When the young master was a thug in Beigang, he was forced to be a cowherd. Jiang Forsheng said in a very low voice. I don't know how long he has been doing it, but I know that he must not be convinced. When, the housekeeper said that there was a sensational event in Beigang. At that time, the young master was sent into the rich woman's room by several old men. Later, all the people inside were carried out with holes, and the blood on the wall was wiped clean for 3 days. Lord Jia understood. This is no longer a matter of mistake, but a matter of her dancing on the disco with the shadow of thin delusions. Why didn't you react at all when you heard it? Jiang Forsheng was a little confused. Sometimes she really doubted whether Lord Jia had never been particularly emotional. Why was she so calm when she heard such a shocking secret? Reaction? Yes. Lord Jia sat there with her back straight and looked at her quietly, with a strange calm voice. Guess where our 2 flowers are now? Jiang Forsheng was stunned for a moment, and then he understood for a while. He was so scared that he sat on the ground. You are that timid? If another person also put 2 voting flowers on a certain door, then she is not, but the possibility is about 0. I misunderstood when I saw that he was wearing a white shirt like the people on the stage. Lord Jia said calmly, then pinched a grape and stuffed it into her mouth. The cool and sweet taste eased the sudden fever inside. Not enough. Lord Jia continued to put fruits into her mouth, cherries, apples, peaches, mangoes. Those who came did not refuse. A plate of tall fruits was soon empty. Jiang Forsheng looked at her blankly. Can pregnant women eat so much? It's okay. At least the pregnant woman herself is still alive and can eat alive, but not necessarily tomorrow. Lord Jia calmed down a little and asked for a long time if I told him the truth, explained the misunderstanding, and sincerely apologized to him. What do you think is the probability of Bo Wang forgiving me? Chapter 23. She decided to flirt with a big one. Jiang Forsheng collapsed on the ground and raised his hands with a bloodless face to compare a super large and super round duck egg. Lord Jia's long eyelashes tremble slightly, and there is no exception. There are biases and exceptions to the people you love, but you. Jiang Forsheng can't say any more. Lord Jia married into the Bo family because of pregnancy, which is a well-known thing. Husband and wife are husband and wife, but the young master has no love for her. Let me think about it. Lord Jian turned her eyes and floated. Please help me destroy the wig and the clothes first. At present, she can't be recognized. She has changed her makeup and basically lowered her head throughout the whole process. She should not be very recognizable. However, when Jiang Forsheng appeared in the Spade Club, he had to ask questions. With Jiang Forsheng's simple nature, he certainly couldn't stand it. He had to find a way to ease the matter before forcing the question. Let Bo Wang not take the step of forcing Jiang Forsheng to ask. Oh, good. Jiang Forsheng was already in a panic. Hearing the words, he quickly stood up and ran out. Lord Jia sat in place, silently raised her eyes to the light gauze raised by the wind, squeezed her lips, and tasted a touch of fishy sweetness on the tip of her tongue. There are bias and exceptions for the people you love. What about the people you love? Without eccentricity and exceptions, can you be a little tolerant? Without tolerance, at least you won't look at it with a hostile attitude. Before she could fully think about it, the door was suddenly pushed open. Jiang Forsheng looked at her with a bloodless face. It's not good. I heard the housekeeper downstairs saying that the young master was back. Lord Jia tightened her cuffs. The night of Shinshan is rich, and the flowers are full of fragrance. Wen Da rushed to the door with the servants. Just as he was about to open the door, the dark door had been pushed open. Bo Wang lowered his head and got off the car with no expression on his face. Young master. Wen Da wiped the sweat from walking fast. I have asked the kitchen to prepare a late-night snack. Do you have anything in particular that you want to eat? Bo Wang didn't even look at him and went straight in, stepped on the light to reconable ground, and walked to the stairs step by step. Wen Da was stunned. Is the young master going back to the wedding room? Bo Wang walked to the third floor without any stop, and the low footsteps sounded long. Lang, he slowly raised his eyes and looked at the target door. His eyes were gloomy, and his thin lips gradually evoked an evil and excited arc. There are often people who want to be beaten, but there are not often people who want to die. It should be very interesting tonight. As he walked, he pinched a cigarette between his lips, lowered his head to light it, and slowly spit out a puff of smoke. Then he walked casually to his wedding room. Before we could get close, a sound came from the half-open door. "Young grandma, I'm sorry. You asked me to bring the tea cook in the tea house to deliver tea to the young master, but I didn't do it," Jiang Forsheng said guiltily inside. Hearing the words, Bo Wang's eyes deepened. He did not go directly in, but turned around and leaned against the wall. "It's not your fault that he's not there." Lord Jia's gentle voice came. Bo Wang narrowed his eyes when he heard it, as if he heard someone's weak resistance in the chaotic bed that night. Ginger sounded in the door again. "There is a confused voice, but I don't understand. Obviously, it's the young grandmother who wants to send tea to the young master. Why do you have to say that it is from home? Even if the young master is not here, I can ask the manager of the clubhouse to help to convey your concern. He misunderstood me. My concern will only make him uncomfortable." Lord Jia's voice is soft and slow, not aggressive. "I just want him to drink some tea to relieve alcohol." Chapter 24. How can I make you not marry me? Young grandma, the whole family says that you are attached to it, but why do I think you seem to like the young master very much, or the kind who likes carefully? Bo Wang leaned against the wall and took a bite of the cigarette, his eyes full of sarcasm. It seems that his newlywed wife is planning how to gain a foothold in the Bo family. How can she live a long life in the Bo family without hooking up with him? She also likes .it's ridiculous enough. In the room, Lord Jia was silent for a few seconds before smiling faintly. "I don't know if I like him or not. In fact, I knew him a long time ago. Huh. When I was a student of painting when I was a child, I saw a painting called Chusheng on the internet. It depicted a duckling with a broken shell. I was attracted at that time. I thought that the person who painted this painting must be very powerful and interesting, so I asked my parents to learn from him." Lord Jia smiled and said. "As a result, they told me that this was painted by Bo's son, and he was just a child, so I quarreled again." "Stop talking." Bo Wang frowned and turned his face sideways. Jiang Forsheng seemed to ask for him. What was he making a fuss about? Lord Jia seemed to be embarrassed and paused before saying, "At that time, I was clamoring to marry him every day." Bo Wang was almost choked by the smoke. This way of hooking up is unique, not looking at the face, not looking at the family background, but looking at the painting. Bo Wang didn't have the patience to listen anymore. He turned around and went straight into the room. The two were sitting on the sofa. Jiang Forsheng was so scared that he jumped up and looked at the tall man at the door with surprise and fear. "The young master." Lord Jia seemed to be stunned when she heard the words. A trace of panic flashed through her face and she stood up from the sofa. "Get out." Bo Wang's voice was low and magnetic, and there were no ups and downs in his tone, which made people unable to tell whether to go out or get out. Jiang Forsheng didn't dare to stay and distinguish carefully, and rushed out directly. Bo Wang casually threw his door and then looked at his legitimate wife. Lord Jia stood there quietly, with her long hair hanging down and a few strands on her shoulders. Her face was beautiful and touching, and her expression was a little flustered. Only a pair of eyes were sluggish, and she looked in his direction without focus. She was wearing a newly married red short nightgown, and her neckline was tied into a V. Characters: the silky satin surface outlines the curve, the belt is tied out of the waist, and the skirt is up to the knee, revealing a pair of fair calves. She stepped on the carpet barefoot. Bo Wang stared at her for a long time, stretched out his hand and pulled the neckline to relieve the sudden dryness. "Come on, tell me, how did that painting make you not marry me?" His voice was clearly a little mocking and disbelief. Lord Jia frowned, a trace of shame of being overheard on her face, and her ears were slightly red. She pinched her fingers and said for a while, just thinking that the painting was very interesting. "Haven't you ever seen a duck lay eggs?" Bo Wang sneered, lowered his eyes, and his eyes swept over the fruit knife in the fruit plate on the coffee table. No. Lord Jia shook her head. In the painting, the first thing the duckling saw in the shell was the sunrise by the sea, and what she heard was the sound of an egg cracking in the corner. She said slowly. Bo Wang stared at her uncolourful eyes, bent down to extinguish the cigarette in the ashtray, picked up the fruit knife, and then walked slowly towards her step by step. Lord Jia seemed to stand there without knowing it, still talking about the painting. There was also a small crab tongue emerging from the sand on the beach in the distance. It should be a small crab. Bo Wang hooked his lips and stood in front of her. After listening for a while, he suddenly raised the fruit knife in his hand and stabbed into her eyes. Chapter 25. Lord Jia is so flirtatious. The cold light flashed. A gust of wind escaped from the window that had never been closed, blowing their clothes. Lord Jia's long hair was blown up, and a few strands of it brushed her fair face. She shook her eyes, was cut off by a sharp blade, and fell lightly. The sharp tip of the blade stopped in front of the beautiful brown pupil. Lord Jia stood still. Her lips even with a smile of immersion in memories. The whole painting is the core of the duckling, but in fact, the picture is full of newborns, even the morning sun, so I think it's very interesting. The faint smile froze on the lips. What a blind man. She is not the person in the Spade clubhouse. Lord Jia calmly looked at the front and blinked her eyes, as if she had just reacted. Have you stood in front of me? Bo Wang threw the fruit knife. The crisp sound of the sharp blade on the ground made Lord Jia shrug her shoulders, as if she was afraid. She looked a little flustered. What are you throwing? As soon as he finished speaking, Bo Wang suddenly reached out and pinched her jaw, and half of his palm pressed hard on the side of her neck. Lord Jia felt suffocation, that she was about to be strangled to death, and her breathing stopped. The night style coming in from the window is thin and cool. Her body couldn't help tightening. The man in front of him was no longer cruel. He changed from pinching to pinching, and used his thumb on her. He stroked her chin intimately twice and stroked her lips again. Her low voice showed strange tenderness in the night breeze. Did you fall in love with me with a painting? Up to now, Lord Jia really understands that the most terrible thing about Bo Wang is not what evil things he has done, but his joy and anger, which makes it impossible for people to judge his mood at the moment. I don't know whether the next second will be safe or on fire. She pursed her lips and squeezed hard. A few seconds later, she seemed to make up her mind and summoned up her courage and said, yes, I like it. I like you who painted that picture. Bo Wang stared at her and was stopped by her sudden and firm confession. Immediately, he smiled again, and his well-kneeved hand slowly wandered on her face, and finally stopped in the corner of her eyes. His voice was still gentle. Do you deserve it? A blind man dares to seduce him. I know I don't deserve it. Lord Jia lowered her eyes slightly and said humbly, I know you don't believe that it's not the fairy dance I designed. I also know that you are a high-ranking thin son, and I'm just a disabled person. I have self-awareness. Believe it or not, it's true that I said I didn't want this child either. If I couldn't have an abortion, I really didn't want to cause you any trouble. She was talking in front of him, her voice getting lower and lower, and she trembled more and more, perfectly interpreting the grievances and the last bit of self-esteem that should have when facing the ridicule of the person in love. I like you, want to get close to you, want to care about you, and want to know what kind of person you are, but I don't have any thoughts about you. When the time of the agreement comes, I will leave immediately and never entangle you. It's really pitiful to say, but why don't I believe it so much? Bo Wang touched her face. Before she finished speaking, she blinked her eyes quickly and tried her best to control her emotions, but her crow feathers were still wet, and tears were clearly hidden in her eyes. People are still very refused to shed tears, and their teeth bite their lips. Are you serious? Bo Wang lost his smile and stared at her with a very deep look. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed the back of her neck, took her directly into his arms, lowered his head and kissed her lips, pressing hard. Chapter 26. What if I let you die? The moonlight lifted the light gauze, and her long hair mistakenly covered the back of his strong hand. Lord Jia didn't have any resistance, but her long eyelashes trembled, and her cheeks were gradually dyed with light pink, revealing her current chaos. The thin and dark eyes locked all her subtle expressions, pried open her lips, held a touch of softness hostage, and invaded wantonly. She was stunned, then raised her face and greedily grabbed his lips and tongue. She really dares. Bo Wang grabbed the back of her neck and pulled her back. His eyes fell on her red lips, and suddenly the dryness came back to her throat. He forcibly suppressed the emotion of wanting to be more crazy, and only pressed against her lips. Do you really like me so much? If you don't believe it, no matter how many times I say it. What if I let you die? He interrupted her with a low voice, without joy or anger. The sound of the wind suddenly fell silent. The window screen quietly returned to its original position without any movement. Even if Lord Jia thought about his possible reaction many times in her mind, she was still stunned when she heard this sentence. What? Oh, Bo Wang looked down at her reaction, smiled sarcastically, let go of her confinement, turned around and walked out. Nothing more to say. Lord Jia looked at his back with some surprise. What did he say? For a while, Jiang Fosha sneaked in from the outside, closed the door, and ran towards her. The young master went to the study. He probably won't come over for a while. How about it? Have you passed the test? Hearing the words, Lord Jia let go of the hands that had been clenched on her side. Both hands are already bloody, and the lines of the palms can't be seen clearly, and the blood covers the small blade. You, what are you doing? Jiang Fosha looked at her in a daze. Now I have regained my eyesight. When I see a fruit knife stabbing me, I will definitely have a subconscious dodge reaction. I can only do this. Force yourself not to dodge with severe pain. Lord Jia stepped aside, pulled out the tissue, and then put the two broken small eyebrow blades in her hand, wrapped them up and handed them to Jiang Fosha for disposal. Fruit knife? Jiang Fosha reacted in a damp. The young master stabbed you with a knife. Wait, you asked me to put the fruit knife in the room, and you deliberately asked the young master to stab you. Why? Jiang Fosha couldn't believe it. Lord Jia cleaned up the blood on her hands and watched the lighter blood sink into the bottom of the sink. Just now, Jiang Fosha said that Bo Wang suddenly came back, and she felt strange. Today, there were a lot of guests coming in and out of all the activities of the Spades Club, and only the door was monitored. The waiter who pointed the wrong way was so busy that he didn't see her going to the corridor at all. Therefore, it will be impossible to find out on her and Jiang Fusheng's head for a while. Later, she realized that if Jiang Fusheng had taken an ordinary tea master, Bo Wang would not have rushed back. Jiang Fusheng is not the first day at Bo's house. He knows the rules and will explain all kinds of taboos when he takes people there. If she is an ordinary tea cook, Bo Wang will not doubt it at all. That's the problem with her. Bo Wang may have recognized her from the surveillance. She confidently disguised herself to pass the test, that is, she recognized her figure. She had a grudge with him. In his eyes, if she had been pretending to be blind, it would be more reasonable for her to insult him with 2 flowers. Bo Wang killed back to confirm these. She didn't want to follow his rhythm, so she first made a set of hints. The fruit knife was a hint, and Bo Wang did use it to test her as she expected. Chapter 27. How do you know that I will stay tonight? What you mention and what you like are all forced to shift the core focus. Even if she is wrong, Bo Wang has found out that the tea cook is her, and the flour is pasted by her. Then she will also say that the flour is her love for him, which is by no means an insult, so that he can calm down and not take hysterical revenge on her. But at present, it seems that Bo Wang believed that the tea cook was not her, so he did not try Jiang Fusheng again. After listening to her explanation, Jiang Fushengji was so impressed that I threw myself to the ground. While rubbing the medicine on her hand, she said, "How can you think of so much in such a short time? It's awesome. This matter is not over yet. You should inform Uncle Fu to make 2 velvet flowers as soon as possible to deal with the check of the clubhouse. I hope this matter will eventually become oolong." This is the best result she can think of so far. "Okay, I got it." Jiang Fusheng looked at the scary wound on her hand. "You were too cruel to yourself. It's nothing. It's better for her to do it to herself than to do it to her. Naju Aya." Jiang Fusheng looked at her with some gossip. "Did you really like the young master when you were a child?" "No, it's all made up." Lord Jia answered very concisely. Jiang Fusheng opened his mouth in shock. "Then your acting is too similar. I thought you really had a crush on the young master." Lord Jia smiled and couldn't help but feel a little distracted when he thought of Bo Wang's appearance just now. How could someone let the other party die after hearing the confession? What kind of person is he? The door of the study was closed, the light was dim, and a figure was sitting in front of the desk. Bo Wang put one hand on his head and looked at the painting on the table with an expressionless face. The touch of the brush looked particularly tender. There were many elements on the painting. Every part was exactly the same as what Lord Jia said, even the crab claws in the sand. "Don't look at the face, don't look at the family background, don't look at the painting." Knock. There was a knock on the door. Bo Wang's eyes looked particularly cold in the dark room. He reached out and turned the painting on the table back and came in. The housekeeper Wen Da came in from outside and bowed his head respectfully. "Young master, the old lady asked you to rest at home tonight and take your young grandmother to have breakfast with her tomorrow morning." Bo Wang doesn't care. "What if I don't?" Wen Da is used to such words, and his fat face is still respectful. "Then I'm going to go for the old man and the old lady. Prepare 2 ropes to hang at your door. Do you want to change the room for the young grandmother so as not to scare her?" Hearing this, Bo Wang raised his eyes and looked at him quietly. "Then you told the old lady to stretch out his tongue when hanging, which directly scared the woman to walk with her." Wen Da buried his head lower. "What are you still doing standing up?" Bo Wang glared at him coldly. "Wait for me to ask you to get out. I'm leaving now." Wen Da hurried out. The young master didn't walk in front of him and was ready to stay at home. Then he was finally able to reply to the old lady. When Bo Wang entered the room, Lord Jia was sitting on the sofa and stirring a bowl of rock sugar bird's nest, which was Jiang Fusheng stewed to replenish her body. She didn't move properly. The spoon always accidentally touched the wound through the gauze in the palm of her hand, which was a little painful. She frowned and changed her posture to hold the spoon. "Who?" She pretended not to hear the footsteps and sat up straight. Bo Wang saw her hands wrapped in gauze at a glance, and there was a faint blood color. Then he saw that there was clearly blood on the fruit knife beside her, and suddenly realized that she was injured by picking up the fruit knife. "Is there something wrong with your brain? This can also hurt." Lord Jia turned her head in the direction of him and asked with a slight smile, "I asked Fusheng to stew rock sugar bird's nest for you. It's still hot. Do you want to drink it? How do you know that I will stay tonight?" Chapter 28. As long as you are not afraid of the intestines flow the next day. "How do you know that I will stay tonight?" Bo Wang's eyes were cold. How dare she inquire about his whereabouts? "I don't know." Lord Jia shook his head with an honest face. So, whether he stayed or not, she would prepare the bird's nest. The woman. Bo Wang glanced at the bowl in her hand, ignored her, and walked straight to the direction of the bathroom. As she walked, she unbuttoned the button and took off her shirt without anyone else. Lord Jia sat on the sofa in a daze and suddenly saw the beauty in front of her. The curve of the man's arm is slightly bulging, and the line of the vital back muscles is too smooth and eye-catching, with some staggered old scars, but it does not affect the impact brought by the narrow waist, especially under the warm yellow light, adding an ambiguous breath. Although Lu Jia doesn't like Bo Wang, it's hard to be unmoved by his lust. After walking a few steps, Bo Wang suddenly looked back at her, and his dark eyes looked straight at her, as if he was going to see through her. How did he feel that she was looking at him behind his back? Lu Jia sat there with the usual expression, with a pair of dull eyes and no focal length. Bo Wang looked at her for a while before lifting his legs and walking into the bathroom. It was probably expected that she, a blind person, couldn't see anything. This person didn't even close the door. The sound of water came quickly, which made Lu Jia's ears feel a little hot inexplicably. Calm down, Lu Jia, the color character is not a good thing. Lu Jia thought secretly in her heart, but she still couldn't get the picture just now out of her mind. Forget it, eat 2 mouthfuls of bird's nest to suppress the shock. Bo Wang took a quick shower. When he came out, he only put on a pair of grey home pants. The waist of the trousers was loose, his short hair was messy and wet, and his body was covered with water vapor. Lu Jia saw it all again, and her whole body was numb. The wound on her palm of her hand was very deep, and it hurt so much when she picked up the bowl. She subconsciously clamped the bowl with one arm and found that it was more tiring. When she was about to put it back, Bo Wang came out. In Bo Wang's eyes, she held the bowl firmly in her arms, afraid that the bird's nest would be cold, and he would not be able to eat a mouthful of hot food. Bo Wang looked at her with his eyes down and smiled. You didn't think I would eat it when it was hot, did you? Huh. Lu Jia was a little confused. This waste. The water vapor has not been wiped dry, which is a sin. Take your mind. You can't figure anything out with me. Bo Wang was also tired today. He didn't bother to waste any more thoughts on the little blind man, so he turned around and walked towards the wedding bed. He leaned against the head of the bed and played with his mobile phone, without covering the quilt or wearing clothes. Lu Jia silently put the bowl back, and then remembered a question with Heinz. He is going to stay tonight and occupies the bed. So where does she sleep? Thinking about her personality, she asked softly and expectantly, if you stay at home tonight, shall I make the bed for you? Which side are you used to sleeping on? Is it close to the door or far away? Bo Wang stroked his hand on the screen of his mobile phone and turned his eyes to look at her deeply. Do you want to sleep in the same bed with me? Is it okay? She asked cautiously. It's okay, he said carelessly, as long as you are not afraid of the next day. Lu Jia's expression was stiff, and then she smiled and said, I can sleep on the sofa at night. You go to bed early. After saying that, she groped to lie down on the sofa and took a pillow in her arms. She didn't feel sleepy for a moment. Chapter 29. The first time in the same room after marriage. The old man and the old lady lived on the side of the small foreign-style building. In the main building, Mrs. Yu and Mrs. Xia went out to stage the fight for their husbands, leaving only a lot of servants and bodyguards. Even if there was gossip, they would not run to her on front of her. Therefore, she closed the door these days and lived a comfortable life. Suddenly, there is one more person, which is somewhat unaccustomed. She secretly calculated the next plan for the tea house in her heart. Thinking about it, time passed little by little. The light is still on. Even if you close your eyes, it's still hard to fall asleep. Lu Jia turned around with her pillow in her arms, just seeing the direction of the wedding bed. He was half curled up and lying on his side on the bed. The screen of his mobile phone was on and fell by the pillow, and some video was playing. But the person has fallen asleep, his hair is messy on his forehead, and his eyes are tightly closed, which makes people feel much more oppressive. Don't cover the quilt when you sleep. Lu Jia controlled the sight he wanted to walk away, turned away, and suddenly frowned again. If he slept like this, if he had a cold and fever, would he have to live at home to recuperate? Then she has to run the person she likes every day, and how can she go out to run a tea house? Thinking so, Lu Jia sat up from the sofa and asked softly, Bo Wang, are you asleep? The man lay on the bed and didn't move. I really fell asleep. Lu Jia stood up and walked towards him. She was afraid that the movement in the middle would wake him up and be seen by him. She also touched the object next to her and walked slowly over. Standing by the bed, she bent down to touch the quilt and unfold it, carefully pulling it up. As soon as he covered his waist, Bo Wang suddenly opened his eyes. He still maintained a side-lying posture, but his eyes glared at her gloomily, and even his guard was full of anger. Lu Jia was so scared that she threw off the quilt and strangled the quilt tightly with her fingers. After a pause for half a second, she pretended to be calm and continued to cover him with a quilt. Bo Wang turned around quietly and lay there staring at her. He didn't stop her without saying a sound, but slowly stretched out his hand to her. The big palm stopped in front of her neck to form a false grip gesture. As long as he goes a little further, he can easily break her neck. Lu Jia pulled the quilt to his chest with a steady breath, gently pulled the quilt on both sides of him, and all the movements were with the groping that the blind should have. Probably she didn't expect that she got up in the middle of the night because she was worried that he might not have covered the quilt. She froze for a moment, and then stared at her, as if she was going to see something from her face. Seeing that the hand was not really pinched, Lord Jia relaxed slightly, turned around and carefully returned to the sofa, holding the pillow and lying down again. It's so scary. If Bo Wang stays at home for a long time, she will either be seen through or scared to death. She turned around and looked inside. She closed her eyes to ignore the lights in the room and fall asleep. After a long time, just as she was about to fall asleep, a low voice suddenly sounded behind her. I couldn't sleep. Count it for me. Lord Jia was so scared that she suddenly bounced up from the sofa and sat down. She saw Bo Wang sitting on the coffee table in front of her like a ghost, staring at her coldly with dark eyes. Her hearing was so sensitive that she didn't even notice his walking sound. I don't know if her shocked look pleased him very well. He hooked his lips and smiled very pervertedly. Didn't you sleep? She asked in a gentle voice. Can't sleep, can't understand. Bo Wang raised his eyebrows. If you can't sleep, can't you fill yourself with a few bottles of sleeping pills to sleep better? Chapter 30. Do you have to recall this? She stretched out her hand and hugged the pillow tightly, and squeezed out a smile. Then go back to bed and lie down. I'll count for you. Come and count. Bo Wang stood up holding her arm and dragged her directly to the bedside. Before Lord Jia could think about whether she was going to sleep in the same bed tonight, her shoulder was pressed hard by him, and she sat on the floor by the bed. Beasts are beasts, and scum is scum. Bo Wang lay down on the bed, covered himself with a quilt comfortably, and lazily issued orders, and began. Lord Jia leaned against the edge of the bed, calmed down, and spoke cooperatively. A sheep, 2 sheep. The man on the bed looked at her with gloomy eyes. Did I ask you to count sheep? Lord Jia suddenly thought of what Jiang Foshan said. He had been in a sheep-killing slaughterhouse since he was a child. He not only had a shadow on the cowherd, but also on the sheep. She licked her lips, changed her mouth, and continued to count. 1, 2, 3. The soft tone sounds like no complaints and no regrets, and it is as sweet as candy. Bo Wang stared at her gloomily and couldn't see what she was thinking. 23, 24, 45, 46. What do you want from me? Status? Wealth? Bo Wang suddenly interrupted her, got up from the bed, reached out and pinched her chin, forcing her to raise her face to face himself. Now he said, I can still give you a way to live. If I find out in the future, I will make your life worse than death. While talking, his breath fell on her lips. His fingers used some force to squeeze a white mark on her soft chin. Threatening word by word. He was suspicious and wary. Just a confession made him have so many thoughts. Lord Jia knows that she is already in trouble, so she can only continue in a soft voice. I don't want to get anything, but I just hope you will always be so happy like your paintings when you were a child. Do you know what it feels like to pour sulfuric acid on your body? He said. Why don't you believe me? Have you ever seen a real human stick? Incontinence, can't move, can't die, only the whole body is particularly clear, day after day. His low voice is terribly cool. Lord Jia raised her hand and gently put it on the back of his hand, and said seriously, Bo Wang, I have signed the private agreement you gave me. I know when I have to leave. Bo Wang sneered. Isn't human nature greedy? What about the agreement? Can it stop her restless heart? What flowers can I find under your eyes? She said that there are less than 2 years left before I leave. If I have a problem, you can deal with me at any time, can't you? Bo Wang looked at her and said nothing. For a long time, he lowered his eyes and stared at the hand on his wrist. The white gauze covered his palm, and several slender fingers were full of fine and dense scars. That's right. He is just a blind man. How bold can he be to play tricks in front of him? Lord Jia, remember what you said today, otherwise, I will make the rest of your life more miserable than a human stick. Bo Wang let go of his hand, leaned back, regained his laziness, and continued to count. Lord Jia touched her chin with her hand. Do you have to recall this? The man glared at her, looking like a who is reminiscing? Her chin was pinched by him and it hurt so much. Lord Jia couldn't say anything, so she could only continue to count the sheep in a good voice. 47, 48. Chapter 31. It's just that you are married. It was already the middle of the night. She was tired and tired. She counted and her head slowly drooped. Bo Wang lowered his eyes, and Lord Jia had fallen asleep by the bed. Her dark hair was wrapped around his hand intimately. Looking at this face, he rarely had a good heart and didn't wake her up. He lay in bed and looked at the light in the room. He couldn't sleep until dawn. After sleeping on the floor all night, when Lord Jia got up, her arms and legs hurt, her waist hurt, and her bones and joints were as sore as if she had been run over. She rubbed her arms and sat up, looking at Bo Wang's open eyes, red, like a wolf staring at food in the forest. Did she wake up early or didn't sleep all night? How long have you been staring at her? If he continues to stay here, she will be nervous. After calming down, Lord Jia stood up silently, groped to pull the quilt for him, and then touched the wall to the cabinet, picked up the cane and pulled it away, and walked towards the bathroom. Knock. The door was knocked. Young master, young grandmother and old lady invite you to have breakfast. Jiang Foshan's voice sounded outside the door. The two-story small foreign-style building surrounded by sycamore trees stands next to the Bo family's super-large villa, which is quiet and peaceful in the morning light. Compared with the ubiquitous luxury of the main building, the Wutong courtyard is much quieter. After Lord Jia toasted tea to the two old men, she sat on the table and sat on the left side of Bo Wang, bowing his head and eating silently. Bo Wang obviously had no interest in the full table of vegetarian breakfast. He leaned back and looked lazy. "What are you busy with every day? I want you to have breakfast with us, but I can't find anyone." The old lady Ding Yuzhen looked at Bo Wang with some blame, and then picked up a golden fried egg for Lord Jia with her chopsticks. Her tone was much more loving. "Now that you have a baby, you should eat more." "Thank you, Grandma." Lord Jia smiled cooperatively, and there was nothing to do in her heart. Compared with other weird people in the Bo family, the old lady treats her well, but she knows that it's good, but it's just for her stomach, not. She has met the new young grandmother of the big family, and the real respect will not be her current situation. "You are a good child." Ding Yuzhen smiled and said casually, "By the way, I heard that you are collecting evidence and preparing to sue Fen Chao and Hua Ping, right?" "Sure enough, there is nothing to hide from the Bo family." "Right." Lord Jia admitted. "I have had your evidence taken back and destroyed. It's not enough to be a lawsuit. What do you think?" Ding Yuzhen talked slowly as if he was saying that the sycamore leaves outside were growing well. Hearing the words, Lord Jia's hand holding chopsticks suddenly tightened, and the wound on her palm gave birth to bursts of pain, which made her face pale. She endured the urge to lift the table. After a long time, she let go of her chopsticks and said obediently, "I understand, Grandma." Unexpectedly, even her revenge would be cut off. Bo Wang glared at her quietly. "What do you understand? Do you understand that the old lady is afraid that you will make a big deal, and you and I will become another scandal of the Bo family?" Thin, vain. Ding Yuzhen glared at him displeasedly, and his voice was a little cold. "I'm for your good and your children. Now, everyone only thinks that you are married. If you know that you were drugged, how can your children stand in the future? How will he inherit the Bo family in the future? The heirs of the medicine will be used as a laughing capital for the rest of his life." As soon as this was said, Lord Jia was surprised. She always thought it was too ridiculous for Bo Wang, so Bo's family casually married him a wife. Unexpectedly, the old lady made such an idea. Everyone in the outside world knows that Bo Wang is full of black material, can't beat his younger brothers and sisters, and can't inherit the family business at all. But listening to the old lady's meaning, the eldest grandson could not compete, so he seized the opportunity to give birth to a great-grandson to cultivate. But no, since the old lady values Bo Wang, her eldest grandson, why not marry him to a helping year family? She is just an orphan with nothing. Chapter 32. The old man's words are amazing. Lord Jia was suspicious, and Bo Xingling, an old man who was only caring about food, suddenly smiled. "That is, if I let everyone know that my eldest grandson can't do it, it would be too shameful to rely on others for the first time." Cough. Lord Jia suddenly stopped and coughed up directly. What kind of information does she accept? So, it's because of Bo Wang's own problem that the old lady can't find a door for him. Bo Wang sat aside and didn't bother to pay attention to the old man and the old man. As soon as he said this, his face turned blue, and his eyes looked at the old man like a murder, saying word by word, "Old man, son, okay." The swear words came out. It was Yijin who said that there was no woman around you to spend the night. Bo Qingling has Alzheimer's disease. He has long since his domineering appearance in those years, leaving only he is simple and open-mouthed like a child, but my eldest grandson is still very powerful. The hairy boy can take people's lives for the first time on the battlefield. If it were in the past, he would definitely be a general. Lord Jia almost wanted to wash her ears. What did she hear? Bo Wang's face was already dark, and he began to untie the cufflinks without saying a word, exuding a chilling anger. Seeing this, Ding Yuzhen quickly said to the servant with a headache. The old man finished eating and helped him go to the yard for a walk. "If you don't leave, there will be a human tragedy." "Huh. I haven't finished eating yet." "That sweet corn, Yujing." Bo Qingling was forcibly helped down by the servant with an innocent and aggrieved face. Bo Wang looked at it coldly, with one hand on the edge of the table, and the cufflinks had been untied, revealing the distinct cyan veins on the forearm. Ding Yuzhen put down his chopsticks, looked at the two of them and said, "When your child is born, I will raise him personally. Bo Wang, the Bo family should be yours, and Grandma will definitely help you get it." Oh, Bo Wang laughed in a low voice disdainfully. Lord Jia looked over and saw that Ding Yuzhen's well-maintained face was a little stiff. "What are you laughing at?" Bo Wang sat forward and sat down. A handsome man rushed straight in front of Ding Yuzhen. His eyes were as dark as the night, and his voice was low, with a touch of play. "If you want to help, should I help me with what I want?" Ding Yuzhen frowned. "What do you want?" "I want to die. Can you help me?" Bo Wang raised his eyebrows and his voice was light. Ding Yuzhen was completely frozen there. Bo Wang didn't say anything more, got up and walked out. Lord Jia sat in her seat in silence and looked over without showing flaws. Ding Yuzhen's eyes turned red and she looked at the empty door with a guilty face. Suddenly, Ding Yuzhen grabbed her finger, like holding a life-saving straw. Jiaya gave birth to the baby well, must be born well. Lord Jiaya nodded gently, which was an answer. She didn't have the right not to give birth. The tea house called Guishi Building is located in the suburbs where the house price is not very high and there are few customers. Staying here, Lord Jia had no psychological burden. He picked up the tea quietly and packed it with Fang Zhen and Jiang Fusheng. Guilt? How can the old lady feel guilty about the young master? Is it because the young master has been exiled for many years and hasn't lived a good life? Jiang Fusheng asked strangely. It doesn't feel very similar. There may be some other reasons. Lord Jia said lightly that the Bo family is more complicated than I thought. The old lady also needs to raise the child in her belly to become the heir. As far as she knows, Mrs. Yi and Mrs. Xia usually fight so much. In addition to their respective children, the child in her belly must be ready to compete for power and profit as soon as she is born. If that's the case, how can she bear to leave the child in Bo's house? Thinking of this, Lord Jia couldn't help touching her stomach. Chapter 33. Can't you see? Are you blind? Most of the big families fight to the death. There is no one as harmonious as the Law family. Feng Zhen stood aside and frowned at her worriedly. Miss, it's too wronged and dangerous for you to stay in such a wolf's nest. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I won't take the initiative to provoke anyone in the Bo family, but if they dare to deal with me, I won't be as useless as before. When she was a child, she lived under the protection of her family and didn't know anything. Later, Feng Chao taught her to recognize the reality, and she would no longer feel sorry for herself. She will give herself a piece of heaven. After packing the tea, Lord Jia turned on the computer to see the income. Seeing this, Feng Zhen couldn't help laughing. Many princes came to the Spade Club to drink tea and also brought the tea back. The cost of tea and the rent were removed, and there was a lot of surplus. Lord Jia nodded. Uncle Feng, pay off your loan as soon as possible. The cost of opening a tea house is that Feng Zhen mortgaged the house. She set her goal on those club-rich people who only talk about quality and don't talk about cheapness, just to make quick money. It's not urgent. The tea house still needs to be operated, and a few people have tasted the tea you made by the lady. They always feel that the taste of tea is not right, and it is likely that they will not come again. Feng Zhen said that he was worried about the next source of customers. Therefore, we can not only use tea to retain customers, but also turn the tea house into an elegant place where everyone is willing to continue to come. Lord Jia has a new idea to have absolute service quality, so there can be no problem with employee training. In addition, find out where people in this circle usually go to have fun, and find a way to cooperate with those entertainment places. Okay. Feng Zhen nodded and put away the tea leaves on the table. The tea house is a simple style of Jiangnan architecture, with faint tea leaves floating from upstairs to downstairs. It was time to go back to Bo's house again. Lord Jia and Jiang Fushan stepped on the wooden stairs and walked downstairs. As soon as they were halfway there, a stunned voice came. Lord Jia. Lord Jia was stunned and looked downstairs with his eyes. He saw a young woman dressed in a famous brand standing in front of the old-fashioned Eight Immortals table, and he was looking at her in astonishment at the moment. Gong Zihua. Lord Jia paused for a few seconds before she recognized the woman downstairs, who made a fortune in real estate and was a classmate with her for half a year. Gong Zihua stared at her. Lord Jia stood on the stairs, wearing a beige cotton linen skirt. Her work hat, apron and sleeve had not been taken off. She looked like two classes with the other party. Is it really you? Gong Zihua rushed to the bottom of the stairs incredibly. Why are you here? Lord Jia didn't have a special impression of this old classmate, so she said briefly that I opened this tea house. Are you the boss? Does the seventh lady of the Tuntang Road family still have to come out to do such a small business by herself? Gong Zihua was so surprised that her expression was a little out of shape. Her red lips were open, and there was obviously a little sarcasm hidden in the depths of her eyes. As she said, she seemed to have just reacted. Oh, I forgot that the Law family has been down for several years, and everyone is almost dead. Lord Jia stood on the stairs and smiled faintly when she heard the words. Yes, who has never died? Gong Zihua was choked and her face became cold. When she was about to speak, she suddenly found that Lord Jia's eyes were dull, and she had no focal length at all. She couldn't help raising her hand and shaking it in front of Lord Jia. Can't you see it? Are you blind? Lord Jia nodded calmly. So forgive me for not recognizing who you are. I'm Gong Zihua. Gong Zihua looked at her contemptuously, but her tone was full of concern. It's really pitiful. How did you make it like this? You used to be able to use the whole school leadership team to care about and comfort people at school. Hey, are you married? With whom? Gong Zihua came forward and grabbed her hand, looking at the diamond ring on her ring finger. Is this ring real or fake? You don't know. It's just an ordinary person. The way of the road. Gong Zihua was angry in her heart. Of course, she didn't know that Lord Jia could marry a high-class person in her current state. She rolled her eyes. When we came just now, a boss with a little white hair was receiving him. Could it be? But it can really be associated. Lord Jia smiled and said nothing. She is too lazy to explain to unnecessary people. Gong Zihua thought she had guessed right and almost laughed out loud. This Lord Jia actually married a man who can be her father. Sure enough, a hairless phoenix is not as good as a chicken. I guess this man is the richest man she can find now, right? No, she can't laugh at such a big joke alone. Forcingly holding back her smile, Gong Zihua kindly pulled her downstairs and sighed. When we heard that something happened to your family, a group of our classmates were very worried. You too, classmates, why didn't you ask us for help if you were in trouble? Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine now. Lord Jia nodded. It's nice to see you again. Gong Zihua said and took out an invitation letter from her bag. Just in time, my family is going to hold an angel fundraising dinner this weekend. There are donations and auctions which are for children in mountainous areas abroad. Many old classmates have been pulled here by me. Will you and your husband come with us? Lord Jia pushed open the invitation, so I didn't go. Come on. Gong Zihua stuffed the invitation into her hand. I know you are in trouble now. Even if you don't donate money or take pictures, it's okay. Just think of it as an old classmate party. Give me some face, how about it? Lord Jian frowned slightly, as if he couldn't erase his love. After a while, he took the invitation letter and turned to the waiter beside him to get a few cans of good tea. After a while, the wrapped tea gift bag was taken down. Lord Jia stuffed the gift bag into Gong Zihua's smiling hand. You're welcome. Gong Zihua is very proud. This former young lady now knows how to compliment people. It's really cool to turn around in feng shui. What's so polite about this? Originally, a classmate, I should have given you a few cans of tea when you came, but... Lord Jia said slowly, always with a smile on her face, and her words suddenly changed. You also know that I'm in a difficult situation now. I definitely don't want to give it to you for nothing, so I'll charge you the cost price. Gong Zihua's hand holding the tea gift bag is not right, and his smile becomes a little stiff. You are really polite. How much is it? 300,000. Lord Jia's smile remains unchanged. How much? Gong Zihua's voice suddenly became sharp, and people almost jumped up. Are you killing me? A little broken tea requires 300,000 yen. Chapter 34. Lord Jia, Changling District, Jiangnan. How could it be? Our tea is aimed at high-end customers, and we choose high-quality tea, and the cost price is indeed high. Lord Jia said seriously, took back the gift bag, and handed over the invitation letter. Since you can't believe me, forget it. Gong Zihua choked again. After thinking about it, she took back the gift bag, pushed the invitation back, squeezed out a smile and said, how can I not believe you? I'll buy it and swipe my card. She handed out the card, and she was sure of the excitement. Spend 300,000 yen to watch it. After swiping the card, Lord Jia smiled and sent Gong Zihua out of the door. You walk slowly. Gong Zihua went out with a tea gift bag. The more she thought about it, the more painful it became. She took out her mobile phone and made a phone call. Dad, shall we make the angel fundraising dinner a little bigger? It's better to let all the upper-class circles in the south of the Yangtze River participate. I have a big program. Believe me, this program is wonderful. As soon as Gong Zihua left, Lord Jian was pulled upstairs by Jiang Fuqi. What kind of person is this? She is too much. She doesn't have good intentions when she looks like that. Jiang is very floating. Feng Zhen saw everything upstairs and was standing aside and wiping his tears at this moment. His lady is being wronged every day now. It's because he's not good and can't afford to serve her. Lord Jia's heart was completely unwaved. Seeing them like this, she couldn't help but feel funny. What's wrong with you? If you go to a dinner party, you can get the 300,000 yen. How easy it is to make this money. 300,000, a very large number. What's the good thing? At a glance, you can know that she is idle and wants you to make a fool of herself in public. Jiang floated and said, Miss, you can't go. Feng Zhen said anxiously. I'm going. Lord Ju Aya said, and his voice was gentle and firm. She took the invitation in her hand, on which some treasures were printed to be auctioned. One of them is the best Qian incense Buddha bead bracelet. She is very familiar with the lines of the Buddha string. It was given to her grandfather when her grandmother was young. Grandpa wore it in his hand for a lifetime. Until the Law family went bankrupt, he was reluctant to take it off. It was Grandma who forcibly tore it off and took it to pay for money. Grandma said that as long as the family was still together, it was more important than any old object. But it hasn't been a few days since the days of suffering together, and there was a fire, and all the people were gone. Lord Jia pinched the invitation in her hand. Now, the bracelet is in front of her. She can't help but try it. After breakfast that day, Bo Wang did not go back to Bo's house. Lord Jia's heart was much more relaxed, and he was full of money. Finally, he saved left and right before the weekend. He counted all the money in the tea house and came up with 1 million yuan. This money is a considerable amount for Lord Jia now. It is enough to spend time honestly, but it is not enough to use it at auctions. Feng Zhen wanted to give her the money to repay the loan, and Jiang Forsheng also wanted to lend her money from his parents, but she refused. She can make money. No matter how expensive things are, it's up to her. If she can't make money, she can't take pictures. She can't clean up the people around her, and there's no point in taking pictures of them. The night was as cool as water. The garden villa of the Gong family was brightly lit, and the street lights lit up the whole road. Lord Jia and Feng Zhen arrived at Gong's house by taxi. Lord Jia was about to get out of the car when Feng Zhen grabbed her. "Miss, you won't want my money, or forget it today." She looked back at him with a faint smile. "Try it, in case no one snatched it from me. If she is lucky, she will really take a picture of the handstring." Miss Feng Zhen looked at her unbearably. He was not worried about not being able to take a picture of the bracelet, but about the so-called upper-class people inside. Lord Jia knew what he was thinking. "Uncle Feng, I have been hiding for 5 years. Since you choose not to hide anymore, sooner or later there will be such a day, either today or tomorrow, what's the point?" After saying that, Lord Jia broke away from his hand, pushed the door, and took out a blind stick to walk. Feng Zhen immediately got on the car and came forward to help her. The two walked to the door of the villa, and several servants were welcoming them. Feng Zhen stepped forward and handed over the invitation letter in her hand. Someone is recording the name of the guest, looking up at Lord Jia with a smile. "Hello, are you?" Lord Jia standing there, straightening her spine slightly, and exiting word by word. Lord Jia, Chaoling District, Jiangnan. The Gong family villa was bustling up and down, inviting the media to come and spread the red carpet for guests to appear. The splendid living room is divided into 2 halves, half of which is the auction area and the other half is the reception area. Everyone is dressed in bright clothes, staggered, and the laughter is harmonious when the cups are exchanged. An oversized white Guanyin glazed sculpture stands under the light, as if shining with sparkling light, and the European leather sofa against the wall is hidden behind the dim light. The man sat alone on the sofa, leaning lazily back. His black shirt had light folds, and the cool light of Guanyin swept over his angular face. He closed his eyes, his long eyelashes were like ink, and the Buddha's light could not fade the coldness of his outline. On the side, Ji Jing pulled a few people to play mahjong, and the chips were thrown loudly. "Today, I killed 3 families. No one wants to leave. Brother Jing, lower your voice. He is asleep." The person watching them hit pushed him on the shoulder. Ji Jing looked back at Bo Wang, leaning on the sofa, lit a cigarette and smiled. "It's okay. He just likes to listen to the movement. Just don't be so cheap that it's noisy in his ear." The situation is not noisy enough, and the old man still refuses to show his face. Ji Jing and others can fight, and soon it will be a situation of about 10 million, which makes more and more people go this way, and no matter how crowded the crowd is, they dare not lean more on the sofa. After a while, several more girls squeezed out of the crowd. Where did the people next to them go in a hurry? "Let's go and see if Lord Jia has come." Zuhua said she would come. The girl said excitedly. Ji Jing laughed while throwing mahjong. "Who is it? I haven't heard of it. It's lively again in Jiangbei City. What I don't know about Ji Seishao. It's the Luo family. A few years ago, the Luo family collapsed overnight and died, and only one daughter was still alive." Zuhua invited her. "We all want to see what this Miss Qianxing, who used to be the first door in Country K, looks like now. What kind of Luo family and 8 families?" Ji Jing raised his mahjong hand and suddenly stopped. He looked over in disbelief. It was the head of Jiangnao Road and the Road family in the north of the world. Hearing Ji Jing's words, the people present remembered this rich family that had faded in their memories. In those years, when the Luo family was like the sky, Jiangbei's rich families were not enough to see, so there was such a proverb. "I thought the Luo family had disappeared and everyone was dead. It turned out that there was also a daughter alive. Here we go, people are really coming." Someone shouted excitedly. Now everyone lost the mind to watch mahjong, and turned their heads to look at it one after another. Chapter 35. After so many years, I didn't expect you to pretend like this. Ji Jing also stood up and turned around casually. He saw that Bo Wang, who was sleeping, woke up at some point. He opened his eyes and sat there expressionlessly. "Brother Wang, let's have fun together." Ji Jing leaned over with the dog's legs. "Do you want me to see the back of my head?" Bo Wang glanced coldly at the people in front of him. Ji Jing received the signal and hurried forward to push the crowd aside and leave space. Bo Wang sat still, only slightly tilted his face, and looked over Guanyin's jade arm. A thin figure slowly appeared in everyone's sight. She was dressed in a misty green long skirt with light gauze texture. The skirt fell to her feet, flat shoes, and a long hair gently tied behind her ears. The shape was too simple to be simple, but with that bright but not ostentatious face, and the euphemism of a Jiaonao woman, she has a unique temperament. She walked in slowly, holding a cane in her hand, and her whole body was quiet and precipitated. "It looks good." Ji Jing sat beside Bo Wang, and the eyes of the person staring at the door suddenly lit up, but her eyes were blind. "It's a pity." Bo Wang turned his eyes and looked at him quietly. Lord Jia stood calmly at the door. After a while, Gong Zihua, dressed in a sloping shoulder red evening dress, came out of the crowd with a smile and took her arm. Jia, why did you arrive? I have been waiting for you for a long time. She waited for a long time until everyone looked at her like a monkey before coming out. Am I late? Lord Jia put away her cane and asked with a smile. It's okay. The auction is about to start. I'll take you there. Gong Zuhua said intimately, and her eyes drifted to Feng Zhen behind her. Her voice suddenly became louder. Is your husband also here? Come on, sit inside together. When the words fell, the whole living room was in an uproar, and everyone's eyes fell on Feng Zhen, who had obviously silver-white hair. Nothing has changed on Lord Jia's face, but Feng Zhen blushed with anger, almost gritting his teeth. I'm just a servant. Please don't misunderstand Miss Gong. Gong Zuhua was stunned for a moment, and then smiled and said to Lord Jia, this person in your family is quite considerate of your face, but in love, what age are you talking about? Lord Jia didn't clarify or follow her. She just said, where should I sit? This way. Gong Zuhua led her to the auction area and put her on a round table in the last corner. She said, I'm sorry, the seats have been arranged for a long time, and there are no empty seats. But don't worry, the classmates miss you very much. They will come to you. You don't have to be afraid that no one will talk to. They will come to laugh at you. Okay. Lord Jia sat down calmly, as if she couldn't see that Gong Zuhua was deliberately teasing her. Jia husband, you can also sit down. Gong Zuhua greeted Feng Zhen warmly. Feng Zhen clenched his fist and stood straight behind Lord Jia, asking Miss Gong to respect Our Lady. Zuhua doesn't respect Lord Jia. Two girls walked towards this side, and their tone was full of contempt. With her current identity, the Gong family invited her to a banquet. She should be grateful to Duda. She also found her husband to pretend to be a servant. Lord Jia, after so many years, I didn't expect that you still pretended to be like this. Lord Jia looked over. She had no impression of the two people in front of her, and vaguely remembered that they seemed to be in the same class. Mingyi, Guazu, don't do this. It's not easy for her these years. Gong Zuhua came forward and said in a gentle voice to relieve the siege. It's not easy to return. Don't pretend. If she is too poor and frank, I will still respect her. As a result, what kind of young lady's pretending here? Don't you think we don't know her background? That's right, Zuhua, I've seen a lot of people like her. Her heart is higher than the sky, and her life is thinner than paper. Today, she is by the old man's side for some money, and tomorrow she can't pick it off like a bloodsucker. A series of ridicules hit Lord Jia. She sat calmly and tidied up her sleeves, with a faint smile on her lips. The two misunderstood. I was blind. Uncle Feng was worried about my safety, so he accompanied me. I didn't mean to pretend. She was neither angry nor offensive, and she explained with a smile, nor was the fear and humility of the people at the bottom. There was no trace of excitement, as if their words were all farting, and she was just too lazy to pay attention. I didn't see the former young lady jumping, and the two girls were very unhappy. One of the girls pulled the maid holding the donation box and said, since you're here, donate some money to the children in mountainous areas abroad. Charity doesn't matter how much money you have. As long as you have the heart, you can donate 100,000 or 80,000 yen. It should be. Lord Jia stood up, took out 500 pieces of cash from his pocket, and put it in the box. Both girls are stupid. Where did you send flowers? This donation box is just an ornament. Can the QR code be scanned directly on it? How could she put cash in it, and only 500 yen was put in it? Charity doesn't matter how much money you have, as long as you have a heart. Lord Jia smiled and returned their words and sat down again. You are really good at it. The two girls were annoyed. Lord Jia, I beg you don't embarrass yourself here. This is not the place where you can come at all. If you want to show your face, go by yourself. When the words fell, the whole living room was silent. All kinds of eyes flew to Lord Jia, which is a good saying. Lord Jia is no longer the daughter of heaven in those years. With her current identity, she is not qualified to come to work, let alone enter the angel fundraising dinner. This time, Gong Zihua did not relieve the siege again. She just smiled and looked at Lord Jia. She wanted to see whether she was angry or crying and pretending to be pitiful. No matter what, it was wonderful. Feng Zhen was so angry that he wanted to go forward to argue. Lord Jia smiled faintly. Gong, is the auction about to begin? It. Quieter around. Immediately, someone sneered. I really didn't expect that the daughter of the first family in country K had this virtue. You dare to sit down with 500 yo? Haven't had a high-quality banquet for a long time, or do you want to get to know more rich people here? It's ridiculous that there are such people who don't leave. The voices around her became more and more unpleasant. Feng Zhen couldn't wait to swing his fist out, but when he lowered his head, Lord Jia was still sitting lightly, as if these voices had nothing to do with her. After Guanyin Liuli, Ji Jing looked at this scene thoroughly. Although he couldn't hear too many sentences from a distance, he could guess. Bai Chang has such a beautiful face. Ji Jing shook his head with emotion. This kind of girl's family collapsed overnight, and she couldn't find her location. She thought that she could return to her past life by flattering a few rich people, right, Brother Wang? Bo Wang was still leaning lazily behind, and a pair of narrow eyes looked at the thin figure with no emotion. Chapter 36. The Ayo of the road was ridiculed. Hearing the words, he moved his lips and didn't have a bone. Being insulted like this, I don't even have the heart to fight back. Who said no? Ji Jun shrugged his shoulders and wanted to play, but now forget it. She even has such a half-hundred-year-old man by her side. How can I let go if I was entangled by her? Bo Wang looked at him sideways. Ji Jun was a little puzzled and couldn't help touching the back of his neck. Why does Brother Wang look at me like that? It's nothing. Just take a look. Bo Wang stared at him quietly, and his low voice was not happy or angry. Your head and neck were quite strong and good-looking. Ji Jing was so scared that he almost wet his pants. His legs slipped to the ground, and his face turned white. Brother Wang, don't argue with me if I'm going to do something wrong. I will definitely take the most expensive thing in the audience as your birthday gift. Bo Wang slowly sat up straight and patted his neck twice. His thin lips were slightly hooked. What are you afraid of? You just praise your neck for growing well. Ha, ha, thank you for your praise, Brother Wang. Ji Jing laughed dryly, and his neck was slapped to chills. Is this a fucking compliment that people can think of? The auction of the Angel fundraising dinner officially began. The lights at the scene dimmed, leaving only a few beams of lights cast to the auction platform. Gong Zuohua, who had just guided everyone to watch jokes together, is now talking about all kinds of difficulties for children in mountainous areas abroad in the microphone. When she talked about the sad things, she shed tears and choked until she couldn't continue to talk. There was a lot of applause at the scene. Lord Jia sat in her seat and patted her hands a few times. The precious toys of the auction were put on the stage one by one, and the people around them raised their cards one after another. In the process, the so-called old classmates came to greet her one after another, some ridiculed her, and some felt sorry for her. All kinds of sounds are so lively. In the dark, someone put a glass of red wine mixed with chili juice in front of her and drank some red wine. Miss Lu, I'm afraid you haven't had a good drink for several years, have you? Lord Jia smiled and pushed the wine glass in front of him away. Yes, eating bran and swallow vegetables every day, my stomach is no longer worthy of drinking good wine. The man choked and looked at her several times in anger. Lord Jia quietly waited for the handstring to appear. Suddenly, there was a shadow beside her. A middle-aged man in a straight suit sat down next to her, and the smell of cone sprayed on her face. Lord Jia covered her nose and almost evoked a pregnancy vomiting reaction. Jia, do you remember me? I'm Wang Yaozor's father. We met when you had a parent-teacher meeting. The man didn't care about the process of auctioning. He just stared at her and looked around, just like looking at a piece of goods to buy. Feng Jun stared at him. Lord Jia smiled lightly. Uncle. Okay, by the way, I remember that you went to the junior class of K University after only 1 year in middle school. How are you doing now? Wang Jichen asked, holding a glass of red wine and taking a sip. Lord Jia sat upright, but the family changed, so she didn't study anymore. At that time, she just wanted to shrink back and live. It's a pity that you are so excellent. Wang Jichen put down the wine glass, put his hand on the back of the chair behind her, and sighed, your good child should not be buried. Why don't you ask your uncle to help you? How about treating your eyes and sending you to school? Lord Jia sat forward without moving, with a calm voice. Thank you, uncle, no need, and I'm already married. With that, she showed the ring on her ring finger. Hearing the words, Wang Jichen looked back at Feng Zhen's half-white hair disdainfully and smiled contemptuously. You are only in your early 20s. How can such an old man satisfy you? Well, the dinner party is not interesting either. Uncle will take you shopping and buy some bags. With that, Wang Jichen grabbed her hand to pull her up. Feng Zhen couldn't stand it any longer and pulled him away. Don't overdo it. Wang Jichen looked back and was tall. I've heard that you are a shabby tea house. You'd better figure out how many jinns you have. If you know the appearance, I will guarantee your wealth. If you don't know the appearance, I won't let you die without an urn. Hearing the words, Feng Zhen was furious. Please keep your mouth clean. What do you think of my lady? Of course, it's a toy. Lord Jia sat in her seat and smiled lightly. Thank you for your love, but I don't have such a big ambition to dig into the corner of my aunt. A person at the table looked over. Wang Jicheng's face immediately felt a little embarrassed. He lowered his head and stared at Lord Jia. Lord Jia, don't be shameless. Do you think you are still rich? It's just a pair of broken shoes. Why should uncle be angry? When it comes to business, one must be willing to buy and one should be willing to sell, right? Lord Jia looked at the front with her eyes, and there was no sign of being angered. Buy and sell. Do you deserve to talk to me? Your family has a history of wearing worn-out shoes. The more Wang Jicheng spoke, the more energetic he became. He shouted that the auction on the stage was suspended. For a moment, everyone turned their heads and looked over. Lord Jia's eyes became cold in an instant. Seeing this, Wang Jichen shouted louder. You can ask the older people in the field. Who doesn't know that your father can't stand your mother stealing talent outside every day and set a fire, and the whole family was burned to death? Lord Jia stood up suddenly, grabbed the tableware in front of her and hit Wang Jicheng. The tableware hit Wang Jicheng heavily and fell to the ground, making a sound. If you are lewd, you can't wait for people all over the world to be like yourself. Mr. Wang, children know how shameful it is to spread rumors because of narrow-mindedness. She said word by word, and her voice was as cold as frost. Everyone looked at Lord Jia in astonishment. Wasn't she as soft as mud just now? Wang Jicheng was also stunned. He didn't expect that Lord Jia, who was no longer anything, dared to attack him. Suddenly, his whole body exploded. He grabbed the chair in front of him and rushed over. Your mother. As soon as he rushed out, a man came next to him, and his arms brushed the edge of the chair. Who the are you? Wang Jicheng was interrupted and roared angrily. At a glance, he was depressed. Bosha. Bo Wang stood in the dark with his hands in his trouser pockets. Obviously, he didn't expect to be hit on the road, and his slightly drooping eyes still had a little sigh of waking up. He looked down at his hit arm, and then looked at Wang Jicheng in front of him. His eyes were not warm. Lord Jia was stunned. She didn't expect Bo Wang to come to the banquet. She was silent and just didn't know. Seeing that Bo Wang was involved, Go's family also panicked and hurriedly asked people to turn on the light. Suddenly, the whole banquet was bright. Wang Jicheng, who had been so scared that he couldn't see the three souls, had nowhere to hide, and his pale face was clearly exposed to everyone's eyes. And Bo Wang is an existence that cannot be ignored. Chapter 37. Greeting his mother-in-law. Gong Zuhua stood on the stage and looked at him. Not far away, his heart beat a little faster. She was amazed when she first saw Bo Wang at a banquet. From then on, as long as Bo Wang was there, she could no longer take her eyes off her, but after knowing his style of behavior, she did not dare to approach easily and always watched from afar. Bo Shao, yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Wang Jicheng broke out in a cold sweat and hurriedly put down the chair. Why did you mess with the king of hell? I didn't see him just now. Bo Wang stared at him, raised his hand and patted his sleeve, and said carelessly, are you greeting my mother? As soon as he said this, Wang Jicheng's legs were weak and he quickly pointed to Lord Jiyan beside him. It was her. The blind man threw the plate randomly. Fortunately, I blocked it for you, otherwise these plates would have been smashed on you. I scolded her. Bo Wang followed his direction and looked aside. Lord Jia stood there, her eyes facing this direction, but there was no radiance. Her eyes could not be focused. Her lips squeezed out a touch of coldness. Her spine was straight, and the ring hanging on her side was particularly eye-catching. Oh, I'm greeting his mother-in-law. Bo Wang slowly withdrew his gaze and looked at Wang Jicheng with interest. Bullying? No one in the whole Xiangbei is more familiar with me. A chair can't solve the problem. Why don't I teach you how to play? Wang Jicheng can't figure out what this means. Do you really want to teach him how to deal with Lu Jia, or to teach him a lesson in the name? After thinking about it, he could only say in fright, no need. What's the matter? Look down on me? Bo Wang looked at the short man in front of him and raised his eyebrows. No, it's not. Wang Jicheng was completely panicked and turned his head to look at the friendship he made in the business field, and wanted someone to help him talk. But not to mention Jiangbei, even if you look at the whole K country, who dares to mess with this master, they will all look away one by one, and even the Gong family, who is the master, just pretend to see nothing. Wang Jicheng looked around, and finally there was only despair. He trembled and said, Mr. Bo, please give me more advice. Well, I'll pull these broken shoes over for you. By words, Wang Jicheng wanted to catch the road, but as soon as he took a step, Bo Wang raised his foot and kicked his leg. Bang! Wang Jicheng was kicked and fell straight on the pieces of tableware on the ground. He screamed out of his throat, and Bo Wang kicked him again. Wait for everyone's reaction when he came to take a closer look. Wang Jicheng had completely lied on the ground, and half of his face was smashed on several broken plates. Blood flowed out from under his face. Bo Wang slowly raised one foot and stepped on his face, and used some force down to crush the human face to deformation. As if it was not enough, he hooked his hands in the direction of the table. Ji Jing, who had been following him, immediately took the red wine with seasoning in front of Lord Jia, Brother Wang. Bo Wang held the wine glass, bowed his head and smelled it, then tilted the glass and spilled it at the person under his feet. The blood-red wine slowly poured down, not passing Wang Jicheng's eyes and nose. It was so spicy that he screamed repeatedly, tearing his heart and miserable. Even the sound of breathing on the court can't wait to become transparent. This is too cruel. Bo Wang fell very slowly. He looked down at the people under his feet, and his eyes wandered with the red wine, as if he had seen a satisfactory painting, and the curve of the corners of his lips became deeper and deeper. Lord Jia once again saw Bo Wang's fierceness. Wang Jicheng, who was trampled onto death, was painful and humiliated. For a moment, he struggled to resist, but slowly let go of his hand and lay on the ground as if he was destined. He let the spicy red wine fascinate his eyes, and his voice trembled. Thank you, Bo Shao, for teaching me. I appreciate Mr. Wang's studying attitude. Bo Wang smiled, threw away the empty wine glass casually, slowly withdrew his foot, and glanced at Lu Jia, who was standing not far away. His tone was particularly lazy. Does Mr. Wang want to learn and use it now? Hearing the words, Lu Jia's heart tightened and secretly pinched the palm of her hand. Fortunately, Wang Jichen was completely disgraced and lost all his face. How could he have the strength to deal with her? He covered his face and ran away like a bereaved dog. When the Gong family saw that Bo Wang seemed to calm down, they came forward. Bo Shao, I'm sorry. We didn't entertain you well. Please take a seat. I'm too lazy to move. Bo Wang said and pulled back the chair that had just been taken away by Wang Jicheng, put it next to Lu Jia and sat down. Lu Jia was a little surprised. Gong Zihua was also shocked to see this. She asked Lu Jia to come over to show everyone a joke. She didn't expect to provoke Bo Wang's anger. Originally, she wanted to drive Lu Jia away quickly, but this time it didn't work. The headlights were still on, and everyone looked at each other. The Gong family is even more afraid. Why did this master still sit in the last seat? What's the situation? Do you also have a problem with their Gong family? Gong Zihua wanted to come forward, but she didn't dare. After thinking about it, she walked quickly to Ji Jing's side. What's going on? A friend, don't be saved by death. Ji Jing almost rolled his eyes when he heard it. Bo Wang's work has always been uncertain. How did he know that maybe people are in a bad mood today and want to find more people to vent their anger? No, I really won't sit down if I get so angry. Ally, all, clean up here. It's time to eat and play. Don't stir up Brother Wang's interest. Ji Jing speculated on the delusional psychology and deliberately said loudly. Bo Wang didn't raise his eyebrows when he listened. Ji Jing suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the matter had been exposed. Seeing that Bo Wang didn't mean to find Go's family, Gong Zihua was relieved and glanced at Lu Jia. Lu Jia sat quietly beside Bo Wang, inexplicably showing a little meaning. Bo Wang won't be the ayah of rushing to the road to sit in the last seat, right? Gong Zihua's heart suddenly became a ball. It was impossible. A poor blind man could not like Bo Wang. The lights dimmed again, and the auction continued. Lu Jia sat in her position, and Bo Wang sat on her right side, slightly sideways looking in the direction of the auction table, with one hand on the edge of the table, and her slender fingers tapped. The sense of oppression that came from her almost surrounded her. Some people think that once they are in business, they have to operate to the end, otherwise it is easy to have accidents. Lu Jia secretly took a breath, then squeezed out a little smile, reached out and groped over, secretly gently grabbed his shirt and squeezed it down. Bo Wang, is it you? Bo Wang lowered his head and glanced at her hand, then glared at her dull eyes, and said in a cold tone, what are you doing? Lu Jia smiled a little shyly, and her voice was low and happy. Bo Wang was silent for a while. You don't think I'm standing up for you, do you? Do you love daydreaming so much? Lu Jia shook her head and still smiled. No, I'm very happy to see you. After saying that, she quickly withdrew her hand, sat upright, facing the direction of the auction table, and stood up as a person who liked and did not disturb. Chapter 38. It was obviously the gold owner who coaxed the canary. Bo Wang was probably really bored tonight. He withdrew his hand and leaned on her. The dark eyes stared straight at her, and the low voice had a little joking malice. If the person surnamed Wang was not so cowardly, you would be happier now. Fragments cut such a fair face should be more beautiful and beautiful. Oh, Lu Jia responded with a smile, without showing any fear, and still looked very happy. Bo Wang's eyes condensed and he was speechless for a moment. Are you so happy to meet him? The auction was still in progress. Lu Jia thought about the order of appearance of the incense bracelet. It was almost time. She held her arm and tapped it gently, signaling Feng Zhen behind her to proceed as planned. Her sleeves brushed his shirt, and the foggy green and white blended in the dark, gentle and delicate, and Bo Wang lowered his eyes. Feng Zhen stood behind her and saw her movements. He raised the number plate in his hand and said loudly, 450,000. It is being auctioned. It is an ancient painting from 600 years ago. Everyone who knows it knows that it is worth more than 5 million yuan, but Feng Zhen prefers to call for 50,000 yuan. Everyone looks incredible. Ming Yi, who ridiculed the passing ayah before, immediately laughed. Although there is no minimum price for this auction, you asked for 450,000 yuan. Do you want to shabby this ancient painting? Or do you think you can pick up the leak here? Feng Zhen silently put down the number plate in his hand. Lu Jia sat quietly, and then she asked Feng Zhen to raise her cards for several valuable treasures. Each time, no more or less, only 450,000 yuan is raised. Once someone crushes this number, Feng Zhen will take down the sign. Next is a treasure specially cut by Mr. Feng for our angels to raise dinner, the best Qian incense Buddha bead bracelet. Gong Zihua's voice came from the stage. After Lu Jia's breath, the moment she waited for finally came. She is facing the direction of the auction table. A beam of light hit the treasure display area, and the bracelet hung quietly on the bracket. Each one was round and the size was the same. It's so far away, but Lord Jia seems to be able to smell the deep fragrance on it. Everyone knows that the best Qingao incense is very rare, and it is even more difficult to polish it into such a string of molded bracelets, and the value is difficult to estimate. Gong Zihua said, but Mr. Feng said that when he got the bracelet, he found a small defect on it, so the value of the bracelet was reduced. What's the flaw? Someone asked. There is a tooth mark on a Buddha bead, which may not have been kept by the previous collector. Gong Zihua wore white gloves and took out a magnifying glass to magnify the teeth marks on the incense bracelet. It was obviously a child's tooth mark. The tooth mark was very small, but it was bitten so hard that it was still clear. Lord Jia listened quietly. When she was 5 years old, the sixth brother cheated her grandfather's bracelet was the most delicious chocolate in the world. She rushed over, grabbed the bracelet and took a bite without hesitation. In fact, Jiang Shenxiang was not hard, but she used the wrong force and immediately broke off a front tooth, crying in pain. Finally, the sixth brother was beaten. Grandpa called the whole family back and took turns to coax her for most of the day. I thought that this memory had become blurred for a long time, but looking at the bracelet hanging there, the memory became particularly clear. She even remembers the snot blisters that the sixth brother blew when he was beaten to tears, and the third brother deliberately blackened his teeth to accompany her. If the value of good things has a defect, it will be greatly reduced, but it is a bracelet, and one of the defects can be removed. Everyone is secretly thinking about the value of this bracelet. 2 million is still casual. Of 450,000. Feng Zhen once again raised the number plate in his hand and shouted the price crisply. Come again. It's really a joke. Gong Zihua glanced at Lu Jia, and then glared at his friend. Ming Yi immediately understood and said loudly, I understand. It's not picking up a leak. It's obviously the gold owner who coaxed the canary, but is it a little stingy for you to coax 450,000 yuan? That's right, Lord Jia, you want to find a gold owner who can get it. He has been shouting 450,000 yuan, and there is also a whole one. Do you want to make us laugh? She is blind. It's good to find a fool. As soon as this was said, the whole banquet laughed. At first, they suppressed it restrainedly, and then it turned into laughter. Bo Wang leaned against the back of the chair, looked sideways at her, and hooked his lips indifferently, without any intention of helping her. Listen to the long-lasting laughter. Lord Jia seemed to be moved. She stood up angrily and groped for the number plate in Feng Zhe's hand, shouting a very neat number, 1 million. Hearing the words, Feng Zhenyi hurried to grab the number plate. Lord Jia grabbed the sign and didn't give it to him. Feng Zhen's face turned pale, angry and terrified. He quickly looked around to see if anyone had quickly raised the price and robbed the things. Bo Wang raised his eyebrows. Seeing this, Gong Zihua almost laughed out loud. This Lord Jia doesn't think that someone will look up to her for 1 million yuan, will she? After the defeat of the family, his vision narrowed into the mud. The old man behind her doesn't seem to have 1 million at all. Even if he does, he doesn't seem to want to coax her with more than 450,000 yuan. It's useless for her to call the sky here. Wait, if you don't have money to buy it after taking a picture, won't it be another lively joke to watch? Such thinking about it, Gong Zihua immediately picked up the microphone and said with a smile, Ji Aya is my old classmate. She has encountered a lot of difficulties over the years. Since she wants this string of Buddha beads so much, why don't you look at the thin noodles of our Gong family and cut love? Mr. Feng, what do you mean? The old man couldn't get used to the little family spirit of Lu Jia, but the Gong family opened his mouth, and he still sold his face in a cold voice. Since I took out this bracelet, I was ready to cut off love. I just hope that some people really understand and don't do anything bad about it. Everyone laughed again. Lord Jia didn't argue, and just held the number plate in her hand firmly. Feng Zhen was so anxious that he was sweating and wanted to grab it. Gong Zihua was also afraid that there would be no good drama to watch, so she picked up the small golden hammer and knocked it down. Bang! A hammer falls on the sound. Lord Jia stood there, his long eyelashes drooping slightly, and there was no special expression on his face, only the hand holding the sign trembled. It's successful. There was a little unexpected solution, but it really succeeded. Gong Zihua was afraid that the joke was not big enough, so she directly suspended the auction, turned on the headlights, and asked the relevant staff to walk towards Lu Jian with the best Chinao Buddha beads bracelets and contract certificates. In the bright light, Lord Jia's heart tightened, looking at the string of Buddha beads getting closer and closer to him. The staff bowed their heads and asked Miss Lu to sign and swipe the card. Thank you for your contribution to the children in the mountainous areas. The card reader came over. Everyone looked at this side with a funny look. I'm afraid it's going to stage a good scene of the canary beating the gold owner. Chapter 39. My husband is very good, and he is a person I like very much. Gong Zihua took the microphone, tilted his head and looked over with a smile. Lord Jia, you also have today. In those years, you were so beautiful at school, and now you have not lost all the faces that can be lost in Go's family. Lord Jia stood there calmly and said lightly, Uncle Feng, you sign. It was already a hammer, and Feng Zhen didn't pretend. He lowered his head with a smile, yes, miss. I didn't panic like when I just heard 1 million. He took the pen and signed his name on the contract without panic, and then took out the card and put it on the POS machine to swipe 1 million on the spot. The whole audience was silent. Gong Zuhua couldn't believe it and quickly walked down from the auction platform to check the authenticity of the account. Can the old man really get 1 million? Then what did you do just now? There was a zero and a whole land called 450,000. Is Lu Jia still so nervous when he calls the price? Ming Yi stood up and said strangely, Lord Jia, as a human being, you should talk about your conscience. Don't give up the old man who has been by your side again. I thought that these words could more or less arouse Feng Zhen's anger, but Feng Zhen was not annoyed at all. He carefully held the incense box containing the bracelet into Lu Jia's hand, and then said that this was the money earned by the young lady herself and had nothing to do with me. Lu Jia held the box in her arms, and her heart was beating faster. She brought back the most precious thing in her grandfather's life. After calming down a little, she slowly raised her face to face Gong Zihua, took 2 steps forward, leaned in front of the person, and smiled. I really don't have much money. Thank you, Mr. Gong, for adding 300,000 ye to me and letting everyone cut off their love. Otherwise, how can I get it? Gong Zihua's face was completely stiff, and then she realized that you had been calculating this string of bracelets from the beginning. She was played with. When she was in the tea house, Lord Jia was thinking about this bracelet. First, he hid 300,000 ye with tea, and then deliberately told her to misunderstand that this old man was a rich man. He kept shouting 450,000 ye to make everyone think that they only had this little money, and even her mentality was optimistic about the play. So, Lord Jia took 1 million yuan and lightly took away the best Qian incense Buddha bead bracelet worth at least 2 million yuan. How could it be? I'm giving love. Lord Jia smiled calmly, holding the box with one hand and slowly erecting it with the other hand, revealing the ring on the ring finger. By the way, Uncle Feng is really just my elder. Classmate Gong, you misunderstood. Then she explained slowly. The afterglow brushed past the man with a strong sense of existence next to him. Lord Zaya cleared her throat and said, I'm married. My husband is very good, and he is my favorite person very much. People like to listen to it well. I hope Bo Wang won't trouble her because of tonight's gossip. Bo Wang has been sitting lazily in his seat, with his slender fingers tapping the edge of the table. Hearing the words, his movements stopped, and his eyes became deep. Does this woman want to carry him out and take the opportunity to identify herself as the young grandmother of the Bo family? This level of identity can make her catch more than a string of bracelets. Gong Zihua was so angry that her head was a little dizzy at this time. Hearing this, she couldn't help gritting her teeth and said, I don't know which famous young master your husband is. Do I recognize it? You don't know. I just want to tell you this. It's almost enough. I cherish my current marriage. You spread rumors again. Lord Jia smiled faintly and looked cold. I will definitely pursue it to the end. Obviously, she was a dejected man with nothing, but at this moment, Gong Zihua was intimidated by her coldness and did not recover for a while. It was not made public. Bo Wang put the tip of his tongue on his cheek, picked up the red wine on the table and took a sip. His eyes were gloomy. This woman. If it weren't for the bigger scheme, she would really love blindly. Lord Jia took the box and bent down to say goodbye to everyone. When her face approached Bo Wang's ear, she whispered, Bo Wang, I'll go first. After saying that, she straightened up and walked out with satisfaction. A group of people were pushed in place, and Gong Zihua was even more confused. Seeing that she left like this, he reacted and shouted to stop her for me. Do you want to leave like this after squaddling money and bracelets? It's impossible. What if Gong Zihua is a fool? Bang. Bo Wang put down the wineglass, got up lazily, picked up his suit jacket and walked out. He brushed directly from Lu Jia, bringing a faint fragrance of wood. Brother Wang is leaving now? Ji Jing was stunned. He hadn't taken the last finale treasure as a birthday present for him. The bodyguards of the Gong family came forward from the surroundings, which was really troublesome. Lord Jia lowered her eyes, resolutely pulled away her cane and walked out behind Bo Wang, shouting, Wait a minute, Bo Wang has left the door. Lord Jia asked Feng Zhen to accompany him reluctantly. Seeing this, the bodyguards looked at each other and didn't dare to chase. They turned to look at Gong Zihua. Gong Zihua's face was pale. Is she crazy? Go to chase Bo Wang? Ming Yi looked over in disbelief. Wouldn't she think that Bo Wang would stand up for her? When Gong Zihua heard this, she smiled very coldly. Maybe she thought that Bo Wang Jichan had just done it for her. Oh, my god, what kind of is this? He can think so. Someone exclaimed. They didn't dare to talk to Bo Wang casually. How dare she catch up? Then let's take a look and see how capable our old classmate is. Gong Zihua said word by word, raised her feet and walked out. Of course, the parents of the Gong family were not happy that their daughter was too promiscuous, but there were too many old classmates who couldn't resist Gong Zihua. A group of people went out in a crowd, and many people went out to watch the fun. The whole hall was much more empty in an instant. Lord Jia was helped by Feng Zhen and hurried out of Go's house, and Bo Wang had already disappeared. She was not disappointed. Anyway, she just asked him out of Gore's house, and she didn't really want to find him. She didn't worry about what Gong Zihua would do to her in front of a group of upper-class people, but she didn't have to talk nonsense when she stayed. The bracelet has been obtained, so there is no need to have any more intersection with this group of people. The car is ready. Feng Zhen put away his mobile phone. Lu Jia held the box tightly in her arms. The street lamp was above her head, and the light was dim. She looked down at her shadow and bent the corners of her mouth. That's great. I collected another Lu Jia temperature. The mobile phone vibrated, and Lu Jia took out the phone and picked it up. Fusheng, I bought it, 1 million. Her voice is filled with pleasure. Hearing her words, Jiang Fusheng was so excited that his voice was broken on the phone. Did he really buy a bracelet with 1 million yuan? Zia, you are so great. You are so handsome. Did you jump up? Lu Jia smiled. Can you not jump? I thought Gong Zihua would definitely raise the price and not let you shoot in order to hit you. Great, it's worthy that I made my birthday wish in advance. Chapter 40. Follow him back to his private residence. Gong Zihua wanted to hit her, but she reversed her psychological state. Thank you, Fusheng, for making a birthday wish for me in advance. Lu Jia said, and a dark luxury car drove past her eyes, leaving some unpleasant exhaust. She subconsciously took a step back and said with a smile at her mobile phone, I always remember my birthday. The luxury car that had been driven away suddenly turned back and stopped in front of her. Lu Jian was stunned, lowered his eyes and expressionless, only holding the box in his arms tighter. The dim light brushed her long skirt. The window of the car in the back seat was slowly pressed. Bo Wang sat inside and stared at her thoughtfully. His eyes swept over the box in her arms, and his voice showed a touch of puzzling depression. The bones that had been trampled on all night were for this thing. She nodded. Didn't he hear it inside? Why did he still ask? Afraid that he would misunderstand the source of his money, Lu Jia gently added that I opened a tea house, and the income was not bad. Have you thrown all your money into it? Bo Wang asked again. It's lucky to be able to buy it for 1 million yuan. Bo Wang looked at the happiness on her lips, and his dark eyes became deeper and deeper. After a long time, he opened his mouth coldly and got into the car. What? Lu Jia was a little confused. Young grandma, I'll help you. The driver got out of the car with great eyesight, helped Lu Jia around the car, respectfully opened the door for her, and invited her to get into the car. Miss. Feng Zhen caught up worriedly and slapped directly on the glass of the car. Lu Jia gave him a reassuring look, and then looked at Bo Wang with his eyes. Where are we going? Go back to bed. Bo Wang said and leaned back, raised his arms, closed his eyes and pretended to sleep, and stopped paying attention to her. The car drove forward across the lights. A group of people in the gate of the Gong family looked at the car that drove away and were all stunned. There were only a few birdsong left in the quiet courtyard. Did she really get into Bo Wang's car? Ming Yi couldn't believe the picture he saw. It seems that your old classmate is not simple. Some older people said. Gong Zihua's face turned blue and green and blue. What's wrong with this? It's just a human being a play. In a few days, she lay in the hospital like those little stars. That's what I said, but the bodyguards of the Gong family didn't dare to chase them out. Gong Zihua was so angry that she tore off a large area of the leaves on the tree beside her. The car drove through the bustling and strange city, silently passing through one block after another. Lu Jia gradually found that the car was not heading for Xinshan, but as a blind person, she couldn't say. She turned her eyes to the man beside her. The light outside the window flashed over his sleeping face, leaving traces of different shades, like the film being pulled, sometimes blurred and sometimes clear. What can you see me with your blind eyes? Bo Wang suddenly made a sound, but he didn't open his eyes, but he was sure that she was facing himself. I won't watch it. Lu Jia turned around silently and put down the window. Looking out along the flower beds along the road, there is an endless water in the distance. A glowing cruise ship is sailing from east to west on the water. And there are still several ships parked on the shore. Is it? The wind here is so special. Where have we been? She pretended to ask casually. The driver glanced at Bo Wang from the rearview mirror. Seeing that he didn't frown, he whispered. We came to White Pigeon Road, and the Qingjiang River was next to it. Grandma, you smelled the river breeze and felt special. Qingjiang. Lu Jia repeated these two words and was a little dazed. There are 8 major regions and 48 states in the country, with the Qingjiang River in the middle across the whole country. People usually call the south of the Qingjiang River the south of the Yangtze River, and the north of the Qingjiang River the north of the river. After crossing this clear river, you will arrive at Jiangnan. For the first time in 5 years, Lu Jia found that she was so close to home that she was only separated by a river. She put down the window completely, leaned her head over, and quietly looked at the Qingjiang River in the distance, letting the night wind blow her hair messy and her eyes gradually turn red. I don't know when she can go back. After a long time, Qingjiang disappeared from her sight. The car turned into the gate of a luxurious and high-end community, and the security guards who bowed down along the way could form several football teams. Dijiang Court. There is no one in the most expensive community in Jiangbei. Lord Jia guessed that Bo Wang took her to his private residence, but why? The car drove into the towering building and parked in a special car elevator. The driver took out a card and waved it out. The elevator went up and stopped on the 44th floor of the top floor. The elevator door slowly opened, and the driver drove the car directly to the indoor garden, then got out of the car and said respectfully, "Young master, then I'll go first." After saying that, he left. In the car, surrounded by green plants, Lord Jia was confused and could only make a sound. "Don't we go back to Shenshan?" Bo Wang was rarely sleepy in the car. Hearing her voice, he opened his eyes and frowned with some displeasure. After a moment's pause, he reached out and pushed the car door in a low voice. He came in and talked. "What are you talking about?" Lord Jia frowned, got out of the car with the incense box in her arms, opened her cane and followed his footsteps forward. Bo Wang went straight into the automatically opened glass door, and wherever he passed, the light turned on automatically. Inside is a super large flat floor, a slightly curved living room as big as a court, with a very thick round column in the center and a circle of leather seats around it. In addition, there are no cabinets, sofas, tables and chairs around, only glass. Windows that look like picture scrolls and the floor that can be identified by light. Empty and cold. Lord Jia followed in, stopped after walking for a while, and stood quietly in place. Bo Wang went to the open kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and stood there against the flow table to drink water. His dark eyes looked straight at her, not knowing what he was thinking. Lord Jia is uncomfortable to be seen, but she can only be seen. Bo Wang stared at her, raised his head and drank all the water in the cup. The protruding throat knot rolled up and down, and the low voice seemed a little ambiguous in the silent night. After drinking, Bo Wang casually put the square cup in his hand on the flow table. With a turn of his fingertips, the square cup rotated quickly, printing dazzling light spots on the table. The next second, he strode towards her, grabbed her hand and walked in. The cane fell to the ground. "Bo Wang, where are you going to take me?" Lord Jia followed him passively without showing any dissatisfaction. Bang! Bo Wang took her into a black and grey bedroom and kicked her door. In the dark, a colder temperature than outside came towards her. He reached out and pressed the back of her neck and kissed her. The kiss was urgent and earnest. He bit open her lips and rushed in, and the wet and hot touch went straight to her nerve endings. Chapter 41. Don't you like me all the time? Why? I'm scared to death. Lord Jia's whole body was tense, and she subconsciously wanted to push him, but she held back very quickly. Bo Wang was ridiculous on her lips, biting and sucking, and his breathing became more and more hoarse. He pulled the collar and pushed her to the bed while kissing. Lord Jia hugged the incense box in his arms in a panic. She was pushed down on the cold and soft quilt. Bo Wang bore her, bullied her body, bit her chin, swam her thin lips to her slender neck, and pulled her skirt with one hand. He won't want to. Lord Jia calmed down as soon as possible. She put the box aside, climbed his hands on his shoulders, leaned over and kissed his face, kissed him very lightly, and then quickly pushed him away. "No, Bo Wang." Bo Wang's action. In the dark, he stood up and lowered his eyes to her white little face. The restrained desire in his eyes made him look extra gloomy. "Lord Jia, I didn't ask you if you wanted it. I'm pregnant with your child. It's only less than 2 months, and it's easy to be in danger," she said in a soft voice. "But I want to do it today." His voice is hoarse and quite unreasonable. "Doesn't he like me? Why, I'm afraid of death." Lord Jia stretched out her arms around his neck, and her slender fingers were buried in it. He rubbed his hair gently. "If it makes you particularly happy, of course I am willing to give everything for you, but I know it's not like that." Bo Wang leaned on top of her and stared at her inquiringly, trying to take away her messy hand, but the soft finger abdomen pressed on his head little by little, which was inexplicably comfortable. She wrapped her arms around him, and the fragrance on her arm lingered on the tip of his nose, which made him a little upset. He pressed it secretly and sneered. "You, a blind man, still know if I'm happy or not. Although I can't see it, I can feel it." She looked at him in a dazed eye, and her voice was gentle. "You have always hated me and don't believe me. How can you be happy because of kissing me? Are you thinking too much? I'm just too lazy to find another woman." Bo Wang loosened her neckline, stared at her small collarbone, and hooked her lips playfully. "There was no conflict between hating you and getting pleasure from you. Don't be lazy. Go find it." Lord Jia thought to herself, but her expression became gloomy. For a long time, she smiled bitterly. "If I were smart enough, should I promise you now, then our relationship would be one step closer." Bo Wang stared at her without saying anything, and his eyes were unfathomable. "But no, Bo Wang, I hope you can find someone you really like and live a happy life, instead of facing a woman you don't like for a moment of pleasure. That will only make you feel more lonely afterwards, and you will even hate me more. I don't want to do that." Her voice is bitter, affectionate and humble, which makes me numb. After saying that, Lord Jia sat up from the quilt, reached out and touched the incense box in her arms. She said softly, I'll go first. Have a good rest. Before she got out of bed, he was fished back by Bo Wang again. Bo Wang put one hand around her from behind and lowered his head to her ear ambiguously, but his voice was a little dissatisfied. Did I say, let you go? Lord Jia's body is almost stiff. I'm just a blind man. You deserve a better person. It doesn't matter. It's the same whether the light is turned off. Bo Wang said and lowered his head to kiss her face. Can't you escape? Lord Jia's body trembled a little, and her breathing became chaotic, which pleased Bo Wang. She listened to him laugh in the dark, and a big palm swam around her waist. The sudden vibration of the mobile phone suddenly pierced the darkness. Lord Jia listened to Bo Wang's breathing. He stopped, but his chin rested on her shoulder and did not answer the phone. He just stayed in the dark. The person on the other end of the phone was very patient, and the mobile phone vibrated over and over again. Finally, when the fourth time was shaken, Bo Wang picked up the phone. The dim light of the screen printed on his jawline. Lord Jia was almost sitting in Bo Wang's arms, listening to a man's voice from his mobile phone. You can solve the Nanyang Road mentioned last time. The mature and heavy voice should be the voice of a middle-aged person. Bo Wang still hugged her. Hearing the words, he pinched her waist and said carelessly, sleeping with a woman, I don't want to go. Lord Jia wanted to bite him to death. Of course you don't have to go. The man on the phone's voice suddenly called, as long as you don't squander your mother's inheritance. This. The caller is Bo Wang's father and Bo Zhengrong, the supreme decision-maker of the Bo Consortium. Bo Wang hung up the phone directly, and his face in the dark was gloomy. For a long time, he let go of Lord Jia and stood up. Lord Jia secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that he was going to go, but she escaped. Bang! Bo Wang turned on the light casually. Suddenly the light that came was a little harsh. He pressed one hand against the wall, adapted for a while, and looked down at the woman sitting on the bed. She lowered her eyes and couldn't feel the light at all. Her expression was gloomy. Only her lips and messy neckline proved the absurdity that she almost went on fire just now. She didn't know how to pull her collar and look good at being bullied. Bo Wang licked his lips and suddenly didn't want to go out. His eyes fell on the incense box she was tightly guarding, and he walked over to get it. Lord Jia took a tight breath and subconsciously held the box tightly, but Bo Wang was much stronger than hers, and he grabbed it at once. What else is he going to do? Bo Wang opened the box and took out the Buddha beads bracelet from it. He twisted the beads one by one, which was very similar to the posture of chanting Buddha, but his face did not have half of the sincerity that the Buddha should have. Buddha beads? He twisted the beads and asked her. Lord Jia was nervous but didn't dare to show it. She could only nod. Yes, it was a Buddha bead. She specially asked Master Porjun Temple to open the light. Bo Wangxiao, I think you are so precious that you thought it was the master's sacrifice, but it turned out to be over the light. Yes, it's not a treasure. Give it back to her. Lord Jia paid attention to his movements uneasily, fearing that he would tear off the bracelet in the next second. She pursed her lips and said, in fact, this bracelet was a love letter given to my grandfather by my grandmother. My grandfather wore it all his life, so it was very important to me. It was hard for me to take a picture of. A love letter? Bo Wang stared at her and interrupted her. You are very bold. He deserves a better person in every word. He didn't dare to think about it and didn't dare to be greedy. As a result, he gave him the love letter of the older generation, and his intention was obvious. What? Lord Jia was a little surprised. What does this have to do with her boldness? Bo Wang played with it for a while. He didn't know what came to his mind. He put the Buddha beads on his hand and said kindly, yes, if I can come back alive tonight, it means that your Buddha beads are little useful, and I will take your bracelet. After saying that, Bo Wang turned around and walked out without stopping. Lord Jia sat on the bed alone in a mess. Have you received it? Received chapter 42. Bo Wang came back full of blood. Why did he take the Buddha beads bracelet she spent so much money to take? Still a graceful tone. When did she say she would send him off? That's her grandfather's stuff. Lord Jia grabbed the empty box and chased it out. She didn't dare to run. She could only grope the wall and walk carefully step by step. When she walked to the living room, through the glass door, an orange sports car in the garden had disappeared. Stomachache, so angry that my stomach hurts. Lord Jia looked at the empty box in her hand and was very depressed. Suddenly, there was a jingle at the door. She looked over, and the screen automatically lit up, and Ji Jing's face appeared in the camera. He took 2 steps back and clapped an exquisite gift box in his hand. Brother Wang, look, the most valuable treasure of the Gong family tonight, the 1,000-year-old sword, stained with human blood. I think it is especially in line with your temperament. Lord Jia didn't make a sound. Ji Jing waited there for a while and didn't hear the response. He couldn't help sighing. Brother Wang, I know you must haven't slept yet. Let me in. It makes sense to receive the birthday gift on the same day. Oh, I'm going, Brother Wang's car. Ji Jing suddenly turned his head. He probably saw the car that Bo Wang drove out. He had a headache and shouted, it's a go for nothing. After a while, Ji Ying left, and the screen automatically darkened. Is today Bo Wang's birthday? Lord Jia suddenly remembered that on the road in front of Gore's house, she and Jiang Foshan called about her birthday, and Bo Wang's car drove over and back. Wouldn't he only hear the second half of the sentence, thinking that she was willing to be insulted all night to take a picture of the Buddha bead bracelet just to give it to him? Absolutely. What is this called, oolong? Lord Jia put away the empty box in annoyance, walked out of the glass door, and walked into the elevator. To account the existence of surveillance, she groped to press the first floor. Face recognition is not possible. Please swipe your card if necessary. The electronic sound of the machine sounded in the elevator. She can't go out yet. Lord Jia could only walk out of the elevator and touch the wall to open the door of the safe stairwell. As a result, even the door had to be swiped. Without the Bo Wang belt, she can't even go down. Lord Jia found a south-facing terrace to stay. The terrace was empty, with only a lounge chair. She stood on the edge of the terrace with her hands casually on the glass railing. The quiet city crawled at her feet in the middle of night, and the Qingqiang River was like a ribbon dotted with light spots across her eyes. The water was quiet and sparkling. Further ahead, it is the south of the Yangtze River. The distant lights of thousands of families are like stars reflected in the sky, so beautiful and unreattainable. Lord Jia couldn't help stretching out her hand, opening her palm in the air, and slowly closing her fingers, as if she could hold the lights from the south of the Qingqiang River and the wind blowing from the south of the Yangtze River. After the fire, Uncle Feng took her to her hometown in Tianbei, and she never went back. In the past, the traffic was unfavorable. It took a long time to float on the ferry from Jiangbei to Jiangnan just by crossing the river. Now there is a cross-river bridge and high-speed rail planes. I don't know how long it will take to get back. It should be very fast, right? The old house of the Luo family is regarded as an unlucky house. It has not been sold over the years, and I don't know what it has become now. The small trees planted with my parents should grow very tall, and there should be a lot of weeds. The flowers planted by the third aunt are probably growing randomly, and the small stone bridge in the back pavilion. The fourth brother and the sixth brother have liked to jump on it since they were young, and they all jumped out of the cracks. I don't know if they are broken now. Lord Jia leaned against the terrace and stared into the distance quietly, and her smiling eyes gradually turned red. Feng Zhen and Jiang Foshan both asked her a question. Have you felt bitter in the past 5 years? Is it bitter? In fact, she doesn't think so. Compared with those who are struggling on the line of food and clothing, she has enjoyed 15 years of glory, wealth and thousands of favors. Once she was depressed, Uncle Fen did not leave her. Now, she is the young grandmother of the Bo family, who has food and clothing. She is not bitter. She just thinks it is too difficult to go from luxury to thrift. So she must go back and take everything that belongs to the Luo family back to the most luxurious place for her. She is going back to Jiangnan City, where she will spend her whole life. Probably because of her pregnancy, Lord Jia's waist was sore when she stood. She took 2 steps back and lay down on the lounge chair. Lying in this place closer to home, she feels safe. Sleepiness came, and Lord Jia even had a dream. In the dream, she was sitting on the stone railing at home in the south of the Yangtze River, with her 2 small feet curled up, watching the little fish swim through the clear stream under her feet. There was a movement. Lord Jia woke up in a daze, reached out and touched her face, and touched the already cold tears. Bang! The movement came again. Bo Wang is back. Her Buddha bead bracelet. Lord Jia glanced at the time, and it was already 3 o'clock in the morning. She quickly got up from the lounge chair and walked to the living room. As soon as she entered the living room, she saw Bo Wang standing outside against the glass door, and her figure was a little embarrassed. The door opened automatically, and Bo Wang stumbled in, as if he was drunk. As the light turned on, Lord Jia saw clearly that his face was covered with blood, his face was pale, and even his lips lost color. The black shirt, which was still good when I went out, now had several mouths that seemed to be cut by a knife, and the clothes were dark red under the light. He lowered his hand, and the blood oozed out of his cuffs, dripping down his fingertips, and hit the ground one by one. The Buddha beads on his wrist are stained with blood. Lord Jia looked at the shocking picture in front of him and didn't know what to say for a moment. Bo Wang turned around and staggered to the direction of the flow platform. He reached out and picked up the square cup to receive water. Regardless of the blood on his hands, he raised his head and drank very quickly. The water flowed down his neck and fell into his collar. Bo Wang, are you back? Lord Jia made a sound. Bo Wang's eyes condensed, as if he didn't expect that she hadn't left yet. He turned to look at her, and there was a quiet figure, as if he had been waiting for him for a long time. Come here, he said, his voice was a little hoarse. Hearing the words, Lord Jia walked towards him. Looking at her cautious look, Bo Wang smiled. There is nothing to stop you. Go faster. Lord Jia accelerated her pace to him. Bo Wang thought she was slow and pulled her into his arms, but he couldn't stand and swayed. A strong smell of blood came to my face. Lord Jia held his waist and frowned. Are you hurt? Bo Wang put his hand on her shoulder and looked down at her. There was a lot of blood on her face. What are you waiting for? Waiting for me to die or waiting for me to come back? Of course, wait for you to come back. If he doesn't come back, how can she go out? Lord Jia tried her best to hold him up. It was hard to speak. Can you stand firmer? I'll call an ambulance. How could he be hurt like this? I asked him on the phone to solve it, and that's how it was solved. Don't call me. You bandage it for me. Bo Wang said, and his thin lips almost pressed against her forehead. I can't even see how to bandage you. Lord Jia frowned and said, pulling his hand on his shoulder with one hand and barely carrying his tall figure. Then I won't do it. Bo Wang said indifferently, I'm going to take a shower. After saying that, he let go of her hand and staggered in, bleeding all the way. This amount of bleeding. Did you? Lord Jia frowned and said, pulling his hand on his shoulder with one hand and barely carrying his tall figure. Then I won't do it. Bo Wang said indifferently, I'm going to take a shower. After saying that, he let go of her hand and staggered in, bleeding all the way. This amount of bleeding. I'm afraid she won't have as much as him in the future. Chapter 43. I'm seriously injured, and you're pregnant. It's just right. Let's go to Bliss. Lord Jia was really afraid that he would die in front of her. When the police visited her with a trauma, she couldn't tell clearly. After thinking about it, she followed. Bo Wang probably really had no strength. After entering the bathroom, he was directly turned over and poured into the bathtub. The milky white wall of the tank was wiped with blood. At first glance, it looked like a murder scene. He got up to get the shower. Lord Jia hurried over and groped to grab his arm. I'll bandage you. Where is your medical box? Behind you. Bo Wangda. Lord Jia turned around and pretended to be blind for a long time. Finally, she threw out the medical box. Looking back, Bo Wang was lying in the bathtub and looking at her. She pretended not to know, squatted down to open the box, took out the gauze, and asked, you have to tell me the location of the wound, and I'll clean up the blood for you first. Hearing the words, Bo Wang raised the master's shower head and poured it down on his face. Soon, he poured himself through, and the messy water flowed down his pale face. His whole body was lying wet inside, his shirt was all attached to his body, and his chest was up and down with heavy breathing. I have to say that he is still very sexy when he is dying. Seeing that it was almost poured, Bo Wang tore off the shirt on his body, revealing several cuts on his body. They were dark and shallow, and the deep parts were obviously divided into flesh, which looked very scary. Bring the potion on the far right. Bo Wang threw the shower and ordered her. Lord Jia immediately handed over the potion and unscrewed the bottle cap by the way. Bo Wang took his own. The wound was drenched, and he was merciless to himself like a livestock, and his face was so pale that he couldn't stop. After pouring the whole bottle, he threw the bottle casually and poured it into the bathtub and closed his eyes, as if he was going to sleep. He won't be ready to end it like this, will he? Lord Jia had no choice but to take out the gauze. Where are your wounds? I'll bandage you. I won't pack it, please. Bo Wang closed his eyes and said he was too lazy to get up. Lord Jia thought for a while, stood up with the gauze and touched his hand on the edge of the bathtub. Bo Wang opened his eyes and looked sideways at her hand that was only swimming in her arms. She bent down, and the tips of her hair swayed in front of him intentionally or unintentionally. The fragrance was flirting, which made his mouth dry. Suddenly, he breathed in pain. Law, Jie, Aya. Bo Wang stared at her and pressed hard on the hand of his wound. Excuse me. Lord Jia apologized and pressed on his wound. After finding the right position, she pulled open the gauze and wrapped it to help bandage it. With this successful case, Lord Jia then concocted and touched him randomly. Bo Wang wanted to pull her into the bathtub several times, but the next second, she held his wound hard again. The pain made him want to roll his eyes and completely rest his mind. After bandaging all the wounds, there is a thin layer of sweat on Lord Jia's head. Are there any other wounds? It's gone on me. Bo Wang slowly sat up from the bathtub, reached out to pinch her chin, and said coldly, but I wanted to stroke twice on you to let you know how painful it was to press. Sorry, I can't see it. I can only find the location of the wound like this. She sincerely apologized. Bo Wang picked up the scissors she had just used to cut gauze, put the tip of the blade on her skin and slowly slid down, as if she was touching it. There was a joke in his eyes. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. One person said that the matter was over. But I was hurt so much by you. How can I go there like this? Isn't it that I like it so much that I can't help it? Then come and get hurt with me, okay? He said in an almost spoiled tone, holding the scissors down hard. Pervert. It was sunny and the rain stopped. After the bandage, he was fine again. Lord Jia didn't move. She felt the tip of the scissors pressed against her face little by little. When it was about to pierce, she gave way to the side and stood up and turned around carefully. Bo Wang looked at the bloodless scissors and sighed regretfully. Lord Jia touched the wall and took off a bathrobe, walked back to the bathtub, bent down to put it on for him. Get up quickly, don't catch a cold. The bathrobe was put down, and it seemed to be warm all of a sudden. Bo Wang's eyes fixed, after throwing the scissors for a long time, taking off the wet trousers, and standing up from the bathtub. You have nothing else to say. When he came back with such an injury, she didn't care whether he was going to kill or set fire. He is really unscrupulous in front of the blind. Lord Jia stood in front of him, stretched out her hand to tighten the bathrobe for him, tied the belt together, and then opened her mouth calmly and softly. Don't get hurt again in the future. Even if I can hurt you, isn't your pain still on your own? She didn't spy on other people's secret interests. Bo Wang looked down at her and lost his voice for a moment. It's getting late. Go back to bed. Lord Jia said lightly, carrying one of his arms and walking out like just now, for fear of exposing that she deliberately walked crookedly and led the person to the wall. Bo Wang didn't say a word and let her hit him. He seemed to be insulated by pain. When he just pressed his wound to death, he only took a slight breath and didn't even frown. Lord Jia helped him into the room, hugged his shoulder and let him lie down on the bed. He picked up the quilt and covered him, and his eyes crossed the Buddha bead bracelet on his wrist. The strong bloody smell just now seems to have been removed by the Buddha beads, leaving only the gentle and elegant aroma of deep fragrance. Fortunately, the Buddha beads are fine. You must find a chance to bring back the bracelet. Can you give me permission to leave? She stood by the bed and made a sound. At the end, she said, I'm afraid that I'll stay here and disturb your rest, but if you don't mind me disturbing you. Before she finished speaking, Bo Wang pulled her down and she fell into his arms. The pain made his chest fluctuate greatly. He didn't care. He just reached out and hugged her. He didn't have much strength to tell her what to do and continue. Be your father. Lord Jia struggled in his arms. No, you are too seriously injured. Bo Wang pressed his hand into her hair, kissed her forehead in a bad state, smiled in a low voice, and smiled pale. I was seriously injured, and you were pregnant. Just in time, let's go to Bliss. If you want to go to him, she won't go. She struggled to open his hand again. Bo Wang still wanted to hug her, but she was really weak and only grabbed her skirt a few times. After thinking about it, Lord Jia lowered her head and kissed the corner of his eyes, and said softly, No, I want you to be good. Even if I can die, you have to live well. Bo Wang half closed his eyes. He didn't know whether her words touched him or was too tired. He fell back to the bed with his hands and didn't pull her anymore. Chapter 44 Mrs. Bo is here. There is a card at the door. Get out of here, he said. Okay, then have a good rest. Lord Jia turned around and left, and before closing the door reluctantly, he looked at the Buddha bead bracelet and followed the handstring up. Bo Wang was lying on the bed alone, his face so white that there was not even a little blood color. He scribbly treated the wound like this. I don't know if he could survive. It seems that he really doesn't care whether he is alive or dead. Happy birthday, Bo Wang, she whispered and closed the door. Bo Wang, who was lying on the bed, suddenly opened his eyes. His dark eyes were like a pool of stagnant water and a bottomless abyss. The sun is shining high and the tea house stands quietly in the suburbs, with a faint fragrance of tea inside and outside the door. Lord Jia sat by the window on the second floor, boringly opening and closing the empty incense box in front of her, opening and closing. Miss Feng Jun came over with a solemn face. Just now, several customers who ordered tea with us unsubscribed. Lord Jia didn't have any surprises. Gong Zuhua wanted to see my good play, but she didn't watch it. Of course, she would mess with me. Isn't Gong Zuhua still studying? If you don't read, your old classmates stare at you every day, and your heart and eyes are too small. Feng Jun said angrily. It's just a tea house. It won't take a few days for Miss Gong to kill us. Besides, she doesn't have to do it herself, and her subordinates will do it for her. Lord Jia closed the box and said with a smile, she just needs to come out and make a joke when the tea house closes. What should we do? Can we just sit and wait for death? Feng Jun was very worried. Did he dump the young lady's face when he left that night? He also specially told the other party that he had calculated the other party. It's the same if you don't throw it. When she was in school, Gong Zihua was not happy to see her. Now she has not been ridiculed, and she has taken away a bracelet worth at least 2 million yuan with 1 million yuan. She just rushed here. She said that if she didn't say anything, Gong Zihua would beat her. Lord Jia stood up, comforting Feng Jun's heart. Uncle Feng, don't worry, his Gong family is not the only one in Jiangbei City, and not all the rich people deal with the Gong family. What the young lady means is, find someone to build momentum for us. She glanced at the time. Mrs. Yi made an appointment to have tea today, and it should be almost there. The old lady of the Ji family. No, the Ji family and the Gong family have a good relationship. Didn't Ji Jing, the young master of the Ji family, go there that night? Feng Jun was puzzled. How could the Ji family go against the Gong family for a small tea house? Lord Jia explained that the relationship between the Ji family and the Gong family was good, but the relationship between the old ladies of the two families was not the same. When she was young, she was very jealous of a man. Although both of them later married someone else, the secret competition has never stopped. Compared with now, it has nothing to do with men and has become an instinct, never dying. Feng Jun didn't understand, but he was shocked. How did you know? Uncle Feng, you forgot that my grandmother is also a gossip person. When she mentioned her grandmother, Lord Jia couldn't help laughing. Grandma usually looks at a person who is particularly elegant and scholarly, but she has collected all the gossip of Jiangnan and Jiangbei. There was a sound of parking outside the window. Knowing that Mrs. Ji was coming, Lord Jia raised her feet and walked out. Feng Zhen felt a little emotional, and only when he mentioned his family would the young lady be so happy. Lord Jia greeted him out with a smile. As soon as he went out, he found that not only the old lady of the Ji family came, but also the old lady of the Bo family Ding Yujing. I heard that the old lady of the Gong family invited you 3 times, but you didn't go to the angel fundraising dinner. The old lady of the Ji family is old and has a loud voice. She pulled Ding Yujin and laughed happily. Ding Yujin patted her hand and smiled helplessly. That's not at you. I'm going. You old woman is so annoying. Oh, I can't get used to her. In modern terms, it's green tea. When I was young, it was small green tea, and when I was old, it was old green tea. Mrs. Ji was straightforward and spoke without any concealment. Together, these two are still best friends. Lord Jia suddenly remembered that at her wedding with Bo Wang, the guests invited by Ding Yujin were all close to him, and most of them were older elders. Now that she thought about it, it seemed that Mrs. Ji was one of them. However, at that time, the wedding was in a hurry. She didn't remember much, and Mrs. Ji didn't remember her face. No one recognized anyone when they met in the tea house before. Hello, Mrs. Ji. Lord Jia greeted them out and bowed their heads respectfully. Hello, Mrs. Bo. How do you know that she is the old lady of the Bo family? Mrs. Ji was a little surprised, and then she reacted and said with a smile, look at my memory. This tea house was recommended to me by Ji Jing. He said that your Bo family is the tea of this house, and the little boss must have heard your voice. Lord Jia stood there with a smile. Ding Yujin took a deep look at Lord Jia. Unexpectedly, he said for a long time, yes, the tea here is used at home. I didn't mean to expose her. 2 of you, please go inside. Lord Jia smiled and welcomed the 2 into the antique box and began to make tea. In order not to see the problem of blindness, the focal length of her eyes was not on the tea, but she still did every process perfectly. This little boss is very powerful. Even if she is blind, the tea she makes is different. Mrs. Ji appreciates Lord Jia very much. I wanted to invite her to work at home, but she refused and wanted to start her own business, so I had to run here again and again. No, I'm not good enough, and I still want to hone again. Lord Jia said modestly. After the tea was brewed, Feng Zhen helped deliver the tea to the 2 old ladies and sighed at the right time. No, it's different. When the tea house closes in a few days, our little boss has nowhere to go. I don't know if Mrs. Ji will still accept it. When she was old, she thought she didn't listen to the gossip. When Mrs. Ji heard the words, she immediately asked, open it well, why close the door? Ding Yujin sat at the table, glanced at Lord Jia and said nothing. He picked up the teacup in front of him and took a sip, with a trace of surprise on his face. This tea is really good. Without years of refinement, I can't cook this taste. Feng Zhen stood aside and told how Jia on the road offended Miss Gong at the angel fundraising dinner. Mrs. Ji listened heavily and put down the teacup. Who is it? Ding Yujin was almost choked by her shout, and he couldn't help but say, a handful of old people, steady focus. It's really a nest of old green tea and small green tea. Watching people play tricks on people? What's the energy of Gao Gao? Mrs. Ji is angry. No, I can't even drink any more tea. Little boss, don't worry, this business can't be bad for you. Didn't you say last time that you wanted to cooperate with our auction house? I promised. The goal has been achieved. Lord Jia stood up and said gratefully. Thank you, Mrs. Ji, I will do things well and never embarrass you. Chapter 45. I can't be the young grandmother of the Bo family for the rest of my life, can I? Well, young people must have the fighting spirit that is not afraid of collapse. Mrs. Ji is very satisfied. Seeing this, Ding Yujin couldn't help shaking his head and said to his best friend, you are too hasty. Your auction house is not an ordinary product. What if I cooperate with a small tea house and make a business pool? Don't worry, she understands. Mrs. Ji leaned against Ding Yujin's ear and whispered, last time my second daughter-in-law got a precious vase and asked me to slap her eyes, so I was watching it here. I almost lost my eye, but she reminded me tactfully and mentioned an old illusion to me, and I concluded that it was a high imitation. At first glance, this child knows the doorway. He knows so much at such a young age. I'm afraid he has been used to it since he was a child. It's just that last time I felt that her tea house was too small, she was young, and she had not experienced much in business, so I didn't boldly agree. But now this matter involves the Gong family, and she is willing to do it if she can make the old lady angry. Ding Yujin looked at Lord Jia more unexpectedly. Her old best friend has always been high-sighted, but she never praises people easily. This child is smart and easy to do, but her eyes are not good, otherwise I would like to give her to my grandson. What a good child. Mrs. Ji was very generous and suppressed her voice, for fear of hurting Lord Jia's self-esteem. Ding Yujin was inexplicably uncomfortable when he heard this. He even felt that his head was a little green and his voice was a little cold. You are old and your eyesight is also bad. He is wearing a ring. Young people wear rings just for fun. Mrs. Ji doesn't care at all. Ding Yujin was choked. When discussing the next cooperation with Lord Jia, the more Mrs. Ji listened, the more she felt that the child was very clever. She felt that she was discerning. She drank a few cups of tea when she was happy, and soon got up to go to the toilet. Feng Jun helped the old lady out and found a waitress to accompany her by the way. Only Ding Yujin and Luo Zaya were left in the box. A piece of incense was burning quietly, and the blue and white smoke was rising. Lord Jia stood up from her seat and stood in front of Ding Yujin, waiting for the admonition. Ding Yujin looked at her several times before opening her mouth. I knew you opened a tea house outside. I thought you just wanted some income, but I didn't expect you to make tea to entertain guests by yourself. You are pregnant with a baby, but you can't see it. If there is a case, have you thought about the consequences? I just want to be self-reliant. She lowered her eyes and said in a faint and firm voice. If you think the money given by the Bo family is not enough, I will add it to you. Ding Yujin said with a solemn face. It doesn't matter if the young grandmother of the Bo family has a business outside, but you have to welcome guests with a smile and try your best to beg others for cooperation, which will lose the face of the Bo family. She could see that Lord Jia had done Mrs. Ji's homework, and every sentence made people very happy, which was more or less humble. If you don't say it, if I don't say it, no one will know. Lord Jia's complexion remained unchanged. Ding Yujin frowned when she saw that she was stubborn. Can you hide it for the rest of your life? Why not? I can't be the young grandmother of the Bo family for the rest of my life, can I? Lord Jia asked back in a faint tone. Ding Yujin's accident today was an accident, but since he bumped into it, he can only say it. Hearing this, Ding Yujin's face changed. He patted the table lightly and asked coldly, what do you mean? What other thoughts do you have? It's not that I have other thoughts, but that I understand the meaning of the Bo family. Lord Jia slowly raised her eyes. Her eyes were dull, but her expression was calm. She stood there and said word by word. I heard that the Bo family has heavy rules. The new wife will worship the ancestral hall, sacrifice to the ancestors, and announce the wedding in the newspaper, but I didn't. In addition to the Bo family's own people, the wedding guests are your and your grandfather's friends. Most of them can't see clearly. It should be to prevent too much information from leaking and causing unnecessary the tediousness of. Ding Yujin was dumbfounded. As for the wedding, Bo Wang was also held as usual. Lord Jia analyzed slowly, so I think the meaning of this wedding is that when someone asks about my child's origin in the future, there will be it is said that Bo Wang has been married, and someone has witnessed it. The child's name is good. As for who the former bride is, it doesn't matter, it's just a tool. Therefore, everything can be simple. It's not that the Bo family can't afford to hold a grand wedding, but it's just unnecessary. Suddenly, all his thoughts were clearly put on the table. Ding Yujin was embarrassed and even restless. She also pretended to be the elders and asked people to restrain them for the sake of the Bo family's face. As a result, they knew everything. Those eyes were obviously dull, but they could see too clearly. Grandma, I'll leave when the time comes. I won't stay at Bo's house for a second. Lord Jia has a straight spine, and her words are plain and free. It is Lord Jia who opened the tea house. She has nothing to do with the young grandmother of the Bo family. Please complete it. Ding Yujin wanted to say something, but he couldn't say anything. The child has come to this point. If she points out with the posture of the Bo family, it is simply bullying others. Seeing that Ding Yujin didn't say anything, Lord Jia continued, I know that grandma is nervous about the child in my belly. Don't worry, I'm more nervous than anyone else. After all, in case, the Bo family will not let me go, and I still want to live well. In the end, she smiled faintly. Looking at that pair of eyes, Ding Yujin, who had lived for most of his life, felt unreplaced for the first time. Ding Yujin pressed the matter of the fairy jump, and he also knew that it had nothing to do with her, but if you want to say that you have any good impression of her, in fact, you don't. Ding Yujin even felt that the girl from a depressed family would be more greedy for the money and power of the Bo family, and could not give her too much good face. When she gave birth safely, it would be good to give her some money and send her away without making a fuss. I didn't expect her to live so well. She knew everything, but she didn't complain. She didn't want to squeeze any money in the Bo family, and she didn't want to get a position for a big and young milk. She just wanted to open a tea house to be self-reliant and have a life in the future. The tea should be cold. Let me pour you another cup. Lord Jia stepped forward, touched the cup, reached for the teapot, and suddenly his hand was held. Ding Yujin's hands have many lines, but they are very soft and warm. Lord Jia was a little dazed and almost thought it was his grandmother who was holding it up. She lowered her eyes and found that Ding Yujin's eyes were a little red. Didn't you want to get married in the first place? Ding Yujin held her hand tightly and asked. Housekeeper Wen said that she agreed without any hesitation, but now it seems that this is not the case at all. How can a girl who works so hard to become independent be greedy for so much? Chapter 46. Do I look like I have high blood pressure? Lord Jian lowered her eyes and did not answer directly. She only said that I had no choice. If she doesn't get married, what is waiting for her is the thunderous method of the Bo family, forced abortion. Hearing the words, Ding Yuzhen held her tighter, no longer as strict as just now, and said with a little choking that our Bo family wronged you. It's not so wronged. Lord Jia was surrounded by the surroundings. People outside thought that the Bo family had also bought the tea in the Goishi building, so I had a business. If there is no real material, others will not appreciate it. Your tea is really good. Ding Yuzhen looked at her deeply, and the more he looked at her, the more he felt that her eyes were actually not dull, but clear and tough. For a long time, she said again, if you want to be Lord Jia, just do it well. Grandma won't say anything. I didn't expect Ding Yuzhen to be so talkative. Lord Jia was stunned for a while before saying, thank you, Grandma. Seeing that she was so well behaved and sensible, Ding Yuzhen couldn't help saying, in fact, I don't think you have a background, but I know Bo Wang. Before I finished speaking, the mobile phone rang. It's Lord Jia's mobile phone. She took out her mobile phone from her pocket and turned it off directly. Ding Yuzhen continued, I can force him for a while, but I can't force him for a lifetime. The mobile phone rang again. It extremely destroys the atmosphere. Ding Yuzhen said helplessly, you answer the phone first. Sorry. Lord Jia had to take out her mobile phone, glanced at the strange number on it, and then put the mobile phone to her ear. Hello, who is it? Come here. A low and hoarse voice sounded in her ear, lazy and impolite. Lord Jia was stunned for a moment before he realized, Bo Wang? Hearing the words, Ding Yuzhen looked at her in astonishment. There was no more sound on the other end of the phone. Hang up directly. What's the situation? Ro Daya was inexplicably. There was a sound outside the door. It was Mrs. Ji who came back. She bowed her head to Ding Yuzhen. Grandma, I have something to do. I have to go out first. Bo Wang's reputation is so loud that she doesn't want to offend her. Ding Yuzhen didn't keep her. Bo Wang came to you. Go, go. Lord Jia turned around and left, and Ding Yuzhen looked at her back thoughtfully. Lord Jia came out of the tea house and met Jiang Fosheng, who came in a hurry. Jiang Fosheng grabbed her and asked anxiously, Jiaya, the young master suddenly asked me for your mobile phone number, is it okay? It's scary to death. She was cooking in the kitchen. Suddenly, the housekeeper came to her and asked her for her phone number, saying that the young master wanted it. She was so nervous that she packed a lunchbox and came. It's okay. He just asked me to go to him. Lord Jia said, reaching out and pinching her face, caring, sweating, go in for a rest. Are you going now? You haven't had lunch yet. Jiang Fosheng patted the bento box in his arms. The healthy bento I specially learned online is especially suitable for pregnant women. The taxi called is parked aside. There is no time. Let's eat when we come back. Lord Jia opened the door and got on the car. Jiang Fosheng put the lunchbox in along the car window. You can't be hungry now that you are pregnant with a baby. You eat on the road, eat on the road. The driver started the car, and Lord Jia didn't even have a chance to go back. The bento box is wrapped in a silk scarf, which is very delicate and careful. You can feel the heat through it, but Lord Jia is not used to eating in the car. The car was parked in front of Dijiang Court. Lord Jia walked slowly into the community with a lunchbox in one hand and a cane in the other hand. With the card she had taken before, she was unimpeded all the way. The elevator went directly to the top floor of the 44th floor, crossed the garden, and Lord Jia walked into the empty hall, which was cold and unpopular at all. Bo Wang, I'm coming. Are you there? She stopped in the living room and shouted loudly. No one responded. Does he mean here on the phone? Or somewhere else? Or? He finally couldn't stand it to death. Lord Jia was questioning, and Bo Wang's impatient voice came from the empty house, this way. Room. Lord Jia walked to his bedroom with a cane. As soon as he pushed the door, a pungent smell of potion came to his face. Bo Wang was lying on the bed, his hair was messy in the pillow, the quilt was pressed under the grey home pants, and the upper body was not wearing clothes. I don't know if it was because he was lying on his stomach. The exposed dorsiflexion muscles were particularly stretched, and the bulging beautiful lines extended from high to low, smoothly escaped into the waist of the trousers all the way. Lord Jia stood at the door and took a second look before reaching out and knocking on the door. Knock. Is your injury better? Did you see a doctor later? She asked, but she had noticed that the messy gauze on his body was still pasted by her that night. It's been 3 days. He hasn't changed his medicine. Why are you so verbose? Bo Wang got up from the bed irritably, his pale face was full of sleep, and his voice was vague and hoarse. He came to change the medicine for me. Did you ask her to change her medicine for a blind man? Is this the brain of a normal person? Haven't you changed your medicine? She frowned. I'm too lazy to change it. Bo Wang leaned against the head of the bed and closed his eyes sleepily. She saw that he was too lazy to live. Lord Jia had no choice but to put the lunch box at the head of the bed, and then turned out to look for the medical box. When he came back, Bo Wang leaned against the head of the bed and seemed to fall asleep again. She walked over and sat down by the bed, removing the gauze for him. The gauze had formed a bloody scab. She touched the cold skin around the wound. After confirming the recovery of the wound, he tore off the gauze. Sure enough, Bo Wang still didn't even hum. Only a slightly wrinkled brow could show that it really hurt. Without saying a sound, Lord Jia continued to tear the gauze, apply medicine, and then re-stick the gauze in the same way that night. All right. Lord Jia shook her sour hand. As soon as she looked up, Bo Wang had opened her eyes and stared straight at her, with no expression on her face. She turned her face. Haven't you eaten in the past few days? You still have injuries, so you can't stand it. The waist is thin. Can't die. Bo Wang withdrew his gaze and suddenly saw the more things on the bedside table. He reached out to remove the silk scarf and opened it. There was steaming food inside. He looked at her with complicated eyes. Aya on the road is silent. Things are not what you think. Bo Wang shook the silk scarf, and Lord Jia saw that there were still several boxes of medicine in it. Jiang Fusheng also put the conventional medicine she bought for Uncle Feng here. Bo Wang picked up the medicine box and flipped through it. There were cold medicine, antipyretic medicine, rheumatic patch, and... He picked up a box of antihypertensive medicine and looked at her. Do I look like I have high blood pressure? At this point, if you don't admit it, it will add trouble. So Lord Jia said sincerely, isn't it? It doesn't matter if you don't have it. It's all some common medicines. There is no danger if you are prepared. Bo Wang casually threw the medicine box out. My body didn't need to prepare antihypertensive drugs. I touched it back and forth so many times. I touched it for nothing. Chapter 47. I asked you to come here just because I thought you were good. Who has high blood pressure can be figured out. Maybe the muscles will disappear in 2 years, leaving only soaring blood pressure. Lord Ji's Aya was angry, but he was still very obedient on his face. I know. Bo Wang didn't say anything more and reached for the lunchbox. Is he going to eat in bed? Lord Jia doesn't mind him stealing his own food, but eating in bed. It's hard to bear. She was educated not to eat in bed since she was a child. She had a habit of developing obsessive-compulsive disorder, which made her feel uncomfortable when she saw others eating like this, which was as uncomfortable as a thorn on her body. She turned around and secretly told herself that it was okay if she couldn't see it. But her hearing is too sensitive, and the movement of Bo Wang's eating is not big, but it is magnified countless times in her ears. No, I still can't stand it. She stood up and wanted to leave. Bo Wang glared at her. Did I let you go? Lord Jia had to sit back again. A minute later, she couldn't help but reach out to hold his chopsticks, took them out and took them away. She said in a soft tone, don't eat in bed. Bo Wang looked at her unimaginably. Do you care about me? Lord Jia snatched the lunchbox again. Eating in bed affects digestion. Let's eat outside. There is no table outside. His voice began to get colder. He doesn't usually eat, does he? Lord Jia thought for a moment and said in a good voice, go to the terrace in front of you. You have been lying in the room for 3 days, just breathing fresh air, okay? Bo Wang's eyes completely cooled down. The next moment, he smiled sarcastically. Lord Jia, do you really regard yourself as a character? I asked you to come here just because I think you are useful. If you don't want to stay, get out of here. It's just easy to use. Lord Jia is only glad that she doesn't really like him when she hears these 4 words. She curled the corners of her mouth bitterly. There was no resentment at all, and her voice was still as considerate as ever. I'm sorry, I'm just worried about your health. You still have injuries. Don't be angry, which will affect your recovery. If you don't like me to stay here, then I'll go first. You must have a good rest. She stood up with a cane, turned around and walked out. She doesn't want to stay here. Bo Wang sat on the bed with a calm face. As soon as she left, the whole house suddenly became empty, deadly empty. He picked up his chopsticks again and suddenly couldn't put his chopsticks down at the pile of food. Damn it. Bo Wang threw away his chopsticks, got off the bed, and walked out with weak legs. The curtains in the house were closed, and it was dark. Unconsciously, he walked to the south terrace. The noon sun suddenly poured down, shining directly on him strongly and viciously. Bo Wang had not left the room for 3 days, and his eyes were stinging. He stood on the terrace for a long time. Like a rotten corpse living in purgatory, suddenly exposed to the sun, allergic and greedy. After coming out of the Dijiang court, Lord Jia took a bus to the riverside and sat for a while. There are not many pedestrians by the river. Most of them are adults who take their children out for a walk and play. The kites in the children's hands are raised very high by the river wind. Several ships pass slowly on the calm river, turning white waves. She looked up and saw that a plane just flew over the city and flew south. Lord Jia looked after the plane for a long time. She exhaled slowly. When the things here were over, she could go back. Work hard. Lord Jia stood up from the bench and turned away. As soon as the news of the cooperation between the tea house and the Jijia auction house spread, not so many people deliberately came to buy and return the goods, and the business improved significantly. Every penny she earns is a human kindness. Lord Jia became busy, not only in the tea business, but also in the Ji family auction house preparing to put a small auction in the tea house, so she had more to do. Although Mrs. Ji intended to praise her for the face of the Gong family, she did not dare to put the large-scale auction in a small tea house. She only asked her to test the water first. The products launched were some ordinary collectibles. The highest value collection was only about 60,000 or 700,000 yuan, and there was no valuable treasure. For Lord Jia, this starting point is already very high. As long as she does it well, the Ji family will give her the next opportunity, so that she can slowly open the reputation of the tea house and have more and longer-term customers. After the last conversation, Lord Jia found that Ding Yujin began to come to the tea house frequently, not only drinking tea, but also liked to chat with her. On this day, Lord Jia was still working, and Ding Yujin came again. Ding Yujin made a mute gesture to Feng Jin and others, indicating that he didn't have to tell Lord Jia. When Lord Jia saw it, she had to pretend not to see it, and continued to talk to Feng Jin and Jiang Fusheng. We need to screen the information background of the security company personnel twice more. In the huge hall, Lord Jia stepped on the newly set up auction platform. In addition, I am still not satisfied with the anti-theft facilities given at present. I want a better plan. Feng Jun frowned on the side, and if he upgraded again, he would exceed the budget. Such a small auction doesn't need such a good security and anti-theft, upgrade, decoration and equipment, and manpower, all of which is money. I don't plan to make money this time. Lord Jia said, what I want is to complete it successfully, not to complete it reluctantly. No one will like a partner who can barely complete the task. Ding Yujin sat in front of the 8 Immortals table by the window and quietly watched Lord Jia busy inside and outside. Even if she couldn't see it, she still arranged things in an orderly manner. When she was done, Ding Yujin called her over and poured tea for her in person. Seeing that you have been busy for a long time, you haven't even sat down. Aren't you tired? It's rare for Mrs. Ji to appreciate it. I can't mess things up. Lord Jia sat down with a smile, picked up the teacup and took a sip, and then apologized. Why didn't you call me earlier when you came? I don't want to disturb you. Ding Yujin reached out and patted her arm. Lovingly, by the way, Dr. Chin just showed me your latest pregnancy test report. He said that you have anemia. How have you been recently? Do you have any symptoms of dizziness and weakness? Fortunately, it doesn't affect normal life. Lord Jia answered. Do what you do, and you must worry about your health. Ding Yujin said with concern. I got it. Thank you, Grandma. Lord Jia held the teacup and continued to drink. Ding Yujin liked her transparent and obedient appearance too much. He smiled and said, one more thing, you have to spare time tomorrow. Bo Wang's father will come back tomorrow and come back for dinner with Bo Wang in the evening. Lord Jia was stunned. What does this mean? Do you want me to inform Bo Wang? You are husband and wife. Of course, you will inform. Ding Yujin said with a smile. Lord Jia doubted whether Ding Yujin had a bad memory. Last time, she clearly said that she would leave and would not rely on the Bo family. Why did she be a husband and wife again? She thought for a moment and said truthfully, Grandma, I don't know Bo Wang very well, and I can't call him. Chapter 48. Do you like her? Why is it more like exploring her? Not only was she unfamiliar with her, but she was kicked out by him last time. Hearing the words, Ding Yujin said with a smile, don't you have his phone number? Have a try. Lord Jia couldn't figure out what Ding Yujin was thinking. Did she want to test whether what she said before was true? She was afraid that she would say a set and secretly wanted to hook up with the young master of the Bo family who often relied on the Bo family. She took out the phone and called out the name of the saved number by voice. Afraid that Ding Yujin was worried, Lord Jia's hand touched and pressed the hands-free on the screen, and then put the mobile phone on the desktop. Just try it. Last time Bo Wang kicked her out of the door, it was impossible to answer her phone. A sound. 2 sounds. Ding Yujin smiled kindly. Lord Jia smiled calmly. 3 sounds. 4 sounds. It's about to hang up automatically. Lord Jia touched her mobile phone and was about to put it away. A low voice suddenly sounded on the desktop. What are you doing? His voice was very low, as if he was a little impatient, and it didn't seem to be. Lord Jia was dumbfounded. Did she pick up without saving her number? She smiled and said softly, I'm Lord Jia. When your father comes back tomorrow, Grandma asked me to ask you to go back to Shenzhen for dinner together. When the words fell, there was a moment of silence in the mobile phone, and then a clear sound of metal collision sounded, as if it was playing with the lighter. After a long time, Bo Wang's lazy voice came. Let's talk about tomorrow. Today's meal will be delivered to me. After saying that, he hung up the phone directly. Lord Jia faced Ding Yujin speechlessly. God can tell that she didn't deliver food to him every day. She really didn't. One Ding Yujin laughed so much that his eyes were bent into a thin crescent moon. Without waiting for her explanation, he stood up and patted her hand. Okay, you go to him for dinner. I'll go back first. Remember to come back together tomorrow night. I'll wait for you. Grandma is gone. Ding Yujin walked quite fast and walked out of the gate in the blink of an eye. Lord Jia didn't even have time to explain. In the small kitchen of the tea house, Jiang Forsheng was stir-frying vegetables and turned the pot upside down, like a chef. Lu Jia opened a strawberry-flavored lollipop and put it in her mouth, and then stood aside and watched the flying fire. In the past, pretending to be blind was not to cause unnecessary trouble, and it was easier to see through the people around her. But now, the old lady comes every now and then to see through her lying sooner or later. At that time, the situation will be difficult to get through. Maybe she should find an opportunity to recover her eyesight. The old lady, Bo Wang, tomorrow night's family banquet. It's a little annoying. She just wants to run the tea house well, and then check where the Lu family has flowed out, and she doesn't want to pay attention to these at all. Lu Jia withdrew her thoughts and saw Jiang Forsheng biting the sugar and flipping the pot happily. He turned it upside down and laughing again, laughing a little. Why are you so happy today? Lu Jia couldn't help asking. Jiang Forsheng seemed to be afraid that she would not ask. When he heard this, his eyes lit up. He turned off the fire and took the lollipop. Today, I met the male god of my school days. Today? Didn't you stay in the tea house all the time today? Where did you meet the male god? It's the captain of the security company. You also met today, Li Minghuai. Jiang Forsheng blushed when he said this name, and his peach powder fluttered. I didn't expect that he was still so handsome after so many years. Lu Jia did meet the people of the security company today, but she didn't have a deep impression. She just needs their background to be clean. He was so cold when he was in school. Unexpectedly, he became talkative now and talked to me a lot. He said that he was still single. Jiang Forsheng was happy when he thought of it. After a while, his face changed again and said sullenly, but I think he seems to like you. Huh. Lu Jia ate the melon on his head and was stunned for a moment. She didn't say a word to that man. Really, he also asked me if you were married wearing a ring. Why didn't your husband come to help you? Jiang said sullenly, and asked me if there were many people of the opposite sex around you, asked me what you did in the tea house, and asked me what we usually talk about. Do you like her? Why is it more like exploring her? Lu Jia frowned slightly, so how did you answer? Jiang Forsheng took a bite of the lollipop fiercely and said, how witty I am. I directly cut off his mind. I said that you are married, and you have been just like your husband. I love him so much that I can't bear to help him at all. For him, I usually don't want to talk to the opposite sex. When I don't do anything, I just think about my husband. I just talk about my husband when chatting. Aya on the road is silent. Let's do it. After Jiang Forsheng finished speaking, he looked at her with some eyes. Ji Aya, you don't like Li Minghuai, do you? Lu Jia knocked on her head with a smile. You know my mind is not on this kind of thing at all. Hurry up and cook. I still have to send it to Di Jiangting. I don't know which evil wind Bo Wang smoked. The sun shines into the forest by the river, the shadows of the trees are ringling, and the light spots fall on the ground. A man with a bloody head limped forward and looked back in panic from time to time, as if some deadly ghost was chasing him. An orange sports car parked on the edge of the forest. Bo Wang leaned on the tree beside him with Guangxu on his back, holding his mobile phone and talking on the phone. He bit a cigarette carelessly in his mouth, and his slightly pale face still had 2 wounds. A scream came from the forest. Bo Wang turned his head and took a look, put away his mobile phone. After a while, Li Minghuai, wearing a hat, came out of the forest with a bloody man and threw him to the ground like a dead pig. He said coldly, how dare he run? The man curled up with his head and shouted hoarsely. He didn't dare, I didn't dare. I didn't dare to monitor Bo anymore. I said everything, and I explained everything. Hearing the words, Bo Wang squeezed the cigarette and took it down. He lowered his eyes and glared at him with a smile. I don't want your 2 words of explanation. There were more people watching him, so he didn't feel annoyed, so he asked them one by one. The man was even more frightened and trembled when he heard these words. What do you want me to do? I do everything, I do everything. What can a scumbag like you do to our brother Wei? Li Minghuai sneered at it, and raising his legs was a kick. There is no requirement to take him out. It's purely that Brother Wang is too idle to recuperate at home. He wants to find a black-haired person to come out and relax his tendons and bones. Among the people around him who watch over Brother Wang, he is the closest to him, and he won't beat him. The man was kicked to the ground and shivered. His face was pale, his eyes tightened, and he almost turned his back in one breath. Bo Wang lowered his eyes and admired the man's painful appearance. After a long time, he said slowly, it was also a life. Don't overdo it. Yes. Li Minghuai got used to the thin Buddha's mouth of the king of hell, and kicked a few more kicks before handing out a roll of information that was not on his waist. Brother Wang, you just answered the phone, but you haven't finished reading the stuff. Do you still want to read chapter 49 impatiently waiting? Do you want to leave? Bo Wang took it and was about to look at it, but the man thought that Bo Wang was really talking to himself just now. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Bo Shao, please let me go. I won't dare anymore. I promise I won't come to spy on you again. Please let me go with your compassion. Please, please, please. I really don't dare anymore. With that, the man moved his knees and wanted to hold his thin legs. It's so verbose. Bo Wang frowned impatiently, raised his legs and stepped on it. It was fierce and heavy. The man didn't hold on and spit out a mouthful of old blood directly. He fainted on the ground and couldn't even shout. Li Minghui is not surprised. Only then did Bo Wang throw away the cigarette, opened the information and continued to read. His eyes were deep, and there was no expression on his face. Li Minghui stood aside and carefully observed Bo Wang's expression. He didn't know why Bo Wang suddenly conducted a comprehensive investigation into this birth tool, but he still said 51. My son checked it carefully. Before his sister-in-law, no, the eldest and young grandmother married into the Bo family, she stayed in the Feng family's house for 5 years and hardly went out much. Her interpersonal relationships were blank. It was impossible. She was bribed by others. Bo Wang turned over the information in his hand, did not interrupt him, and asked him to continue. The day after the eldest grandmother married into the Bo family, she had a grudge with Xiao Meijing. Yu Yunfei didn't have time to attract her, so she ran to stage a husband fight with Xiao Meijing, and never came back. Li Minghui said, so far, the eldest young grandmother is clean and there is no power behind her. You don't have to worry about whose eyes she is. That is, so far. Bo Wang turned over the information and said that the essence of human beings is to be changeable. I also went to see my old classmate, Jiang Foshan. She is a simple person. In addition, she doesn't know that I was specially sent by you to inquire. In her eyes, I am an outsider, so she will not defend me, and what she says is very helpful. Li Minghui reported, and Bo Wang just turned to the content of the conversation between him and Jiang Foshan. Li Minghui, since she has a husband, why don't she let her husband take care of her and work hard to do things? Jiang Foshan, you don't know that Jia likes her husband too much. She comes out to make money just to buy gifts for her husband with her own money and to make her husband happy. She is a proper love brain, and no one can see in her eyes except her husband. Bo Wang looked at this line of words and looked down at the Buddha bead bracelet on his wrist, and his eyes became more and more gloomy. He turned around and looked at Lord Jia's flow of money. In addition to the basic operation of the tea house and some broken expenses, the only big deal was the 1 million yuan to buy the best Qing'an incense bracelet. Other than that, she didn't even buy her own clothes. Bo Wang looked at it and suddenly raised his eyes to Li Minghui. His eyes were cold and sinister. If there is something wrong with this information, you don't have to come to see me alive. I guarantee that's right, Brother Wang. Li Minghui couldn't help standing up straight, and a layer of sweat on the back of his neck. Bang Bo Wang pressed the information on him and continued to monitor. Li Minghui held the information and was a little puzzled. Is he still monitoring? What are you monitoring? Of course, it is to monitor when she betrays me. Bo Wang sneered. Li Minghui is very inexplicable. Brother Wang never makes things too complicated. He always does things as he pleases. In the past few years, the forces of the Bo family have been targeting him. He is too lazy to pay attention to the gun and will not fight back. But when he is interested, he doesn't care whether the other party is innocent or not, and it's right to beat him. Therefore, he didn't quite understand Bo Wang's handling of Lu Jia. If he suspected that there was something wrong with the young grandmother, he could deal with it directly. Why bother to monitor it? Do you want to be betrayed or not to betrayed by others? Bo Wang turned around to open the door. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something. He looked back at the man who fell to the ground and took the Buddha beads on his hand. If you are too heavy, it is easy to kill. Hurry up and send him to the hospital. Hearing the order, Li Minghui immediately stood up straight. Yes, I immediately threw him into the Qingjian River to feed the fish. Bo Wang looked at him like an idiot and said coldly, if your ears are useless, I will cut them off for you. After saying that, he got on the car and left. Li Minghui stood there and everyone was dumbfounded. What do you mean? Are you really sending me to the hospital? Lord Jia came out of the building of Dijianting, and she was really not in a good mood. This Bo Wang asked her to deliver food, but she was not at home at all, and she didn't answer 2 phone calls. I don't know if it was intentional to play with her, and I don't know if there will be another time. It's just to tell him not to eat in bed, what about it? Lord Jia walked forward and suddenly saw a coquettish orange convertible sports car parked not far away. Bo Wang was sitting in the driver's seat and staring at her, biting her sunglasses leg in her mouth. Her whole body was lazy, and the scars on the corners of her forehead were obvious. Lord Jia was shocked and almost closed her legs moving forward. Fortunately, she always engraved the word blind in her mind, so that her legs could continue to move forward. She pointed the way with a blind stick and walked slowly from the blind alley. Bo Wang got off the car, leaned against the car door and watched her come this way. His shirt was blown wide by the wind. He didn't make a sound, but just looked at her. The eyes seemed to penetrate her body. Lord Jia stepped on the blind alley and passed by him. The blind stick knocked on the ground, and the tip of his nose smelled the faint woody fragrance on his body. When she was thinking about whether to stop as a blind person, the man's arm suddenly crossed in front of her, holding one of her shoulders and leading her back. Lord Jia's breath was stagnant, and she was led to stagger back, retreating straight into his arms and close to his chest. She grabbed his sleeve with her hand. Bo Wang? Bo Wang lowered his eyes and glared at her small, white and tender earlobe. His eyes were gloomy. How did he know? Smell it out. Lord Jia smelled it again. Why did you smell bloody again? Are you hurt again? This woman remembers all the smell on him. Bo Wang glared at a blood stain on his shirt, which was someone else's. Lord Jia didn't ask. Bo Wang imprisoned her from behind, and her thin lips were almost pressed against her ears. Her magnetic voice did not distinguish between joy and anger. She was impatient and waited. Do you want to leave? No, I'm afraid you don't like me staying at your house. She said softly, looking soft and smooth, and I put the lunch box on the island table for you. So obedient? Bo Wang hooked his lips playfully. I don't want you to be unhappy, she said and gently pulled down his sleeve to let go of him. Bo Wang strangled her tighter, didn't he? Then let's go. Okay. Lord Jia responded and raised her feet to leave, but was strangled back by him. Then, she was brought back to the house on the top floor by Bo Wang. Bo Wang pulled out the chair with his foot, sat directly in front of the island platform and began to eat. Lord Jia stood quietly aside. Bo Wang also ignored her. He held his mobile phone in one hand and ate with chopsticks in the other. It would not be ugly to eat with such a face. Chapter 50 I'm afraid of loneliness when I walk alone. Will you accompany me? But why does he have to bring her back when he eats? Lord Jia wanted to find an excuse to leave. Suddenly, she heard him laugh sarcastically. He is playing a news video. The Boz Consortium has just issued an announcement and officially won the golden plot of land on Naoyang Road, Fengling District. Previously, even major legislators participated in the noisy landstorm finally came to an end. The Bo Consortium said that it was about to establish a new economic circle here and change the inherent pattern of Fengling District. Naoyang Road, isn't it the place mentioned on the phone before that someone asked him to solve the problem? The Bo family's wealth is powerful and is already the first in country K, but the economy of Fengling District is firmly controlled by several other consortia. The power of the Bo family does not dominate in this region and has not been able to intervene. On the night of Bo Wang's birthday, he came back with a wound, and then the Boz Consortium changed the inherent pattern of Fengling District. The competition between large families and large consortia is not all open, and sometimes the secret means are dirtier than each other. Lord Jia suddenly realized something and looked at Bo Wang in disbelief. Are all the dirty things behind the Bo family done by Bo Wang? If so, then everything makes sense. Although Bo Wang is the grandson of Bo's family, he acts absurdly and cruelly, and there are medical reports of mental illness. Everyone knows that he cannot become the heir of the Bo family. As usual, it is impossible for such a young master Bo family to not only ignore the order, but also attach importance to so many lawyers, and there is no need for everyone in Jiangbei City to hate him like a ghost or a god. Unless Bo Wang is such a character. The Bo family needs his cruelty, so they hold him no matter what he does. In Jiangbei City, some people are afraid of his identity, and some people are afraid of his secret means, which is definitely dirtier and more poisonous than stepping on people's faces at the Gong family banquet. Otherwise, several consortiums cannot give up Fengling District so easily. It is also because of this that the old lady Ding Yujin feels guilty for Bo Wang, the eldest grandson. After all, she is her own grandson. If one day she can't control it completely, the Bo family will be okay. Only Bo Wang will be pushed out. Lord Jia found that he couldn't think about it carefully. When he thought about it carefully, his body was chilly. She was born and grew up in the Law family. The family is harmonious, and there is no such thing as pushing her own son and grandson out to do dirty things. What about him? Is he also willing to do this for the Bo family? Only by doing it can we continue to enjoy squandering. Pop Bo Wang casually threw his mobile phone on the island platform and bowed his head to eat, not even letting go of the simply decorated carrots. Lord Jia pursed her lips. Although this kind of thing is what others want, she still feels uncomfortable. Tomorrow night's family banquet, if you don't want to go back, don't go back, I told Grandma. She heard her voice ringing in the quiet house. Hearing the words, Bo Wang's back suddenly stiffened. He glanced at his mobile phone that was still playing the news and turned his head to look at her. His face was not very good looking, and his eyes were sharp to gloomy. What do you know? This reaction. It seems that what she guessed is true. What do you know? She pretended to be at a loss. You still have wounds on your body, and there will definitely not be too few family banquets. It's too tiring to socialize with wounds. Bo Wang stared at her gloomily, as if to verify the truth of her words. Lord Jia found that he was not easy to trust people. In just a few contacts, no matter what she said, his eyes were questioning. However, she is indeed vain, and the more empty she is, the more she dares not show her flaws. For a long time, Bo Wang put down his chopsticks and picked out a chair from the island platform to let her sit down. The next second, he stretched out his hands to hold her face, and gently rubbed her delicate skin with warm fingers. His voice was gentle and pleasant. Do you care about me so much? It's better to die with me. Where is this? Lord Jia couldn't help frowning. In exchange, Bo Wang's eyes were cold, and his fingers pressed hard on her face until she was in pain, and her voice suddenly cold. Why, unwilling? I don't want to. I want to live, she said seriously. Bo Wang smiled in a low voice and looked at her as if he was looking at a hypocritical fox. So he still said he liked me? She asked softly, is it good to be alive? Bo Wang hooked the chair she was sitting on and made her almost stick to her. He asked, what's the good about being alive? There are sunrises and sunsets, mountains and rivers, and everything grows, she said. Bo Wang smiled in a low voice again, and your blind eyes, your dead whole family, your classmates' high trampling, and the fetus you can't beat, Lu Jia, in the past 5 years, can you tell whether this is the world or hell? The house was too empty and quiet. His low voice was like a thin blade, cutting her skin painlessly, and then holding her heart silently, which made her want to shrink. Lu Jia was in a trance, and the fire 5 years ago appeared in front of her again, and the burning leaves flew in front of her eyes. After a while, she came to her senses. His words are also too depressing. Bo Wan is intimate. He rubbed her face, his fingertips went downstream along her face, touched the pulse on her neck, and continued to deceive and said, in fact, it's not so difficult to die. It's much simpler than half dead. Burning charcoal, hanging, jumping into the river. Or, just cut a mouth here, it won't hurt for a long and everything will be over. He looked so serious that Lu Jia felt that he would really do it in the next second. Her breathing almost stopped. How about it? Think about it, I'm afraid of loneliness when I walk alone. Will you accompany me? Bo Wan stared deeply into her eyes, raised his eyebrows, and his slender fingers tightened her neck instead. Lu Jia only felt a chill all over her body. She exhaled with difficulty and said word by word, no, whether it is on earth or hell, I want to have a place here. Why? Because of the family members who have left, because only she is carrying those deep memories. She is afraid that she will not leave the world to reunite, but to completely make these precious fragments of existence disappear. So she wants to live. Lu Jia grabbed his hand, holding his neck tightly, and his words changed. Because I didn't want to die for the past 5 years, I met you. With this point, I think it's good to be alive. This answer was obviously unexpected to him. His movement stopped, and he looked at her even dull like a child. When you meet him, do you feel good to be alive? There was a sign of loosening his hand. Lu Jia took his hand off his neck, held it gently, and gently reversed the deception. Bo Wang, I don't know how many things you have experienced after drawing that Chusheng to make your mentality become like this, but that's all in the past. If you think the past is too painful, then what you want to cut off is the past, and not in the future.